Times go on as usual and the world will never be the same again. The reason lies not in global catastrophes, but in the demons that have awakened recently. Demons began to appear more and more often. The reason for such sudden appearances was a dark tower. Among people it was nicknamed the Devil's Tower. The tower serves as a kind of portal between the demon world and the human world, and it also serves as a source of power for them. The tower's name comes from the fact that its conquest will bring its conqueror untold wealth and power. Having passed all 999 levels of the tower, you will gain power, money, strength, and everything you desire. But there is one thing. The tower is controlled by gods and demons, who are not happy with uninvited guests. The authorities of many countries tried to protect their people from attempts to conquer and subdue the tower. But these efforts only encourage people to conquer the tower again and again. For 5 years of the tower's existence, people were unable to conquer it. The reason for this was the gods and demons who destroyed everyone who tried to conquer it. But then one day, a man appeared who decided to challenge the tower and conquer the 600th level, and apparently, no one could stop him. On the way between the tower and the man, 9 chosen ones from the human race appeared, who decided to prevent the stranger from conquering the tower. Their name was the Star 9. Thanks to magic and deity, they received immeasurable power, which they decided to turn against the stranger in order to stop him. The stranger decided to use the Death Star spell, which could lead to the death of the 9. And although the stranger does not have strong magic and is not one of the Star 9, he has become the strongest magician among people. His name is Chajin Hyuk. Having sided with evil, he is more like one of the demons than people. Having the power of destruction, he is the messenger of death. By summoning armies of the dead, he can undoubtedly call himself a divine necromancer. With an army of undead at his command, Hyuk only needs more power to conquer the tower, and no one and nothing can stop him. The force that can stop Hyuk from conquering the tower and dealing with his undead is the Star 9. For betraying the entire human race and themselves, Chajin was given the death sentence. Hyuk only now began to understand that he could not cope with the group members alone. The 9 decided to end Chajin once and for all, namely by killing him. By attacking Jin with all their forces at once, the 9 destroyed him in the tower world. Hek was considered a traitor to humanity, although this was only a legend, and in fact he was the one betrayed. Having received wounds, Hek vowed to return at all costs and get even with the 9 and finish them off once and for all. He will return again and prove to everyone that he is the most powerful of men, destined to conquer the Devil's Tower. You will need to repass the tower's levels to fight the demons and deities that control it. Chajin woke up in bed at home, not immediately realizing where he was, and continued to threaten to take revenge on the Star 9. Waking up and throwing off the blanket, Hyuk quickly looked around and began to realize that he was no longer in the tower, and this body was not the one that was there. Jin wondered if the secret skill of moving between places of battle and rest had worked. It turns out that Hyuk has long had the skill of moving souls from one body to another, which allows him to remain alive even if the body is physically killed. As Hyuk thought, he was still in South Korea, and the skill allowed him to master a new body with similar characteristics. A strange feeling came over him. He began to think that if he were alone, he would have passed the 600th level alone. The Star 9 offered to help, but he did not foresee the option of betrayal, and received a strong blow in the back for this. The cause of death was the paladins Kane and Carmen Pellin, who controlled all the members of the group. Carmen was flattering and wished only death on the Death Star, even though it helped them reach their level. Whatever the case, all they needed was a resounding victory and to find someone to blame for all the team's failures. What played into their hands was the fact that among the group members was Hyuk's friend. His name was Choi Kyung-hoon. If they had called him to clear out the 600th level, the chances of finishing off Hyuk would have been too small, but everything was going according to their plan. Together, they could have stood up to the impudent bunch of people who thought they were something above human solidarity. Having calculated once, Hyuk gave his word to return and take revenge on them all at any cost. Having lost too much blood and received many wounds from enemy attacks, Jin only repeated that this was not the end of his meeting. After losing consciousness, the skill worked, and Hyuk was transferred to a new body, since the old one was already lifeless. Feeling the acute pain, Hyuk found the strength to complete the transfer of souls. I'll have to turn them into my monsters so they know how to betray the strongest of them. Chajin's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his phone, and he was distracted from his thoughts to see what was there. A strange feeling came over him when he took the phone in his hand. Apparently, it had been a long time since he had held anything like this. But when he looked at the phone screen, Hyuk was quite surprised by what he saw. The date on the phone was May 13th, 2023, which meant that 10 years had passed since the meeting with the 9. A moment passed since that moment, but it turned out that 10 years had already passed. Strange. Apparently the new ability is to blame. But what kind of ability is this? And can I use it outside the tower? Looking back, Hyuk saw a fly that was disturbing his rest and decided to try his ability on it. In an instant, the fly fell dead onto Jin's palm. but what to do with it next was unclear. Hyuk decided to test the skill by summoning a Necromancer, but the fly remained motionless. Multiple attempts yielded no results, which made Hyuk very angry. Despite his cries, only the phone responded to its owner's voice requests. But the fly was dead and showed no signs of life. Having come to terms with the fact that his body didn't have a single gram of mana, Jin began to think about the fact that he would have to conquer the tower without abilities. 10 years have passed, and it would be worth checking how things are going with the Star Nine, because a lot of time has passed. Looking at the newsfeed, Jin discovered that the vaunted Nine had only managed to master 200 levels since their last meeting. Without wasting any time, Hyuk decided to go to the tower for training. Without her, training was pointless. And although Cha understood that the body was not what it was, the skills of the Death Star remained with him. The tower was located in Seoul, and it was not difficult for Cha to find it in order to quickly become the strongest and avenge his death. There were many newcomers at the foot of the mountain, so no one paid attention to Hyuk, who didn't particularly stand out from the crowd. The newcomers simply dreamed of becoming stronger and richer. But Cha-jin was only worried about the place of so many mysteries and stories, which was nicknamed the Tower. After completing all the levels of the tower, Hyuk might get everything he wanted, but he still had to train on the first level. As expected, there was a tomb of the envoy for class change at the entrance, but it was only available after level 10, so no one paid attention to it. There was a lot of work to be done, so there was no point in delaying. Hyuk looked forward to the reward for his efforts, when he would conquer all the levels of the tower and how everyone would envy him. It would also be worth thinking about his reputation, which would play into Cha-jin's hands. This thought did not leave his head. And then a sound was heard that informed the newcomers that the entrance to the tower was open and they could begin training. There was no point in retreating and it was necessary to move forward towards his goal, which is what Cha-jin did. Well, there was hard work ahead on the path of revenge for the Star Nine. The gate welcomed Cha-jin as the new conqueror of the tower. 5 years passed, no, apparently 15 years passed, to come here again and begin his path of revenge for this pathetic group of arrogant people. A training area opened up before the conqueror's eyes, which meant that it was time to start training and gaining skills to conquer the tower. And although it was unpleasant to find myself here again, all conquerors must undergo training to get to the first floor. Before starting, Hyuk decided to check his characteristics and skills, and only then begin training. The characteristics, to put it mildly, upset Hyuk, but the gluttony feature really interested him, although he did not understand what it would give him. Jin reasoned that this feature was assigned to him along with the body, the characteristics of which differed greatly from his previous ones. Since he has such characteristics with his new body, it is worth immediately increasing them, and at the same time checking the new features. The training began, and the first thing that flew at Hyuk was a magic arrow spell. But it was easy for him to block it, since thanks to his star skill, he saw the arrows before they flew at him. There were more and more arrows and it became more difficult to repel their attack. It was becoming more and more difficult to dodge them, which worried Cha-jin a little. A little more and he will cope, but numerous arrows pierced his body and left bleeding wounds on his body. As soon as he reached the starting point, Hyuk was losing strength, but he held on because of his zeal for revenge. The training system took his body into account and healed him so he could continue training. It was necessary to continue training at all costs and achieve the conquest of the tower floors. But running thoughtlessly made no sense, and Cha-jin decided to change his training tactics. And he decided to try gluttony on the blood lost by his body, to see what would come of it. This feature is good because with its help, you can absorb everything dead and appropriate it, or absorb it into your body. By using the gluttony spell, Hyuk will gain experience and achievement points. Using the spell slightly increased the characteristics, which means that you can pump them up without digging too much into the settings. Even if the training lasts for a week, Hyuk still needs to improve his characteristics, but by using the gluttony spell. As he continued training, he took more and more arrows into his body in order to gain a better chance of leveling up through the spilled blood. A month has passed, and it is worth looking at the characteristics. Maybe they have already been increased. The gate opened, meaning that the training was over, which Hyuk was glad about. The wounds were healed, and the long-awaited notification appeared that the training was over. There was also a notice that some gods and demons were interested in him. Only they were missing. Hyuk didn't need them. He didn't need extra eyes. Now it is clear who is looking after him. It was Baal, the ruler of evil. But what did he want from Hyuk? Once again, this demon is pursuing Hyuk in order to get him as his apostle or disciple. Still, he was useful, because it was Baal who gave the ability to move souls. Hyuk's thoughts interested the demon, and he closely watches the actions of his future student. Besides Baal, other demons also began to look closely at Cha-jin, and this infuriated him. By offering to watch the further development of the raid in the tower, Hyoku managed to silence the demons that were making his head spin. Baal was upset with Jin, but he didn't pay much attention to it and continued looking at the characteristics. It's time to take a look at the reward for training, because Hyuk's blood was not shed in vain. Well, the characteristics have been increased, but this increase cost a lot of effort. Since I managed to increase my mana during training, it would be worth pumping it further to conquer the floors above. Thanks to the training he had completed, Hyuk had discovered a new feature. But here was what it was that he had yet to find out. A strange feeling came over him, and he began to gradually feel his old body. The peculiarity turned out to be multifaceted, but Cha-Jin did not yet understand what to do with it. Versatility provided an increase in characteristics and adjusted attacks and defenses during combat. This feature could later give a good title on par with demons and gods. The evil lord became curious about Hyuk's statistics. But why would he need them? Hyuk offered the evil lord to go with him, which interested the demon. Baal responded happily to the invitation to go with Cha, but asked if he could go with him, or if it was a joke. There was a room ahead that could be the site of the next training session. As expected, the room really turned out to be a place for training, but much more difficult than the previous one. In this room, the Conqueror was already offered to use weapons to repel attacks. Be that as it may, Hyuk preferred magic over weapons. It was also worth remembering about repelling multiple attacks with the help of magic arrows, and a bow will help with this. It was time to get started, and Hyuk ordered to generate targets to begin the training. Thanks to his multifaceted nature, he was no longer afraid of these targets and multiple attacks. It was time to test this feature in action. The first wave was repelled, but this was not enough, and the system began to generate new targets, but stronger than the previous ones. The system sent a notification about the class selection, but Cha didn't pay attention, and continued to hit target after target. The targets became more numerous and stronger, but it was in vain. The targets attacked Jin, but he calmly fought them off with his skill. Hitting targets with his bow and steel sword, Hyuk demanded more and stronger opponents from the system. He dealt blow after blow to the targets, and they fell defeated to the floor of the room, with no chance to resist the Conqueror. In close combat, the targets had no chance of hitting Jin, and he understood it. Deciding to use a long-range attack, which turned out to be effective, the system generated the strongest targets at this level. But even they were helpless against Hyuk. Well, regular weapons weren't that exciting, and Cha decided to take up magic at all costs. Using an ancient magic staff as his weapon, he easily dealt with the rest of the targets. By using the magic arrow spell with magic, the targets were hit long before they could get close to Hyuk. The feature turned out to be a pretty good thing, but was all the power applied? The training is over, and the Conqueror has received a new achievement. Now he could wield any weapon and at the same time become omnipotent. The system offered to choose a multi-class, but the Conqueror had other plans. Then Hyuk tried to select this multi-class as a subclass, but the system refused him. Unfortunately, subclasses can only be selected after the 100th floor, but Cha-Jin decided to do otherwise. He then decided to use achievement points to unlock a subclass. The system was surprised by such a question from a newbie, and offered him to choose points as a reward for exchanging achievement points. No matter where Hyuk found out about this, he immediately demanded to exchange 5,000 points to open a subclass. The system considered his proposal, but opening the subclass required 5,050 points. Well, Hyuk will have to turn to Baal for extra points. By asking Baal to reveal his identity, Hyuk received an achievement and extra points. The achievement was earned, and thanks to the points he was able to unlock the subclasses after all. The training was over, and the system began to move Gina to the first floor of the tower to begin the conquest. The moment of truth has arrived. Namely, the time has come to begin the path of revenge against the Star Nine. And the system chose the Corolla Forest as its first place of movement. The place was a favorite habitat of kobolds. The kobolds, seeing the group of newcomers, immediately rushed into battle, thereby throwing the humans into a stupor. But then Hyuk appeared from the opened portal and immediately rushed at the attackers. As expected, Cha-Jin easily killed the kobolds. The newly arriving kobolds immediately went on the attack, not realizing that they were doomed. Hyuk was interested to know what their souls would give him and what he would get for them. With one blow, the kobold was defeated, which delighted the newcomers nearby. They couldn't believe that a newbie could attack like that, and on such a small floor of the tower. Most likely, the power lay in his staff. But no one could believe that it was possible to strike attackers so quickly and with lightning speed. One of the newbies suggested that they continue together, admiring Hyuk's powerful attack. But it was all in vain. Hyuk had already trusted the group once and paid dearly for it, so he asked not to interfere with him. He ordered none of the newcomers to touch the kobolds, otherwise they would become his target. The newcomers did not bother to show up and decided to quickly move away from the strange conqueror of the tower. You never know what else he might come up with. Left alone with the kobolds, Cha-Jin immediately began to attack them again and again. The kobolds were eager to avenge their comrade and prepared to attack Hyuk, thinking they could defeat him. In an instant, these two kobolds flew away from him like a ball from a wall. They were unequal opponents to him. With a lightning-fast attack, Hyuk put an end to another of the kobolds, surprising the remaining one. The kobolds' zeal and desire to attack the stranger vanished somewhere. No one moved from their place. They quickly decided to get away from the enemy, but Hyuk had other plans. Taking the staff, he shot a magic arrow at the fleeing kobold and he fell unconscious. Another arrow pierced the fleeing man, and he gave up his spirit and he could do nothing more. To complete the quest, it was necessary to kill 10 kobolds, but Cha-Jin was ready to exterminate them all, even 10, even their entire family. And then the thought struck him. What if he killed a lot of kobolds and got the achievement Monster Slayer? The idea was not bad, but something had to be done with the bodies of the dead, and the conquest continued. Well, it's time to test gluttony on what were once living beings. While absorbing the kobold's soul, Hyuk suddenly had a vision of the murdered man's past life in his head. In addition, by luring the power into his body, he began to understand the language of the kobolds, which would be useful to him in the future to obtain the title of fighter. It was time to look at the specifications, and Hyuk immediately started checking them. He was quite surprised. The characteristics have increased significantly, and have become so significant that you can easily conquer the 10th floor. Also, in particular, his class began to be adjusted along with the past test. Memories, they did not give the tower conqueror any peace, and sometimes even bothered him. He saw people who were caught by kobolds and tried to turn them into their prey. And what did that mean? And here appeared an old man with a staff. Apparently it was the Lord of the Kobolds. That's who Cha-Jin needed. The Kobold Lord can attack with a monstrous wave, and this can be used to level up quite well, which couldn't help but please Hyuk. He couldn't confront the monsters alone and decided to summon his monsters. He had no choice but to summon the kobolds he had just defeated to fight the new monsters. The slain kobolds rose before him as if they had served him for 1,000 years. Now, with the summoning magic, Hyoku was assigned the Necromancer class, which was to his advantage, but something told him that on the first floor, he would be able to change classes to a more suitable one. Hyuk's attention was distracted by a kobold looking away, which could not interest its owner. There was a reason, and it was hidden among the trees of the forest. There were Cha-Jin's next victims, the kobolds. Well, it's time to try out your soldiers on these poor guys. Not a moment passed, and all the kobolds from the attackers turned into soldiers of the conqueror. And then, among the trees, he noticed a place where he had once been. It was a small house where Hyuk had already been more than once in his past life. Fortunately, no one came here and everything was as it was 15 years ago. The curious soldiers were there too, but they bothered him and he ordered them to wait outside. Having struck the center of the floor, he broke through it, opening a descent downwards, which led into another room. The descent led to the shortest route to the first floor, where one could change classes. And now before his eyes appeared the grave of the first spiritual master. It is the spirit of the spiritual master that will allow Hyuk to change classes on the first floor. Pulling back the lid of the coffin, Hyuk released the spirit of the spiritual master from it. The spirit immediately asked the conqueror if this was his descendant. As it turned out, the meeting was not unexpected, because Hyuk knew this master and his name was Vulcan. Vulcan's attempt to scare him failed, since Hyuk knew everything about his spiritual interlocutor from the diary. The item was obtained in Cha-Jin's past life, but the memories were transferred to the new body, and therefore the knowledge too. The loss of all magical power led him to the first floor, where this strange object was found. But studying this diary, although it made him a spiritual master, did not succeed in conquering Vulcan. It was strange for Vulcan to hear this from a newcomer. It even intrigued him a little. He liked this newcomer, comparing him to the previous ill-mannered conqueror, but he didn't even suspect that the conqueror and Hyuk were one and the same person. Well, it was time to change class. But the spiritual master said that only after the 10th level can this be done. Vulcan kept mumbling that only by choosing the Necromancer class after the 10th level of the tower, you can change the class to a spiritual master. His thoughts were interrupted by Hyuk, who stated that he was already a Necromancer and would like to change classes right now. Vulcan was amazed when he saw Cha-Jin's statistics. Hyuk asked again if Vulcan could change his class, but he was talking too much and not to the point. Vulcan did start changing classes and started casting spells to change. A scroll with the history of the formation of the first spiritual master appeared in Hyuk's hands. It turns out that many centuries ago, before the tower appeared, Vulcan was one of the main walkers among people. Being a powerful necromancer, he sought to become stronger and more powerful than he was at that time, but the bones and skin of his enemies gave him nothing, and he found a way to absorb the souls of the slain. Many attempts and improvements to this skill allowed him to create a new class, the Spiritual Master. Unfortunately, although he was strong in spirit, his body had used up all his vital forces. His new class could have disappeared with him, but he chose to use necromancy on none other than himself. He needed this in order to one day pass on his knowledge to a new master who would come to him for knowledge. Alas, he also became half a character of the system, so he was doomed to wander forever in the tower on the first floor. The class change was complete, and Hyuk was rightfully considered the third spiritual master. Vulcan advised that souls could be collected in vessels so that they would have greater power. Hyuk liked this because he simply absorbed souls, and now he could store them in vessels. This vessel needs to be filled and this soul will be Vulcan. Now that's it. Vulcan wished for Hayuk to conquer the tower and glorify the name of his mentor. But the conqueror of the tower did not even hear him. He only needed the vessel with Vulcan's soul. It will be Vulcan's own responsibility to glorify the name of the mentor. Vulcan was stunned by the student's behavior, especially since glorifying the mentor was written in the diary. Hyuk walked towards Vulcan with determination, and made him feel a little afraid of his student's intentions. Using a soul absorption spell, he took out a vessel to fill it with a soul. Despite Vulcan's resistance, Hyuk still extracted his mentor's soul from his body. It worked, and now the soul was in Cha-Jin's hands. Vulcan sent Hyuk and promised to meet him in hell. The spirit of the mentor placed in the vessel could do nothing. By using magic, the vessel had an irresistible force that Vulcan could not destroy. Now the vessel became a personal prison for the mentor, which he had to come to terms with. The Necromancer was enraged and tried to destroy the barrier to kill Hyuk. The mentor was naive, not realizing that he would never escape from this vessel. Having scattered the mana stones, Hyuk decided to use them on Vulcan. Vulcan was in despair because he couldn't even move, let alone cast spells. Vulcan wondered how a level 1 rookie could become so strong. The answer was close by and terrified the mentor, because before him was a reincarnated spiritual master. It was that same scoundrel who had received the title of second spiritual master. Vulcan remembered his name immediately. Yes, it was Cha-Jin Hyuk. It's time for Hyoku to finish off Vulcan's soul, extract it from its vessel, and put it to work for himself. The time has come for the student to conquer his mentor. Returning from the class change room, Hyuk found that the evil demon was interested in his class, how the reasoning of these deities and demons prevented him from concentrating on the matter, and he shouted at them that everything has its time. With the ability to gluttony and the ability to move souls into a vessel, an army of skeletons was not needed. Commanding his monsters to fall and rise again, Hyuk took their souls. Now he had magical warriors who were no match for any opponent. It is true that these souls in the warriors' faces were now also silent, but they were submissive warriors, ready to serve their master. But then the silence was broken by a cry from behind. It turned out to be Vulcan in human form. Vulcan was furious that he was being used as a soldier instead of a mentor. Cha-Jin was surprised by Vulcan's image, and thought for a moment that such a strong guy was not bad in life. Well, no. The mentor couldn't stand it and wasn't going to just leave his fate as a spiritual soldier. Cha-Jin only moved his fingers, and Vulcan became speechless, which left him in shock. Hyuk warned Vulcan that if he did not accept his fate, he would go to hell forever. Vulcan was furious and didn't want to become Hyuk's watchdog, but he had no choice. Otherwise, all the souls whose guardians refused to be warriors would be absorbed by the Tower Conqueror. So there was no point in repeating it twice, because Vulcan remembered the peculiarity of gluttony. The student had to submit to his mentor, otherwise he would have been swallowed up too. Hyuk didn't even have to repeat what needed to be done next, and he pointed to the Kobold Lord's castle. At all costs, it was necessary to finish off this ruler so that he would not bother us anymore. As expected, kobolds were waiting for the traveler at the castle gates, apparently not expecting to meet a stranger here. Hyuk didn't even bat an eye at the sight of the kobolds, but merely summoned his new soldiers. He continued to walk forward, and around him kobolds fell dead, struck by the soldiers. More kobolds appeared on the castle walls, but this did not change the essence of the matter. In an instant, 30 kobold soldiers fell to the ground. Hyuk didn't even have to fight them. It was time to move forward and overthrow the Kobold Lord and take over his power. There was an old man standing in the middle of the hall, muttering something, apparently another spell. His attention was drawn to a guest from the human world who entered the hall. Having given the order to his kobold servant, he turned his gaze to the one who entered. The attacking kobolds fell to the floor of the hall, never achieving their goal of killing the uninvited guest. Hyuk also did not stand aside, and from his hands the kobolds fell like puppets without a puppeteer. All attempts to hit the guest were unsuccessful. Cha-Jin's soldiers were faster and stronger. The hall gradually filled with the corpses of kobolds, but they couldn't even give Jin a scratch. Still, the multiclass is bearing fruit, and the joy from this on the conqueror's face knew no bounds. But then Hyuk felt the aura of the one he came here for. It was the Kobold Lord. All that remained was to find this old man and defeat him once and for all. The evil lord taunts Hyuk by mimicking him with lightsabers, which prevented him from advancing further with his soldiers. In the room where the old man lived, there was something like a place for sacrifices. The victims were sacrificed to the demon who watched over death. The next victim screamed and begged to be released. But the old man craved more victims to satisfy the demon. But instead of people, the victim turned out to be a young goblin girl, and the old man thought about her. Just a moment, and doubts quickly disappeared, because the goblin was better than the man. But then the blow hit the old man's hand and he cried out in dissatisfaction from the pain. It was a blow from the sword flying from the hands of Hyuk, who had come to kill the old man and finish him off. Cha-Jin was curious about what was happening here while he was fighting in the next room. It didn't matter anymore, because the time had come to finish what had been started and gain the power of the Kobold Lord. The task ahead was to destroy the old man and take away his power. So the two opponents met face to face, and only battle could decide who would live and who would die. The uninvited guest was not a welcome sight for the old man, but something had to be done. The old man didn't delight Hyuk as he expected, just a crazy old man with a bunch of garbage. The name of this lord is Kalum. This kobold is not particularly remarkable, but he has a lot of arrogance. While Callum was distracted by the man, the goblin had a chance to escape. But as soon as she got up and tried to escape, the old man cast a spell at her. To help him, he called upon a demon to give him strength and help him win. The demon watching the death made Hyuk wonder what it could mean. The corpse bomb spell was fired at the girl, who was doomed to die. She tripped and fell to the floor, already thinking about her death. Pulling herself together, she vowed not to let herself die. Another moment and everything would have been over. But then a blow was heard, repelling the attack. It was Hyuk who saved the girl and fought off the evil old man's attack. The old man was furious at how the man was able to repel his attack, because not everyone can do that. The girl was grateful to the man, but he advised her to get out of there as quickly as possible. But then his gaze stopped on the girl, and he noticed that there was a goblin in front of him. How did she get here? Because goblins are powerful creatures of the 100th floor, and they have nothing to do here. It's strange. There's no point in experienced people coming down here, and she, moreover, has not yet reached adulthood. We'll have to save her and find out what happened on the 100th floor. But first it was necessary to deal with the old man, and then we would see. Without turning to the girl, he advised her to hide if she did not want to die. The old man attacked again, but this time it was Chajin himself. It was naive to think that attacking Hyuk would be successful, because he was faster and the attack was powerless against him. Having repelled the attack and rushed towards the old man, Hyuk knocked him down with one blow. The old man fell head over heels onto the floor and was perplexed as to why the novice walker was so strong at a low level. Now the initiative was on Cha's side, and he, without hesitation, attacked the old man again and again. The kobold lord began to ask the demon to help him and save his miserable soul. Hyuk's latest attack suddenly stopped, and the golem was to blame. The walker realized that this blood golem was created by a demon who tried to stop Hyuk from killing the old man, although it was strange that such a powerful being was summoned by a worthless demon. In any case, the same fate awaited him as the old man. But this golem was not a kobold, and it was not so easy to deal with him. The old man laughed at the battle scene. The golem's blow sent Hyuk flying several meters and falling to the floor. Using his most powerful ritual, the old man thought that he would defeat Hyuk, but how wrong he was. So it was a ritual, Hyuk thought. But this only made him more excited, and he decided to use his own ritual. Well, now it's the golem's turn to receive the ritual from a human, and let's see who will defeat whom. The summoned soldiers immediately rushed to attack the golem, which none of the castle's inhabitants expected. The soldiers instantly attacked, and the golem disappeared as if it had never existed. The old man was stunned. The demon golem was destroyed in seconds, as if it were a simple kobold. Evil Hyuk thought that this old man would not have been able to summon a golem without the help of a demon. He was not at the right level for this. Oh yeah, that demon who was watching death was shocked, and Hyuk revealed his identity. It was Boon, the cunning and hypocritical demon of death. The old man could no longer do anything, since his mana had run out and he could not attack the man in any way. The kobold soldiers quickly surrounded the old man, no matter how much he resisted. The demons watched quietly and silently as their follower's soul was consumed by Hyuk. At any cost, Boon will pay for his ridiculous prank of using his puppet against Chajin. The revenge will be terrible when he gets to the demon. It would be better for the demon to die himself. To all the cries of revenge, the demon watching over death only grinned. The old man was finished. All that remained was to take his soul. And here is the soul. It needs to be absorbed before it flies away, which it will not succeed in doing. The soul quickly tried to fly away to heaven, but Hyuk managed to intercept it, and now it was in his hands. Now the soul of the old man, once the patron of the kobolds, has forever become the toy of the Necromancer. Thanks to the skill of creating a soul sphere, Hyuk could not only absorb souls, but also use it for his own purposes. The skill also allows you to create medicine from the souls of defeated enemies. Soul absorption did not give a significant increase in characteristics, although it was unimportant, because having reached level 50, they were no longer important. The goblin girl called out to Hyuk, thanking him for saving her and saying that her name was Haryu. Hyuk said not to dwell on it. He just wanted the kobold lord, and that's all. He made fun of her, saying that he could take advantage of her and sell her to someone as a slave. But the girl was not one to be timid, and replied that she would make him change his intentions, which made the walker laugh. None of this mattered, and he directly asked her what she was doing so far from the 100th level of her brothers, and she said that her village was attacked and she was taken prisoner and brought here. It was strange to hear this, because even experienced walkers cannot compete with goblins, unless she was taken as a trophy as one of the 4 great and powerful beings. The first and most powerful were the giants as sources of strength. The second, and no less powerful, were the dragons, the sources of magic. The third were masters of dark energy, that is, demons. The fourth and most vengeful were the angels, the possessors of the wings of retribution. but it was unlikely that they would attack the goblin village unless someone had enlisted their support for their own benefit. It is possible that even the 9 has something to do with it, although it is not certain. At least they'll all pay for it when Hyuk gets to them. Hyuk was about to move on when Haryu suddenly asked where he was going and if he could come with him. First of all, it was necessary to leave this castle and continue to conquer the floors of the tower. Hyuk still invited Haryu to come with him, at least until he found out what happened to her. Well, maybe this goblin will be useful to him in the future, but for now let him not bother him if he wants to go with him. On the condition that he could not protect her all the time, she agreed. She needed to defend herself, because she had just been almost killed by a kobold, and she had to take care of herself. Due to her lapse in vigilance, she was captured and promised not to fall into traps again. It's true that in their bloody clothes they were too noticeable to others, and they needed to change into something. There was something glowing on the body of the deceased old man, and it was not immediately clear what it was. It turned out that from the old man, in addition to the soul, one could also receive equipment. This was opportune, but the two were interrupted by an image that appeared out of nowhere. Oh yeah, it was Vulcan, who had dealt with all the kobolds in the castle and came to report to Yuk. The girl was seriously scared and asked Cha-Jin who this stranger was. Vulcan was surprised, because not everyone could see him like that. But the girl replied that she had such a peculiarity. It will be interesting to see what happens to her if she is absorbed, but Vulcan advised to train her better. The system sent a notification about a new quest in the form of a new wave of monsters as a reward for the defeated Kobold Lord. Haryu and Vulcan were seriously scared and asked Hyuk not to do this and not to accept the quest. Cha-Jin thought differently. He had other plans for this quest, and he was going to complete it without anyone's approval. The gods and demons were divided over Hyuk's actions, and only the demon who watched the death offered him a reward for the quest. But Cha set the conditions here and asked to show the reward before he would accept the quest. And although Vulcan thought that in this way he would become free in the event of Hyuk's death, he realized that this was impossible. By accepting the quest, the trio summoned a wave of monsters to the Kobold village on the first floor, terrifying the newcomers. The newcomers were surprised by the wave of monsters, especially on the first floor, where they had not been for a long time. More experienced newcomers advised to go to the second floor, while there was still a chance before the wave appeared. Those who did not complete the quests on the first floor were doomed to stay here, because the experienced ones did not help them. But it was already too late. A portal with a new wave opened above the forest, near the entrance to the village. Before they could move away from the portal they had seen, crowds of kobolds poured out of it and rushed towards the newcomers at a rapid pace. The doomed newcomers prepared to accept death from the kobolds, seeing no chance of salvation. Suddenly, there was a flash of light and the trio appeared, led by Hyuk, at the moment when the newcomers had already mentally said goodbye to life. He immediately ordered the newcomers not to interfere in the fight, otherwise they would regret it. Vulcan suggested to Hyuk that he would deal with them himself. The trio dropped down between the kobolds and the group of newcomers to shield them from the wave. The spiritual master's soldiers were called in to fight the kobolds. The surprised newcomers did not expect to see a necromancer on the first floor, and with such a low level. Now Hyuk and his assistants had more than enough strength to attack the kobolds. The goblin girl asked if she could kill someone too. Hyuk only chuckled, but did not forbid Haryu from attacking the kobolds. But he still did not know anything about her. Haryu summoned the demon sword to attack and fight the kobolds. She had the magic of summoning a sphere and could extract items from it like from a backpack. The kobolds attacked Haryu, hoping to finish her off, but how wrong they were. A swing of the sword and the kobold fell dead behind the girl and was no longer able to get up. What seemed strange to Hyuk was that this young girl handled this unusual sword so deftly. A bunch of losers called out to Hyuk. Turning to the crowd with displeasure, he asked who dared to call out to him. It was an upstart who called himself Song Tai of the White Swallow Guild. Not only did the walker not understand who it was, he had never even heard of such a guild. It turns out it was one of the henchmen of the Holy Land Guild of the Pelin brothers and sisters. Suddenly, Hyuk asked if he had really heard about Pelin, or if he had imagined it. Sun Tae was saying something about his older brother, but Hyuk was absorbed in the thought of the Star Nine. Hyuk refused the offer to join the White Swallow Guild. But before Cha could say anything, Song Tai was already caught by one of the kobold soldiers. Ordering him to be released for now, Hyuk returned to fighting the monsters. The two comrades also wanted to confront Cha-Jin, dissatisfied with his behavior. If he is so strong and powerful, then why not intimidate people for their insolence? On the ground, the warriors seemed helpless, as they could neither strike nor steal nor do anything. But in the tower itself, it was impossible to go further without strength. Ordering his soldier to let go, Sun Tae-hyuk warned that this was not the end of their conversation. Turning around and heading towards his charges, Cha-Jin only advised Song Tae and his comrades to leave as soon as possible. The comrades sat down next to Sun, but he was unable to utter a word. Having come to his senses a little, he ordered to run away from this stranger as far as possible. There were kobold corpses scattered across the battlefield, so everything was going according to plan. And again, the kobolds arrived and the soldiers. Then Haryu and Vulcan fought with them alternately. Chajin burst into battle with a sharp and powerful blow of his staff into the middle of the crowd of kobolds, and they fell dead around the trio. Vulcan became concerned that the kobolds were becoming more and more numerous. But there was no point in panicking, since Hayuk was a strong walker, and he was in command here. Chajin summoned the defeated kobolds again, and turned them into his soldiers, so the army grew. But before they could become spiritual, they had to stop the kobolds as skeletons. The kobolds no longer tried to attack as the skeletons bit into their necks, killing them without mercy. Vulcan didn't need to be told to turn all the defeated into skeletons, he knew it himself. Well then, let's attack. Huk continued to kill kobolds left and right, and Vulcan turned them into skeletons. Haryu also kept up with them and cut down all the enemies with her demonic sword. She fought off the kobolds' attacks no worse than Vulcan and Huk, although she did not have such skills. But her strength was at its limit, and these creatures could injure or kill her at any moment. The attack in the kobolds wounded Haryu from behind, and she screamed in pain. The pain from the wound was nothing compared to what Haryu had gone through when her village was burned down. But no matter how she tried to repel the attacks, her strength was leaving her and her efforts were about to come to an end. The forces melted away instantly with each attack, and took away a lot of energy. The kobolds were advancing, but Haryu no longer had the strength to fight off the attacks. But what is this? A moment and the kobolds were defeated with one blow. Of course it was Hayuk. The girl began to envy his strength and attack, because he was only on the first floor and with such power. The girl decided to stay close to him and move on to one day avenge her village. And again the kobold attacked her from behind, but this time she was saved, but it was already Vulcan. In response to the girl's surprised face, Vulcan only asked if everything was okay with her. She could have handled it herself and didn't need the help of some old man with glasses. It was strange to see such a desire for determination. Apparently, she had a hard time. The girl asked why they helped her. Apparently, she was not used to someone's help. The only thing Vulcan could answer was that he served his spiritual master and carried out his orders. And then the girl realized that Hayuk was protecting her from death. It is his orders that Vulcan must carry out as a soldier. Hyuk insisted that the girl achieve her mastery, but not die in the process, and assigned Vulcan to her. Vulcan left because by not following his master's orders, he could say goodbye to his soul. The girl was grateful for the help of the only person who helped her in the tower. Taking out the goblin mask, the girl was about to use her special skill. Having tried on the mask, she took on the appearance of a demoness, which did not quite resemble the seemingly harmless girl. Vulcan was surprised by this transformation, and he did not immediately realize that it was Haryu. Hyuk also couldn't believe that in front of him was the same girl he saved from the clutches of the old man. Haryu's bloody appearance made everyone around her pay attention to her. Having completed the transformation into the form of a demoness, she prepared for a new attack. But now the victims were the kobolds themselves. Rushing forward, she easily destroyed the next kobolds and fatigue no longer bothered her. Apparently, the mask gave her strength and power to attack monsters. Well, now the kobolds will be in trouble. Now the reason for the attack on her village was clear. They were looking for her and the sword. But there was no point in telling Haryu why her village was burned. Let it be a secret to everyone for now. The system suddenly issued a notification that there was a minute left until the end of the wave, and the portal would be closed. Another wave of kobolds was defeated and the gates began to close. Well, the last kobold of the wave has been destroyed. Hyuk's sword struck the poor fellow and he instantly flew back, but already dead. The monster attack was successfully repelled, and the system congratulated the trio on completing the quest. Haryu felt exhausted and was glad that the wave was over. Hyuk came up and asked if she was okay, since the skill had almost exhausted her strength. She thanked him for his concern, but did not attach any more importance to it. Each of the three was counted by the system, and it distributed the rewards among them. It was time to take a look at the quest reward. The wave is over, and the trio has dealt with 2,500 kobolds. The Kobold Slayer achievement was obtained, and the stats were increased by only 5 units each. All that remains is for Hyoku to learn various skills, and the achievement points with characteristics will be infinite. The first and strongest of the three was Hyuk. Haryu came in second. Vulcan came in third, but Haryu refused the reward and gave it to Hyuk. Chajin took the reward from Vulcan without hesitation, but he couldn't take Haryu's reward so easily. He did not want to accept the award for the reason that he had already been betrayed once. Until she proves that she can be trusted, let her keep the reward. Then the girl formed a sphere and began to take out a goblin mask from there. She added a goblin mask to her reward as a token of gratitude for saving her. Vulcan couldn't believe that the girl would so easily part with the goblin mask and give it to a stranger. After all, the mask contains all the power of the goblin, and it is given only to one partner once and for all. Hyuk suddenly became curious as to why she was giving the mask to him. The mask as a gift signified gratitude for saving Haryu's life twice, and her loyalty to Hyuk as a reliable comrade. But the truth lay in the revenge that she wanted to convey to those who attacked her village. In fact, she is the only goblin who survived, and perhaps even the last of her kind. Therefore, she must avenge herself and her king. She asked to stay with them and continue their journey up the tower. Well, revenge is a dish best served cold. Hyuk accepted the reward with the mask, but on the condition that he would kill her for betrayal. The mask didn't bother Hyuk much. He took it only as a token of gratitude. Haryu thanked him and called him brother. Hyuk was taken aback by the girl's behavior. But he didn't care what she called him, because his goal hadn't changed. And here's the reward for Hyuk, which came from 3 awards. The ring, earring, and necklace gave an increase in mana and its absorption, which could not but please the walker. Such artifacts would allow him to increase the quality of soldiers by 45%. Hyuk almost forgot and called Boon so that this demon would give him a reward, and he invited him to a secluded place. The demon asked him not to rush with the choice of the reward, and so he decided. In an instant, a ring of demonic power lay on the table, giving even more opportunities to the walker. The ring is perfect for achieving the goal of conquering the tower and allowing you to finish off the Star 9. Vulcan and Haryu also decided to inquire about the ring. The ring had demonic powers. Vulcan asked in a frightened voice if this was really a demonic ring. The ring possessed demonic power and could improve its performance when it was worn and gave unlimited attack power. The ring was only given to the demon's slaves or puppets, but Hyuk was different. A new tab appeared in the characteristics, and its name is Demonic Power. The Lord of Evil also decided to shake hands with Cha, but without a gift, Hyuk did not shake hands. The demon, confused, checks his bins and cannot find anything for a gift. Then the demon decided to create a mission, and the reward for it would be better than the ring. Receiving a mission from a demon meant a good chance to prove yourself and become stronger. So Hyuk needed this mission, and he decided to accept it. The mission was to become famous before Cha-jin reached level 100. The reward for successfully completing the quest was anything. Failure meant complete submission to Bell. Haryu knocked on the door and asked what he was going to do next. First, it was necessary to find Sun Tae and extract information from him about everything that was happening. Hyuk ordered Vulcan to find this little man, who in response only asked how he should find him. Vulcan calmed Cha down and said that he had assigned his soldier to watch him, and that finding him would not be a problem. Left alone with Haryu, Hyuk suggested that they take a walk and talk. The purpose of the conversation was about the goblin mask and what it represents. In a nutshell, this mask allows you to obtain and use goblin skills. In other words, it was possible to summon supernatural powers and control them. Haryu could use powers in foresight, combat foresight, to control the battle. Providence sounded like a sad skill, because if it didn't help in battle, then there was no point in it. Many times people tried to find someone who had such features, but Hyuk didn't need it. It's strange. People turned to the elders and asked them to pass on their knowledge and help change their destiny. Destiny cannot change by providence alone, but you can get rid of the excess, and then fate will follow a different course. What can I say? Haryu's special feature in her mask could be very useful to Cha-jin. Her gift was in combat foresight, and she, together with the mask, no longer seemed such a useless traveler. Hyuk hugged the girl and thanked her for such warm words on her part. Haryu was shocked by this. Hyuk told her that she was good. No, she was the best. The Sword Star, the Bow Star, the Great Thief, the Divine Spear were no longer such insurmountable forces on the walker's path. The demon took a photo, and the 9-tailed fox bit her lips, watching the couple. Yes, this ball got on my nerves, and Hyuk sent him away, telling him to get out. He apologized to Haryu, but she only thanked Hyuk for being of help. Thanks to this mask, he will be able to help the girl carry out her plan of revenge. There was no limit to her joy, and she believed that everything would work out for them. Vulcan found Sun Tae and gagged him so that he would not scream and attract attention. He was angry that Hyuk was gone for so long because he had a thirst to kill that man, and he could barely restrain himself. And here appeared 2 people, a guy and a girl, whom Vulcan was waiting for. If it is possible to destroy the guilds under the patronage of the Pelin family, then Baal's mission will be accomplished. It was time to move on to the next floor and conquer the tower. Meanwhile, in the safe zone of the 2nd floor, rumors had already begun to circulate about 2 or 3 strangers who had managed to stop the wave. Just as the crowd was loudly discussing, a trio began to approach them. Hyuk walked ahead wearing a goblin mask, Haryu and Vulcan a little behind. The crowd immediately rushed to the trio with questions, not giving them a break. He did not reveal his name and only replied that his name was Phantom Mask. The crowd stood in amazement at the person standing in front of them. One of the crowd suggested that the mask was a criminal before he got into the tower. Well, the idea to attract the attention of the little people worked, and now everyone was talking only about him. It was time to move on, and Vulcan agreed not to be distracted by this crowd of onlookers, but to continue his journey to the top of the tower. The Trinity disappeared as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving the crowd in thought. The Trinity safely moved to the next floor, and a new quest was issued by the system. It was necessary to destroy 10 kobolds and 10 kobold warriors to proceed to the next floor. Let Vulcan take on this quest as the best of the spiritual soldiers. Vulcan, anticipating the battle, happily agreed to begin the quest. Hyuk only asked to take the girl with him to gain experience and train herself. Haryu was surprised, but agreed to go with Vulcan. While those 2 are busy with the quest, Hyuk will be busy using demonic power. It's time to test this power, which belonged to one of the mighty races. It was possible to create the face of demonic energy, and it was time to unite it with the soul. Haryu distracted him by telling him that there was someone in the bushes. Indeed, one of the kobolds was hiding there, which was to his advantage. The victim himself came to Yuk, and it was high time to test the demonic power on him. Let's get into action. The kobold appeared to dodge the attack, but it was just an illusion. The kobold began to slowly die under the influence of the demonic attack, and Haryu did not immediately understand why. Another second and the kobold dissolved like a cloud of smoke and no longer existed. And now the soul has left the body which only recently was full of life. It's time to combine these two entities into one and see what comes of it. During the merger, the soul began to collapse due to an excess of demonic energy. Having lowered the energy density, he began to continue the fusion of the two entities. The fusion was successful, and now before him appeared not a spiritual, but a demonic soldier. The girl was glad that Hyuk had succeeded in this fusion, and she was happy. Since only demons possessed demonic energy, no one knew how easy it was to control it. Vulcan arrived at a time when everything was already over, and he was pleased with his descendant with the luck of the demonic power skill. The demonic spiritual soldier was in many ways stronger and more powerful than an ordinary soldier. But filling the soul with energy in battle will not be so easy. He almost forgot about Vulcan, and now it's his responsibility. After all, Vulcan was more experienced, and therefore could easily handle this matter. Summoning souls and controlling them was the main advantage of a mentor. But what was this boy up to? Chajin decided to imbue Vulcan's soul with demonic energy, which the latter did not like very much. By giving the soul the power of a demon, all the soldiers under his command would immediately become demonic. And since the soul of the master was in many ways stronger than the soul of the kobold, all the energy could be contained in it. Screaming in pain, Vulcan promised to destroy Chajin for what he was doing to his soul. Hyuk promised to wait for that moment, but for now let him gain experience to confront his student. The fusion of the master's soul and the demonic power went perfectly, and now the master had power and strength. Now the best and strongest spiritual soldier was considered to be Vulcan with demonic energy. Vulcan was furious, and warned Hyuk that the master was now a stronger being than the student. Vulcan's anger even seemed funny to Hyuk. Now there is an opponent of a worthy level to fight Hyuk. Vulcan decided to summon the soldiers and show Hyuk their demonic form, and he began to summon demonic soldiers for Hyuk. Vulcan gave the order to the soldiers who appeared to attack Chajin, but it was foolish to count on victory. Hyuk used the power of the mask, and the attack was not scary to him. Thanks to the mask, all the soldiers were shrouded in magic and moved relatively slowly, making the attack look ridiculous. At the same time, Haryu also saw this feature and could use it without a mask. Without delay, Hyuk destroyed the soldiers and the attack was repelled. Another step and a powerful blow pinned Vulcan to the ground, throwing him several meters away from Hyuk's blow. He advised the master to calm down and obey his orders. Haryu hurried to find out if everything was okay with the old man. Nothing would happen to the old man, because he was a spirit, which meant he was not in danger of being hit, but still the pain was felt as if in the physical body, which was unpleasant for the master. The girl was surprised that Chajin managed to use the mask's power. He only replied that when he used the mask, he saw everything in slow motion. It was more of a side effect than a skill of using the mask. The side effect could occur in beginners with little experience. If this is a side effect, then what was the point of the mask? It was secondary only because, in addition to slowing down the enemies, the owner of the mask also had to show combat foresight of his next steps. Hyuk was furious and asked how he could learn to use it, to which Haryu didn't know the answer. She just goes and does it, but sometimes there are side effects. Providence cannot be used constantly, otherwise a terrible headache and dizziness could befall any newbie. But Hyuk failed to activate this skill, and Haryu became worried about it. Apparently he underestimated the power of the mask and he still had room to grow. Vulcan was puzzled that, being the greatest spiritual master, he had come to the point of becoming a demonic soldier. Haryu even felt a little sorry for the old man, and decided to help him. Unlike Hyuk, she was a little kinder to the old man, for which he was grateful to her. The girl was stunned by this, but kept herself in check. She pointed out that it was time to get down to business, and that Hyuk needed more kobolds. Another one was needed, or the missing one could be Vulcan. And what should Vulcan do if not to obey the master's order? The quest mission was completed, and Vulcan called the slain kobolds to serve the master. The third and fourth floors were cleared by Vulcan and his soldiers and Haryu. The fifth floor awaited our trio, but rumors of exploits were already circulating here. The fifth floor was already home to goblins with poisonous needles, which made it difficult to pass, but not for Hyuk. It was in the depths of the forest that Hyuk and his companions appeared, and while he was busy preparing, the goblins began to attack him from behind. This time, the girl easily knocked away the needles that were flying at the walker, and then her combat foresight skill immediately activated without much effort. The goblin was confused as to what had happened, and why his needles had not reached the man. At that very moment, the demonic hand of Vulcan's soldier fell on the goblin's head. She stopped the goblin Haryu in time, otherwise Hyuk would have gotten injured. It would have been better not to stop, but to destroy this goblin. But it turned out that way. But something incomprehensible was happening to Haryu, and this made Vulcan wary. Something was wrong here, and Vulcan couldn't figure it out. Then Hyuk, who had finished his preparations, called out to them. But Haryu did not understand what had happened, and why she had a sword in her hands. It's time to create a new wave of monsters, and not just summon them. Since the 5th floor already spawned goblins instead of kobolds, it was possible to get the Goblin Slayer achievement. But it was impossible to attack the monsters whenever you wanted, because their master could appear, which did not bode well. Hyuk didn't intend to hunt the Demon Lord. He wanted to create the wave manually. Vulcan and Haryu looked at him in surprise, because they had never even heard of such a thing. But no one had heard or known about such a thing. But Hyuk learned something during the raids on the floors. The thing was that during the raid there was a gap between the 4th and 3rd floors, which was strange. And then he realized that in each zone there is a monster spawn point in the middle. And if you direct mana into this zone, then monsters will appear as during the wave, but they will be created manually. But this is the first time Hyuk has tried this. They had to be more careful with this wave, because after the 300th floor, even 4 powerful creatures would not be able to overcome the monsters. It was a strange riddle. The skill appeared, the knowledge was there, but it could not be used without preparation. To prepare, you needed to create more waves and strengthen your characteristics. In the safe zone, everyone suddenly became agitated and thought that an earthquake had occurred somewhere in the center of the tower. But this was another wave on the 1st floor, caused by Hyuk himself. And this wave was no longer with kobolds, but with goblins with poisoned arrows. The newcomers were perplexed about the wave since nothing foreshadowed its appearance. One of the fleeing newcomers was hit by a needle and fell to the ground, not even having a chance to move. Meanwhile, the goblins were approaching the couple and were about to attack them again. But their salvation was already at hand. As expected, since Hyuk created the wave, he appeared here in the form of a ghostly mask. The newcomers were saved and rejoiced at Chajin's emergence as a mighty warrior. This is what Hyuk needed, to be recognized, which means he will save them. Calling his soldiers, he gave the order to attack anyone who appeared from the wave gate. Vulcan was angry because they were his soldiers, but Hyuk demanded more soldiers. But what is this? The demonic soldiers began to burn as if they were being burned with flames. That's it. They were attacked by goblin shamans. They were the ones who had the power to attack the spiritual soldiers. The appearance of spiritual goblins was unexpected for the trio. But this did not change the essence of the matter. We need to get rid of them. Otherwise our travelers will lose their soldiers. Without soldiers, a raid on the floors would have been impossible. But Haryu's attack had already fallen upon the shamans from above, and the goblins scattered in different directions. It was time for Hyuk to join in, which he was about to do. Now these shamans were absorbed by Chajin, and their souls now belonged only to him. It turns out that fire gave strength to these shamans, but it was useless on goblins, and Hyuk had an idea. Thanking Haryu for his help, he cast a magical fire spell against the enemies. But Haryu didn't hear him, and he didn't immediately understand why. Once again, this whirlwind of fire in a bloody form did not bode well. This sword appeared again in the girl's hands, and she began to turn into a monster. It couldn't be. It was a demoness standing in front of him, but not Haryu. The demoness noticed the man and rushed to attack him. Hyuk was shocked by this turn of events, and did not understand what was happening to his companion. Hyuk dodged the attack, but the wave destroyed the houses, which folded up like cards. The entire village was instantly destroyed by this demoness. What did all this mean? Apparently the truth was hidden in the sword, which glowed furiously red. And again the attack followed the walker, but was repelled as easily as expected. Now Hyuk was fighting not with goblins, but with the demoness that his companion had turned into. Attempts to stop Haryu and prove that he is Hyuk were unsuccessful. Apparently, she was controlled by the power of the magic sword, and she had no control over herself. Vulcan, arriving during the battle, was surprised by what was happening. Having flown away from the demoness's blow, Hyuk did not immediately understand that Vulcan was talking to him. Hyuk was fine, but Haryu was furious in her demoness form. This was a strong opponent even for him. Apparently she was the leader of that goblin village. Or maybe even the leader. Chajin's wave didn't bother him much. He decided to deal with Haryu at all costs. Armed with a magic axe, he went on the attack, but alas, the demoness activated combat foresight and the attack no longer made sense. Hyuk's attack was doomed to failure. Intuition from his past life told him that one blow from this sword would send him to the next world. There were no enemies or friends in the tower, so it was time to finish off the attack and finish off the demoness. Hyuk's next attack and his axe stopped a centimeter away from Haryu's head. She easily stopped him in his tracks and stood there as if nothing had happened. But how was this possible, and this did not give Hyuk peace? Could it be that the battle foresight worked again and she was able to predict the attack? But how is that even possible? The counterattack sent him flying back and he was wounded by the one he thought was his partner. Since you can't handle it alone, you'll have to call on your soldiers to attack the demoness. Perhaps he would be able to cope with her. Otherwise he was doomed. He called upon all those who had ever died in this place. Now the goblins went on the attack and they obeyed only the master. The goblin skeletons immediately enveloped the demoness's legs and did not allow her to move. But it was in vain, and with one blow she threw them in different directions. You couldn't even see the soldier's blows. Again she had providence. Strange. With a strong blow he flew far from the place where he stood. The demoness's powers were waning, and this was Hayek's chance to finish off the girl once and for all. Apparently she mentioned this when she talked about the side effect, so she couldn't use foresight, and now there was a chance to attack her and finish her off. The next attack of the demoness was right there. Hyuk lured her and wanted her to attack him. The attack was not long in coming, and now a girl was flying at him from above with the aim of striking him. But the attack failed, and a goblin with a poisoned needle appeared behind the girl. This poison will be fatal even for her. Now there was nothing to stop him from striking this girl, since Providence no longer worked, and the needles flew towards the demoness. The demoness tried in every way to fight off the horde of goblins, repelling their needles with poison. This was starting to piss Hayek off. The demoness attacked him but missed, and Hayek only jumped to the side. The attack continued and Hayek needed to do something. But then the needle hit the girl and she fell before the attack was completed. And immediately Haryu woke up, but she could no longer attack anyone from the surrounding area. Thanks to the weakening and the side effect, he managed to cope with it. The goblin with the poison needle did his job. Namely, he appeared in the dead zone and released a needle with poison into the girl, who did not expect the blow. After the hit, the girl began to fall from a height and could have been killed if not for. Hayuk caught Haryu and she was safe. But it turned out that the needle had also hit Hayuk and he began to feel paralysis. By ordering the zombie goblin to bring him a needle with poison, he intended to heal himself. By using the spell, he became immune to the paralytic poison. What should we do with her now, since she almost killed him? Okay, let him rest, and then we'll decide what to do with your ability. Meanwhile, Haryu found herself in a demonic place in her subconscious. The demoness spoke to her and pointed out that the girl now had a demonic sword for killing. The demoness was amazed that the girl was still too young for this. The demoness looked like a goblin, but it only seemed that way. In some ways, she was indeed a goblin, but that was not the point. She warned the girl that the sword had destructive power, but in return it devoured the consciousness of the bearer. Having warned the girl, the demoness disappeared and Haryu woke up behind Hayek. She woke up at the very moment when the travelers reached the safe zone of the 6th floor. Haryu was surprised and asked why Chajin was carrying her and what was going on here. Sometime later, Hayek and Vulcan went to the girl to talk about the next step. It was decided to go straight to the 10th floor, where the boss in the big city were. But the boss was none other than the monster lord with his enormous power and strength. Haryu promised to go with them after recovery, but that was not the case. Unfortunately, Haryu's actions put an end to the further conquest of the tower together with Vulcan and Hyuk. The girl did not understand why they wanted to get rid of her. Hyuk tried to find out what she remembered from what happened on the 5th floor, but she remembered nothing, as if someone had erased her memories. Her sword was no worse than Hyuk's sword, but in exchange it devoured consciousness for the duration of its activation. When he activated his sword, as Hayek said, the girl attacked him and thus had to be defeated only with a poisonous needle. So, if she wants to continue conquering the tower with them, then let her reach the 10th floor on her own without using a sword. Haryu agreed and was glad that she was given a chance to improve. Well, that's great. That's what they decided. Now it was time for the heroes to part ways, and they began to say goodbye. Leaving the robe with the girl, Hyuk advised her not to take it off, as few people would like a goblin in her guise. Looking after the girl, Hayuk and Vulcan regretted that such a companion had left them, but she had to prove that she could be trusted. As they parted, the girl promised to catch up with them soon and continue their journey together. At all costs, she had to prove that she was trustworthy. Meanwhile, Vulcan and Hayuk had already reached the 9th floor and were easily dealing with the monsters on their way. The next group of goblins was no match for them, and they easily dealt with them left and right. Even the big goblins were like seeds, and Chajin easily dealt with them without Vulcan's help. From the attacks, large goblins fell just like normal ones, only there was more noise. Blow after blow, the attack continued, and the goblins died like flies on a window. The old man found it funny to look at his student, and he admired the fact that he had already settled in. Apparently, creating waves became a routine for this couple, but Vulcan even began to like it. But he was tormented by the feeling that the excitement and desire for revenge had clouded the student's mind, and that he had not even remembered about Haryu. If Hayuk hadn't considered her strong, he wouldn't have offered to be her partner in conquering the tower. So Vulcan was worried for nothing. Well, enough about her. Hyuk needed more orcs, and the master had to suck the souls out of them for the army. Vulcan was furious, and said that only someone who had no parents could ask such a thing. The thing is that Hyuk grew up in an orphanage with Choi Gen-hook, and he doesn't remember his parents. So Vulcan felt uneasy with such an answer. By placing his hand on Chajin's shoulder, he merely showed sympathy, but it made him feel uneasy. The system notified the conqueror that a new achievement was available to him, Orc Slayer, and he received points for completing the quest. Now they reached the 10th floor and entered the test room, where they had to destroy the boss to proceed further. Something was wrong, and it was bothering Vulcan. It was just a leaderboard for clearing the boss test room. Something of the name Balkan, also known as Vulcan, was not observed here, and the first lines were occupied by 4 great beings, with a minute result. Why don't the 2 of them then break the record and prove their superiority? Why not? And Vulcan only laughed at his student's idea. He was given the order to prepare soldiers to stop the boss, and he began to prepare for battle. Well, it was necessary to quickly resolve everything and end this battle as soon as possible. Hyuk also began to prepare for the battle to begin and prepared a spell to attack. Hyuk cast an elemental spell, and decided to also cast other spells to defeat the boss in the shortest time. The spell of Pierce, critical damage, flexibility, and agility poured from the mouth of the walker, and he was determined. And yes, the most important spell of demonic power, to make sure to quickly put an end to the battle. For the first time, he used the spell of Odin's Spear, the most powerful weapon on the 10th floor. 3, 2, 1, and the mission began. A great orc was summoned, and our pair had to attack him immediately. The orc was indeed of impressive size, and could rightfully be considered the boss of the 10th floor. But for the walker and his mentor, it was easy as pie to kill him. Vulcan immediately summoned demonic soldiers to delay the orc and strike him. The spear of God Odin flew swiftly towards the orc to defeat him. The boss had no chance to repel the attack, and the spear destroyed the orc in a matter of minutes. The orc was thrown back by the spear, and was no longer in this world, so the mission was completed. The result was astonishing. The orc was defeated in 961 thousandths of a second, which set a new record. Meanwhile, on the 8th floor in the tavern where Haryu was relaxing, the local tavern patrons were discussing the new record for clearing the boss of the 10th floor. She needed to work harder to catch up with Hyuk before he left the 10th floor. Meanwhile, the couple on the 10th floor rejoiced at having managed to set a record and wipe the noses of even great beings. Even Vulcan acknowledged his student's superiority, noting that even spiritual masters like Vulcan could not have pulled off such a feat on their own. Well, the boss was taken care of, and they still had some business to finish on the 10th floor, so they headed towards the portal to the safe zone. Upon reaching the 10th floor, an auction became available, organized by one of the richest men in the tower. This is exactly what the Golden Lich was, whose fortune no one could count because it was constantly growing. A large city opened up before the travelers, which they encountered on their way to conquer the tower. People founded this city and began to engage in trade, and at the same time they no longer thought about conquering the tower. Hyuk needed to sell something and buy a potion of different abilities. The lifting of the ban on auctions did not in the least hinder the flourishing of trade in this beautiful city. Although Vulcan thought about the auction, he did not pay much attention to it. Hyuk didn't miss the opportunity to participate in the auction and registered under the name of the Ghost Mask. Everywhere there were food stalls, weaponsmiths, craftsmen, and inns that belonged to the Golden Lich. Who this rich man was haunted Vulcan, who tried to understand why everything here belonged to him. Chajin explained in a nutshell that he was one of the richest people in the tower, and no one knew his real name. This was exactly what Hyuk was doing. He wanted to find himself a sponsor, and apparently he found one. Balkan's surprised look asked mentally which sponsor and for what purpose, to which Chajin merely pointed to the Golden Lich's sign, and it was clear what kind of sponsor he meant. Vulcan cried out in surprise, and was amazed that their sponsor was none other than the Lich himself. At the entrance to the company building, our travelers were met by a female manager, who greeted the guests. Here you could buy all the best that was sold for money on this floor. Due to the large number of visitors, everyone was given waiting tickets to ensure that the line was maintained, and Hyoku was given number 18. Number 18 was invited to the third counter, where manager Halcyon was waiting for them. The walker immediately indicated that he needed to buy something, to which the manager only asked how to address his customer. By showing the mask, Hyuk made it clear how to address him. The ghostly mask shocked the manager, and he was unable to utter a word. Asking him to speak more quietly, Hyuk asked him to count the number of coins in the bag he had placed on the counter. There were exactly 3,000 coins in the bag, and Halcyon asked what his dear customer wanted to buy. The answer was not long in coming. The plan was to use this money to buy a meeting with the Lich. The surprised look alerted the traveler, and he asked what was wrong, or if everything here couldn't be bought for money. Unfortunately, the manager replied that the deal could not be completed at the moment. Not wanting to appear rude, the manager replied that there was not enough money to meet with Mr. Leech. Apparently Hyuk miscalculated a little in terms of money and wondered what he could do. In that case, he asked how much it would cost him to meet with Leech's manager. Vulcan asked Cha why he made Halcyon so nervous, and also ordered him to arrange a meeting with the head of the company, to which the student replied that if there were thoughts about another way, then he was ready to listen to them. But if not, then just keep quiet. Well, here they are, approaching the door of the head of the company where they had an appointment. Knocking on the door and introducing himself as a ghost mask, Hyuk entered the manager's office. In a beautifully furnished office, the manager sat in a chair, greeting the newcomer and introducing himself as the puppeteer. After asking Cha-Jin if he wanted to meet the Golden Lich, he apparently couldn't find him here. If a meeting is impossible for that kind of money, then we will have to act differently. In a commanding tone, he demanded that the puppeteer personally bring the Lich here to his office. The puppeteer just sighed and advised not to order him to do it differently. Using the puppet spell, he thought to envelop and control Hyuk, but something went wrong. As the manager said, Hyuk had exactly the same amount of impudence, and maybe even less, than the puppeteer. It was even possible to argue about who had more of it, and Hyuk struck the puppeteer at the very moment when he did not expect it. The surprised manager couldn't believe his eyes that a walker below the 10th floor could so easily break the spell. Then it would be necessary to use another spell and teach this walker a lesson, as the head of the company thought. In an instant, they both moved into the realm of reason, and here only magic and the power of the soul could decide the outcome of the battle. To the newbie, as the puppeteer thought, this was an incomprehensible phenomenon, but how wrong he was when Cha-Jin answered him that it was a sphere, and what purpose it served the owner. Well, since he knows about the sphere, then here he should rely only on his experience and strength of soul. Here the puppeteer thought that he could easily defeat the walker. Otherwise he had to arrange a meeting with the Lich. Using the spell he began to wrap the puppet strings around Cha-Jin's entire body, but it was useless. Experience and strength of soul, then he was no match for Hyuk, a naive, conceited man. So this puppeteer hasn't yet realized that his spell doesn't work on the walker. The manager was puzzled as to how the 10th floor walker knew so much. This could only mean that the fighter in front of him was at least 100th, or even 200th floor. The puppeteer admitted that he was facing an opponent of equal strength, and now he needed to act differently. The room was filled with an incomprehensible substance, and began to be filled with strange entities. Creatures that looked more like puppets than living beings began to emerge from the liquid. Oh yes, these puppets were created by the puppeteer. There was no doubt about that. The army of puppets was under the leadership of the manager, and with their help he wanted to finish off the newcomer. But it was not to be. All these creatures were raised and battle-hardened on their way to the top of the tower, and they also had experience. By adding experience and mana to them, the puppeteer made them stronger and better, so they were puppets with the experience of the 50th floor. As soon as they both entered the sphere, the naive puppeteer thought that he was the winner. How wrong he was. And he gave the order to the puppets to attack the newcomer and finish him off. The manager thought that this was the end of the walker, since there was no chance of survival. But then a noise was heard behind him, and all his puppets flew in different directions from the newcomer's blow. Having summoned the demons, Hyuk now decided to show and teach this impudent fellow a lesson with his army. The army of shadows and demons was a formidable weapon even in the hands of a newbie, as the puppeteer thought. But Cha-Jin was far from a newbie. Among all the demons, there was a level 100 boss, and only then did the manager begin to understand what was threatening him. Boss cast a spell and all the puppets quickly disappeared as quickly as they appeared. It turns out that demons can be summoned in the realm of the mind, but it took a little longer than usual. A pathetic army of puppets is nothing. It was time to show the true army of the leader. Now the winner was not the manager, but Hyuk, and he was far from a newcomer with such an army. What can I say? But an army of puppets is nothing compared to a mighty army of demons. It's time to call upon all the demons and show this upstart what a true warrior's army is. The Lich, Dullahan, and many of the upper floor bosses formed the backbone of this army, which seriously scared the head of the company. Screaming in horror, the puppeteer asked himself who this newcomer named Ghostmask was. There was an ominous silence before him, and before his eyes stood an army of demons led by Hyuk. Screaming from the approaching troops, he suddenly opened his eyes and found himself in his office, not understanding how he had moved there. After all, he didn't close the sphere. This newcomer couldn't have seized control of the sphere and closed it. Well, the battle was over, and it was time to talk about the deal that the leader was now forced to accept. Now it was only a matter of time before Lich met Hyuk. Having handed over only the letter to the manager, he asked that it be delivered personally into the hands of the Golden Lich. Be that as it may, the answer to the letter might not come, which even the puppeteer could not help with. There was nothing to worry about. The walker reassured the head and assured him that a response to the letter would be received. Having escorted the traveler outside, the manager promised that as soon as there was an answer, he would notify him. Vulcan was puzzled as to why the manager looked so broken and dejected, as if he had been through a disaster. It was approaching sunset, and the master suggested that his student take a good rest. But there was no time to rest, because there was still a lot of unfinished business ahead. The time for Lich's response could not be wasted, and something had to be done. It was decided to join the guild since they had decided to stay here for a while. But the real reason was different. In the lobby on the first floor, two girls were calmly discussing each other's achievements, and were not thinking about anything. Both were sisters, and argued with each other, giving directions every now and then in response to each other's comments. It was unclear why, instead of conquering the tower, they were hanging around in the lobby of the 10th floor of the guild building. After all, in their opinion, only an idiot could attack a sacred guild under the patronage of the Pellin family. Using the illusion of the mask, Hyuk was now a different person, and entered the lobby in the midst of the two girls' conversation. When asked what brought him here, Hyuk replied that he wanted to join the guild. The surprised girls breathed a sigh of relief when they heard that it was a newbie who wanted to join the guild. The girls came up with a plan on how to get unlimited power at the expense of this newcomer. They asked the young man to come and tell them who had recommended the guild to him. He played dumb and said that he was brought here because the guild was popular. Before accepting him, the girls decided to take a look at his abilities. He asked them for a coin to demonstrate his strength. Now he asked them to look carefully at the coin, and that he would now demonstrate everything to them. In a moment, the coin was broken between two fingers and surprised the girls. He also said that he knew a little bit of the basics of magic, and this surprised them even more. For example, he can create fire as one of the manifestations of magic. The girls were already anticipating how, under their patronage, he would be able to achieve power. And one of the girls liked him, and she told her sister about it. But Hyuk wasn't interested in this, and he only thought about his plan, which he stuck to. But their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door, and the three of them turned to the doors of the guild. A worried guild member came in and reported that some monster was destroying their village. Everyone who reached above the 50th floor was called to fight the monster, and the girls were also affected. Having ordered Hyuk not to go anywhere, they resolutely went to fight the monster. Left alone in the guild, he went straight to action. And on the street there was chaos, which was created by a spiritual monster. But as it became clear, it was Vulcan, carrying out the order of his master to distract attention. Vulcan didn't like this idea, but he couldn't do anything about it. Orders were orders. But he felt awkward pretending to be a monster, since he hadn't done it for a long time and hadn't practiced it. Meanwhile, Hyuk wasted no time in reaching his goal in the guild. He entered the hall and again passed by. What he was looking for was not here. The guard, who came running to the noise, immediately noticed a man who should not have been there. Grabbing the guard by the neck, the walker entered the room where there was a pile of books, and here, most likely, was what he was looking for. He needed something from the guild and its connection to the Sacred Kingdom. He needed the entire list of guilds that were affiliated with the Holy Kingdom in order to destroy them all. The guard asked whether the newcomer would have too many enemies, since he already had two. But the guard had to think about how not to die himself if he didn't give the information to Hyuk. He pointed to the table where there were sheets of paper with various notes. Well, that saved the poor guy from death and shortened the walker's time for information. Looking at one of the sheets of paper, he saw a list of members of one of the guilds. The list also included the names of Pellin's brother and sister, which couldn't help but please Hook. His main goal was to destroy Kane and Carmen Pellin at any cost. Having burned the list and memorized the names, he moved towards the exit and was about to leave the guild. He swore to be the first of the Star Nine to finish them off. Meanwhile, Leech was going through the reports of his company's branch managers in his office. While looking through the report of the head of the 10th floor branch, he noticed a letter that was missing from the report, which was strange. It was strange to receive a letter separately from the report, which made Lich wary. He was furious because the letter clearly stated that the Ghost Mask knew who was running the auction. The streets of the city were engulfed in a fire caused by Vulcan and Hyuk. Even the head of the White Swallow Guild, Beck Hollio, was interested in who came to the guild to register. When asked by the guild leader, both girls had different readings. One of them talked about a skinny guy with a cute face. Another one insisted that there was some awkward guy with an ugly face. Because of different testimonies, they almost fought with each other. Most likely, as the head suggested, it was hallucinatory magic. In the morning, Balkan returned to the room where Hook was resting. He teased the master by saying that rumors had already spread around the city about him as a terrible ghost. As for Vulcan, it was clear that he was a little tired. But what about Hyuk? Did anyone recognize him? The mentor was interested in the question. The student reassured them by saying that no one recognized him and that they were talking about different people, but did not agree on their opinions. It was all clear, but where is the information about the guilds? And Hyuk pointed to his head, and that the information is inside and it is more valuable than paper. Vulcan calmed down and didn't ask any more unnecessary questions. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door, which neither of them expected. Hyuk put on the mask and ordered the master to be ready to seize the intruder. As soon as the door swung open, they immediately rushed into the attack. But it turned out that she was not needed, because Halcyon was at the door. Hyuk was at a loss as to why this pathetic manager from the Golden Lich Guild had come. He was sent by the puppeteer to inform him that his audience with the Golden Lich had been approved, and that he was expected. In the hall below, the Lich's guards were waiting for the two travelers, with him at the head. What was the matter that there were soldiers around remained a mystery to Cha Jin. It was commendable to see that despite the contents of the letter, Hyuk still appeared before Lich, but it was stupid as he thought. Well, many years have passed since their last meeting, which Lich apparently forgot. Lich ordered his soldiers to attack Cha Jin and bring him alive to the office. The guards were about to attack the walker on their master's orders, but it no longer mattered. Hyuk was wearing his mask and was preparing to fight not only the guards, but also the Lich himself. since that was what he wanted. The commander of the guard gave orders to his subordinates, shouting them in a loud voice. One blow and the commander fell silent, unable to give orders. The guards also flew back from the second blow, thus opening the way to the Lich himself, who was leaving the hall. Now Hayuk turned to the Lich himself, asking if he wanted to fight. The Lich was calm and did not pay much attention to the newcomer. The Lich had the power of the Golden Lich. Thanks to the gold, his power was enormous, and spears of gold flew at Hyuk, trying to hit the walker in flight. There was no chance of winning, because there was a huge amount of gold in this branch, and this is how Lich thought to finish off the stranger. But alas, he miscalculated the strength of the newcomer, and a spear was already placed near his throat. The Lich was adamant and wasn't even frightened by it. He didn't even listen to Hayuk because the guards were supposed to bring him back alive. Cha-Jin offered to listen to him and they proceeded to the next room. But in the office, immediately after the doors were closed, spears were placed at the newcomer's throat. This room was isolated from the outside world, and even gods and demons were not allowed to enter here. Lich demanded that Hyuk tell him everything. And first of all, he demanded to know how the newcomer knew that the owner of the auction was Lich. The auction was a huge system that allowed for the trading and exchange of things. But inside the tower it appeared for a reason, and its creation is entirely due to the Lich. And if everyone found out about the creator of the auction, the whole company would collapse. Hyuk just chuckled at Lich's threats and calmly replied that he himself found out about the owner of the auction. But Lich decided to get information about the person who told the newcomer about him anyway. And he was about to attack the newcomer again, but he miscalculated. Now Cha-Jin used his power and summoned a Vulcan with demonic power. The Lich couldn't believe that it was a soul vessel spell. But this spell could only be used by a spiritual master, but not by a beginner. Now Lich, aka William, began to remember who was in front of him, and that he had met him somewhere. Yes, he recognized him. It was the same Cha-Jin Hyuk from 10 years ago. I immediately remembered the betrayal of the Nine and the gift of Baal. And finally the resurrection. But how is this possible? Even Vulcan was amazed by what he learned from William's memories. William didn't believe that this was the same person he met many years ago, but Hayuk convinced him of it. The first thing William had to do as a debt was to sign a sponsorship contract and spend the company's money. William was surprised that Hayuk spoke of his company as his own. To some extent, he was right. Many years ago, it was Hyuk who sold the trophy from the high floor for cheap, thus allowing William to transform from a traveling merchant into a golden lich. So it was right to consider that Hayuk was the founder and largest shareholder of the company, and therefore the company was his. William looked at the newcomer in surprise, still not believing that that guy and this man were one and the same. If it was a contract, then in return William would receive a conclusion from Hyuk, but only after collecting information. William agreed to this condition and said that he would pay for the information from Hayuk. So when he was on the 600th floor about 10 years ago, the Nine either set him up herself or someone pushed her to do it. There are 4 places in the tower where they could prompt the Nine to deal with him. William even screamed, because they were talking about 4 creatures that controlled the tower. Their interest was in destroying anyone who dared to become stronger than themselves. They have 2 options, either reach the top of the tower themselves or destroy anyone who disturbs them. And those who would join them, they would reward with ownership of the middle floors. But these were only speculations and there was no evidence. Not exactly. William didn't know that these creatures destroyed the Haryu village on the 100th floor and was surprised. Only one girl survived from that tribe, and her name is Haryu. Haryu, meanwhile, fought bravely and brutally with the orcs on the lower floors. Unfortunately, this was not enough, and she sought to surpass herself in order to quickly join Hayuk and Vulcan. And she still lacked the strength and experience to clear the boss, and she promised not to use the sword. She also didn't have enough time to clear the 10th floor, which only made her angry. In order to meet her brother, she had to work harder on herself. The sword demon advised to use the sword and all problems would be solved. After all, the demoness suggested doing everything as quickly as possible, and meeting with her brother as soon as possible. No, she couldn't use the dragon-slaying sword, for the sole reason that she made a promise to her savior. Haryu sent the demoness and asked her not to interfere with her on her way to her goal. Listening to the newcomer's story, William concluded that the target of the attack on the village was the girl and her sword. And here he was right. And at the same time, the entire race was exterminated for their sake. Such news, if it were true, could have harmed the entire population of the tower. Hayuk told William that his goal was not only to end the Nine, but to also destroy the 4 great beings. And he even swore to kill those who once made William an orphan. The Golden Lich's magic began to fade, and Baal asked what they were talking about. A deal was a deal, and William was willing to buy information from Hayuk. Only Hayuk had to prove this information here and now. Again, testing. How tiring. Didn't William believe Hayuk? Well, then we need to act differently. William was a merchant, and he could not trust half. Otherwise, he would not have earned anything. What a restless guy this is, and Cha-Jin decided to call Baal for help. Balu offered to vouch for him in exchange for 1 handshake. Baal agreed to 3 handshakes and acted as Cha-Jin's guarantor. Well, now William was ready to make a deal with the newcomer. Maybe in the future they will call each other by their real names. But for now they have only exchanged pseudonyms. And the first request as a sponsor was from Hyuk. It was necessary to get all the weapons that could be found in the tower and deliver them to him. It was strange for William to hear this from a spiritual master. But Cha-jin needed a weapon to level up his multi-class. Multi-class allowed Hyuk to use weapons as if he had been practicing them for 100 years. Cha-jin no longer seemed like the same person as 10 years ago, as he already possessed power incomparably greater than then. In any case, Hyuk's potential had yet to be revealed, and this became William's goal. William called the puppeteer and gave him the task of finding all the weapons that could be purchased on the 10th floor. He also gave instructions to pack everything as if it were for a special client and to put different guilds everywhere so as not to attract attention. A little while later, the puppeteer returned and brought what was ordered. He brought some strange suit and nothing else, which puzzled Hyuk a little. He asked for weapons and lots of weapons, and here was some kind of suit. But the puppeteer replied that inside was everything that Hyuk asked for. A little taken aback, Cha-jin asked again if everything was correct and how to understand it. This suit was nothing more than an interdimensional cloak. Its lining was directly connected to the subspace, and you could hide anything you wanted there. William warned that such a cloak was rare in the tower, and that Hyuk should be careful with it. A portal appeared on the street in the city, and the fool Sun Tae and his two comrades finally reached the 10th floor in the city. They were without money, and were worried about how they would continue to live without money. Sun Tae assured them that there was a branch of his guild here, and his brother would help him. And with joy on his face, he moved towards the guild's place, not yet suspecting what awaited him. But when he came to the place where the branch building used to stand, he became very angry because the building was in ruins and did not bode well. Confused about what happened, Sun Tae was upset. Two comrades surrounded him with questions about what to do without money, and his strength was already running out. They trusted him and now they didn't know what to do next. But Kim Seong-tae was silent and was thinking about what to do and how to proceed. Their quarrel was interrupted by someone's snort, and a nine-tailed fox, or rather her cub, appeared from around the corner. Song-tae was not in the mood to take in the fox, and he chased her away. He was furious and showed no desire to coddle the fox. He began to drive her away and became angry about it. He didn't understand what she wanted from him, and he became angrier and angrier. He kicked the fox so hard that the poor thing flew head over heels away from him. He decided to take out all his anger on her and continued kicking her. Time after time, the little animal flew away and received a kick in the side. The animal was getting hit harder and harder and was no longer able to react. He cursed everyone around him and did not stop beating the fox. Once again, when he was about to kick the animal, a sword flew between them and the fox's owner appeared. Of course it was Hyuk, and he didn't like this attitude towards the divine cub. Song-tae's leg was struck by a sword and he groaned in pain. The fox cub was exhausted and lay beaten on the ground, uttering muffled groans from the blows of Sun Tae's feet. Hyuk approached with the intention of avenging his pet's offense. It was not by chance that Hyuk and Vulcan came to rescue the fox cub. Cha-jin intended to go to the class change tower because his class was something of a bug, and he had to choose his true class. But before they could go any further, they needed to have a good rest, using William's money. But their path was interrupted by Baal, who pointed to a sign on the side and asked them to look at what was there. It was a message from Gumiho, the nine-tailed fox, asking for Hyuk's help. She was worried about her baby and asked to protect him from danger. And he, together with Vulcan, went to help this cub. Hyuk didn't expect to meet a baby Gumiho in such a place, and didn't expect this at all. In addition, a quest dropped out, and it consisted of 2 parts, the completion of which gave a reward for successful completion. Hyuk had encountered this strange guy somewhere before, but he couldn't remember who it was. Song-tae ordered his comrades to attack the stranger and finish him off. They were too slow for the walker, and he calmly jumped to the side to avoid their attack. Cha-jin himself was seriously angry, and now it was his turn to kick the fox's offender. Sun-tae didn't listen to him, and intended to avenge his injured leg and kill the newcomer. Hyuk asked Gumiho what to do with the offenders of his cub. The answer was 1, kill. Song-tae and his 2 comrades went on the attack against the travelers, and it was their last attack in their lives. Hyuk picked up Song-tae's severed leg and threw it towards the attackers. He simply returned the limb to its owner, which was flying right towards Song-tae. Neither Song-tae nor his comrades were able to dodge such an attack, and now there were 3 corpses lying on the street. Now the attention is switched to a cute creature. A baby Gumiho, but what to do with it? The little animal felt that they were talking about him and just smiled sweetly. But I needed to come up with a name for my pet, and the only thing I could think of was Deli, which is short for fox cub. Vulcan said that the fox would not like such a name, and she would grow up and kill Hyuk for it. Then let Vulcan voice his names, and he would only be glad about it. He suggested Horan, which meant to grow in color, but Cha-jin just shook his head. It would have been better to name the fox Miho, which meant the daughter of Gumiho. It is unlikely that she will accept such a name as Vulcan thought. The animal smiled, and this meant that it liked the name, and the question was closed. Well, the first part of the quest, saving the cub, was completed, and it was time to get the reward. But what is this? The fox mask was given out as a reward, and Hyuk was at a loss as to how he managed to get such an item. The fox mask, like the goblin mask, had its own special features. One of the main skills when activating the mask was charm. That is, immobilizing the enemy and controlling his actions. The second part of the quest was to feed the cub 999 liver jokes to restore the pet's health. But since this was the price for the mask, there was nothing left to do but complete the quest to the end. Since the quest issue was resolved, Vulcan decided to take a walk to begin completing the quest for Hyuk. When Vulcan left, Hyuk only said that if he didn't make it by morning, then he should come to the tower. And that was it. There was a strange difference between killing monsters and bringing them all alive at once. But Vulcan sensed something and began to peer closely at the city streets. And so it was. A strange eccentric with horns like a dragon appeared on the streets of the city, and he was clearly in the mood to kill. Dragons are cold-blooded, and if they swear to kill everyone in their path, then no one can stop them. It was impossible to allow the dragons to come to the 10th floor. Otherwise, everyone would be doomed to death. Vulcan knew and understood this. The townspeople were worried about the stranger who came at the same time for several days. All attention turned to Vulcan, and he realized that he had been discovered by this stranger. Oh yeah, the stranger mistook him for the demon who tried to destroy the village. Vulcan was surprised that he was mistaken for a demon, which he had never been in either his past or this life. Since this stranger mistook Vulcan for a demon, he had a low level to understand the master's power. The stranger didn't like the fact that he was considered a snotty dragon. The stranger became enraged and began to shout that how dare they call him a dragon and that he would kill Vulcan for this. Meanwhile, Hyuk arrived at the Tower of Magicians in the morning, where he planned to come, but Vulcan was not there yet. Hyuk was a little worried about Vulcan, and for some reason he didn't answer him. He entered the tower, but to his surprise, he found no one there. He was called out by the tower's inhabitant, and his name was Ken. Apparently Hyuk won't be staying here for long. He asked to use the Necromancer's room and planned to become spiritually stronger there. But before being given access to the room, Hyuk was asked to fill a crystal ball with magic to test his abilities. It was a strange assignment, but there was nothing to do and it had to be done. Chajin turned only a small part of the mana into the crystal ball and it began to fill with magic. Ken struggled to hold the ball as it was filled with magic, but suddenly the ball crumbled into pieces and was destroyed by the magic that was put into it. Ken couldn't believe that this newbie managed to destroy the crystal ball so easily and quickly. Once the test was passed, Chajin asked where he could find the Necromancer's room. Meanwhile, in the city, a battle was taking place between Vulcan and strangers from the dragon race. Exchanging blows, the two opponents tried to inflict wounds on the enemy and destroy him as quickly as possible, but they were of equal strength. Besides, Vulcan understood that Hyuk was far away and the mana began to separate from the body, and this was not the best state of affairs for him. But the stranger did not retreat from Vulcan and constantly caught up with him when he stopped to catch his breath. The stranger's horns haunted the city's inhabitants, and they called him a dragon, which made them even more angry and furious. He was undoubtedly of the dragon race, but why did he react like that to the dragon that he was called? There was a feeling that the soul and body were different, but how is this possible? Maybe it was a rebirth of the soul. Just like with Hyuk's body, Vulcan was in thought. This meant there was only one thing and the master had to find out. It's time to use demonic power against the dragon. Vulcan decided to check what kind of dough this stranger was made of and what was hidden inside him. Using the soul laser, he intended to hit the stranger, but the stranger managed to jump to the side and the attack passed him by. The stranger did not know this magic, but only the master thought so. After all, before him was none other than Vulcan, the spiritual master. This only encouraged the stranger to continue the battle. Well, the attack continued and now they were attacking Vulcan to kill him. The stranger also introduced himself. He was Hendrik, the Dragon Slayer. He was a dragon slayer and had a strong soul, which pleased Vulcan. But it was strange to see such a strong and powerful soul in this body, and what brought it here. After all, if this was the soul of someone who had risen to the 800th floor, then even Hyuk was helpless. In that case, you had to fight this dragon on your own. But Hendrik did not stand still and continued to attack. Spell after spell fell upon the stranger, but he emerged unscathed from each of the master's attacks. With the spell of the full moon, the stranger also repelled the master's attacks. Vulcan decided to attack the stranger with the Soul Link spell, and this surprised the enemy a little. It was amazing, because the master summoned the giant using magic. With the appearance of the giant, Vulcan decided to end the battle and return to his master, as he had used up all the mana from Hyuk. For some time, the stranger would calm down a bit and would not attack, and this was a chance to disappear unnoticed. But a rumble behind him distracted him from his thoughts, and he saw Hendrik, who had dealt with the giant. Vulcan and this enemy were now being sought by a stranger for revenge. Then in the next battle, he swore to personally cut him down. He gave his word to do this as soon as possible. In the Tower of Magicians, Ken led Hyuk to the Necromancer's room, and thought that this newcomer was not an equal opponent to him. Hyuk also assessed his guide. but this magician was too weak and could only serve as a guide and nothing more. Ken opened the door slightly and showed the necromancer's room to the newbie. The room was filled with corpses, chemicals, and a lot of books, which was the best dream for a necromancer. Ken left the room and said at the end that the newbie could call him if he needed help. The door closed, and Hyuk began to prepare to leave for the spirit world. At this time, Vulcan appeared, all excited and looking exactly like a 100-year-old man. Balkan cited overtraining and did not disclose his meeting with Hendrik. Apparently, the master made it in time, because everything was almost ready for the ceremony. Summoning the spirits of the demonic soldiers, Hyuk gave them the order to prepare everything for the beginning. Everything was ready for the transition to the spirit world to begin, and Chajin was giving the final instructions to the demons. Vulcan and Miho decided to move away from what was going to happen in the center of the room. The student gave instructions to Vulcan for perhaps the last time. His job was to protect Chajin's body until he returned to it. Vulcan promised to protect the body, but otherwise he was ready to take this body for himself. The separation of the soul from the body began, and Hyuk fell into a trance. Now the student's soul looked at its body, which meant the ritual was going according to plan. Miho was worried about her master, but Vulcan reassured her that everything was going according to plan. The ritual consisted of using the power of the soul instead of mana, and then it would be spiritually impossible to defeat Hyuk. To speed up the process, it was necessary to separate the soul from the body. In other words, die in this world and be resurrected in another. Judging by the state of the student's body, he entered the astral plane and penetrated the spirit world. The spirit passed from the world of the living to the world of spirits. Then someone's grumbling was heard behind Balkan, and he looked back. It was the voice of the spirits that began to penetrate the room and sought to take possession of the body. Vulcan was advised not to interfere with the process and would not be touched. But he didn't like it, and ordered his soldiers to guard Chajin's body. The kobold spirits began to grab souls and not allow them to reach the owner's body. The master struck these souls with a spiritual laser, but their number grew. Ken appeared at the door to see what was going on. He was horrified by what was happening in the necromancer's room and grabbed his head, not knowing what to do. Vulcan took notice of him and ordered him to help drive the souls away from his master's body. One of the spirits headed towards Chajin's body, and the fox Miho noticed it. From behind, no one was covering the body of their master, and this was a chance to occupy the body. Ken screamed and pointed to the body and the spirit that was heading to enter the body. Vulcan had to pull himself together, or else he could lose his body. But then Miho intervened and struck the spirit, preventing it from taking over the body. Miho used her power, and the spirit was defeated. The two stood and did not understand what had happened. All the spirits in the room suddenly stopped trying to take over Hyuk's body, all because they were charmed by Miho. Miho stood behind Hyuk and charmed the souls from the world where her master was. The volcano was struck, and now they all together could protect the owner's body from souls. Ken was also fascinated and stood rooted to the spot, admiring the little animal. Miho not only charmed the living, but she could also control souls. And suddenly a boss from the spirit world appeared in front of the body, and everyone in the room was shocked. This spirit was none other than Named. He was a strong and powerful warrior in life. If he wants to inhabit Chajin's body, then everyone will be in danger. He wanted to prevent this from happening, but Named attacked him, and he was already lying on the floor of the room. And the charm also affected Vulcan, and he could not move. Vulcan told Miho to stop him. There was no interest in the little animal, and Named asked not to disturb him. But Miho was determined to fight this monster. The skeleton was shocked by the aura of the divine beast and could do nothing. But Miho ran out of charms, and she couldn't charm anyone else. Named prepared to attack Miho, but his attack was repelled. Hyuk returned to his body and repelled the attack on Miho. And now the ghost was finished, and Hyuk attacked this impudent fellow with the aim of destroying him. Now the ghost no longer owned his immortal body, and it was broken. Having received spiritual powers, Chajin could now easily deal with even evil spirits. With his remaining hand, Named tried to hit the student, but nothing worked. Using the magic of 10 fingers, the walker attacked the ghost. The ghost was attacked by many bullets in the form of evil spirits, and was doomed to die again and forever. He was finished, and his body was pinned firmly to the floor of the room. Vulcan admired the strength of his student, who surpassed him many times over. Instead of the ghost's body, there was now a hole shining outward in the wall, and it was all over. The puppeteer came and was shocked by what happened to the Tower of the Magicians. What happened in the class change tower that could have caused this? Hyuk distracted him and asked him why he came. He brought a suitcase with the items he didn't find inside the cloak and handed them to Hyuk. Inside were various flasks with poisons and 2 magic crystals with the power of fire and ice. It was clear about the suitcase, but why was there a puppet there, and a strange one at that? The puppeteer decided to use this puppet to clear the 100th floor, since he had completed the last task of the manager of the 10th floor. He needed to become stronger and catch up with Hyuk for a rematch in battle. He was also grateful for Lich's advice, and he informed him that serious changes were coming due to Hyuk's conquest of the tower. By reaching the 100th floor, he could also become the best merchant on these floors. Good attitude and desire was a good sign for the puppeteer. He was similar to William in the way he had once reasoned. Hyuk promised to let him in on his plans with Lich if he proved his abilities. The puppeteer thanked him and left the tower. The two of them just watched the carriage in which the puppeteer was riding towards conquest. Well, the tower was finished and it was time for the travelers to leave it. But before leaving, it was worth absorbing everything that the puppeteer brought. Vulcan was shocked by his student. Of course he was going to eat it all, just as he did with the rest. The body's peculiarity allowed it to absorb objects and add their properties to itself. At the very moment when Hyuk was absorbing the objects, Ken came to his senses. The volcano greeted Ken, who had finally woken up. The tower manager asked where the fox was, and that participant in Balkan reassured him, but he already doubted whether they were intact. Hyuk painfully absorbed the fire crystal, his body burning with heat. The predator's traits were awakening in him, and Gumiho asked him not to show her cub this horror. Thanks to the fire crystal, he now had resistance to hallucinations, but there were still poisons left. Vulcan was concerned about Hyuk's condition because he was absorbing everything and only harming himself. Hyuk gained resistance to poison, frostbite, and hallucinations, but it wasn't enough to defeat the 9. Vulcan got all the orcs that were in the area. He got them from Miho. Now it was Miho's turn to have a snack. The two travelers thought that they had to give this baby a liver. Miho began to eat, and part of the quest began to be completed little by little. The quest required 999 livers. But so far we've only managed to collect 127, and our trio didn't need people's attention. Hyuk asked Vulcan who he had fought last night. It was strange not to notice the fluctuations in Vulcan's mana, because he was fighting one of the great creatures in terms of magical power. Hyuk was right. Last night the fight was with a representative of the dragon race. Fortunately, the battle was ended by suppression through spiritual superiority. Hyuk was coughing up blood and Vulcan thought he was turning into a demon again. But it was just a side effect of the poison. This is all the accumulation of predators inside the body whose poisons Cha-Jin took. Vulcan made sure that the owner did not continue to cough up blood, said that the dragon was unusual. The master told everything that happened to him that night, and it seemed to Hyuk that he had heard the name Hendrik before. It couldn't have been the one Hyuk saw in his past life. It was clear and obvious that this was the same killer who was in the tower then. Well, then Hyuk knew who we were talking about. Hyuk told Vulcan how he knew him, and that before becoming a dragon slayer, Hendrik killed everyone in his path, and destroyed not only dragons. And the last time Cha-Jin saw him was on the 700th or 800th floor before he died. What was there to talk about? I just needed to meet this Hendrik once and talk. Hyuk was getting worse, as he was unable to fully absorb the poison and 2 crystals, and was coughing up blood because of it. Vulcan offered to cleanse himself, but this meant the loss of the army of demon spirits, including Vulcan. Their argument was interrupted by Miho, who growled at the crowd of people around her. What was going on, and Hyuk and Vulcan didn't understand what was happening to the people around them. Someone behind Vulcan told him to speak more quietly, but it wasn't immediately clear who. Besides, he and Hyuk were discussing what was happening around them. The people seemed to be enchanted by something and did not react to Miho's roar, and this alerted the travelers. A girl was approaching them and they both turned their gaze to her. The girl greeted them and approached the 2 travelers. The girl was irresistible, and she repeated near Hyuk that she was pleased to meet him. So it was an Elijah, one of the 4 creatures. Hyuk immediately rushed to the attack and did not want any communication with her. Elika stopped Hyuk, saying that she did not come to him to fight. Cha-Jin was surprised at how quickly she stopped his attack before it could be used. She introduced herself to Phantom Mask once again. The girl was strong, and at first glance she didn't seem so. The girl touched Hyuk and felt his internal organs, which were damaged. Using healing magic, the girl instantly cured Hyuk. Vulcan also did not understand what was happening, and decided to make sure that everything was okay with the owner. Cha-Jin had a strange feeling. His body had completely recovered. The girl demonstrated this so that they would understand that she was not an enemy. Her name was Uriel, an Eli from the Muik tribe. Little by little, the people around began to come to their senses, but they did not understand what they were doing and how they ended up in different places. People were confused not only outside but also inside the city buildings. Once in Hyuk's room, the travelers asked Uriel what kind of tricks were there in the city. Elika replied that this was all done for the residents, so that other Elikas would not find out about her. She used a memory spell on all the residents, but not on Hyuk. Uriel's magic didn't work on strong-minded creatures, but then she noticed Miho. She asked who this cute creature was, and what the strange ghost was that was watching her closely. It didn't matter, and the travelers asked what brought such an unusual guest here. She came according to the prophecy of her people, and that she came to a man who hid his ugliness under a mask and threatened to kill great beings. She was sent to help him and his assistants carry out their plan of revenge. Her tribe received the prophecy and decided to send her to help. The prophecy was from a deity, or at least that's what her tribe thought. Apparently they were talking about Hyuk, but he had never heard of the Muik tribe. Throwing off her cloak, the girl exposed her back and Cha-Jin saw angel wings on her. Representatives of her kind have crossed all boundaries and become greedy creatures. They also exterminated everyone who went against them, after which they expel those who interfere with them from their tribe once and for all. And they also cut off the wings as a symbol of the deity race. In general, Mook is a tribe of outcasts like Uriel was, and according to the prophecy, it was he who was supposed to go against the 4 great beings and destroy them. It sounded good, especially the fact that the gods themselves offered them help, and Vulcan advised them not to refuse. Unfortunately, these Elijahs could not provide any help. The thing was that Utopia, the city of the High Elix, was against intervention and assistance. Otherwise, all the anger would have been transferred to Hayuk. He was in doubt. Should he take help, there was a lot of trouble. Or should he refuse help to his own detriment? What should he do? There was a way out, but on the condition that he would be helped in a difficult situation. The girl replied that she would be happy to help him in a difficult situation. In this case, it was decided to form an alliance between Hayuk and the Muik tribe. A grateful Uriel bowed to Chajin in gratitude. He asked her to close the eyes of demons and gods for a moment for one thing. By tearing off one feather from her back, she enchanted the room and fenced it off from strangers. Hyuk wanted to make sure he couldn't be heard. He cursed Baal, saying that he was a lustful and deceitful being, and why he needed this space was unclear to the Alika. So Hyuk introduced himself. His name is Chajin Hyuk. In his past life, he was the Death Star. It can't be, because it was the same Chajin who was in the tower when Uriel was there. Unexpectedly for everyone, she fell on her knees and apologized for her rudeness. Wait, it turns out this girl knew that Chajin 10 years ago. She was there 10 years ago when Chajin died. Next time she would do well to keep quiet before saying such things. She only said if he knew what would happen when he passed all the floors of the tower. Something in between awaited him between all these creatures. The great beings will not let anyone near them, and only they want to rule the tower. And they are capable of destroying anyone else in their path. That is, to kill at the beginning of the path, in other words. And Hyuk knew all this, which surprised the girl. And he was also convinced that the person in front of him was a traitor and a conspirator. With demonic charms, he grabbed her by the throat and intended to send her to where her wings were. Finally, she said that because of that incident, she became Muik and went against what was done to Chajin. His name was then Chajin Hyuk, Death Star, and the girl fell silent with tears in her eyes. It was he for whom she went against her own. Hyuk let go of the girl and they began to talk again. He apologized to her and asked her to forgive him for such behavior. The girl wanted to say something else, but Hyuk stopped her and realized that she was not from the heavenly race. Uriel thanked for understanding. She offered to arrange a meeting if he needed to meet with outcasts like her, and from other races too. She was right, and if she could lure them to her side, it would be good for the battle with the great creatures. Uriel suggested meeting again on the 190th floor of the tower in Dream City. They were not allowed to go above the 200th floor. That was his territory. From the 200th to the 300th floor were the domain of Emperor Tess. The girl asked for the opportunity to get dressed since she was half naked in front of Hyuk. If Hyuk had given the thing to the girl, there would have been marks from it on her. No, there wouldn't have been, but she was being closely watched. She came without things, and that was enough for Hyoku. But the girl thought about something else. She thought that he wanted to seduce her, but she was wrong. But he meant wings, or rather, to take a feather for himself. She tore off a feather and handed it to Hyuk, who was afraid that the wings would not grow back. But no one should know about this feather. Otherwise, the girl would be in big trouble. He was going to absorb this feather after the girl left. She said goodbye and walked out the door to her city. As soon as the door closed behind Uriel, he began to absorb. It was interesting what he would get after absorbing it, and what power he would gain or would not be able to absorb. Vulcan merely muttered that he should do as he wished. Vulcan picked up Miho and said that the owner's example was bad for her, and that she shouldn't pick up everything that fell from the floor. Vulcan did not stand nearby, and with Miho moved away from the owner to a distance so as not to be in the center of events. While Hyuk was devouring the feather itself, Vulcan was frolicking and having fun with Miho in his arms. Hyuk moved into his subconscious. He didn't understand where he was or what had happened to him. What was this place and why did he end up there? Apparently the body did not accept the divine power and a fight was ahead. A waterfall fell on him from somewhere above and he didn't know what to do with it. It's strange that one feather can produce such an effect. The water began to rise and Hyuk realized that it was a real waterfall. It was necessary to end the flow of water as quickly as possible before it swallowed him up. There was only one way out of this situation. Something was happening to Hyuk's body, and Miho and Vulcan noticed it. Something was wrong, and apparently Hyuk was using his soul as a wind weapon. Vulcan reassured Miho that if this was happening, it meant everything was going according to Chajin's plan. Miho was nervous and worried about her master's condition, and she wasn't the only one. What will be the result of absorbing this divine power? Meanwhile, in his subconscious, Hyuk tried to absorb the entire waterfall through a tube, but he chose the wrong device. He had to either let go of this power or absorb it. Therefore, it was necessary to use another method. He created a hungry and all-consuming monster to absorb power. Controlling the monster, he used it to absorb everything around him. The monster swallowed almost everything, and a grin began to appear on Hyuk's face. This meant that Hyuk was absorbing more and more divine power. Cha-jin remembered how he and William talked about the gluttony of the gods. Hyuk had Baal, but William had a dragon god that devoured everything and everyone in his path. It was he who was summoned by Cha-jin to absorb the power, because the monster had a peculiarity: insatiability. Finally, it was all over and the walker began to come to his senses. Vulcan was interested in whether he managed to absorb the power or not, in which case he would tease Hyuk. Everything turned out as expected. One feather now gave me the opportunity to generate energy within myself. He was only a man but with divine powers. If the gods find out about this, they will immediately come to kill Hyuk. One murder will not be enough for them, and they will most likely all come here. Even though he had acquired such strength, he would not have been able to resist the 4 creatures. It was necessary to prepare for battle with them. A few days later, Vulcan was practicing on the hunting field on the 10th floor. He collected orc carcasses for Miho so that the animal could eat and regain its strength. More and more kobolds collected orc corpses despite attempts to repel the demon attacks. The orcs even tried to attack, but it was useless for the spirits. The mountain of orcs grew quickly, and Miho was looking forward to eating the livers of these creatures. Even though the orcs fought back against the demonic soldiers of Balkan, they still faced the fate of death. Hyuk also did not stand aside and absorbed their bodies with his divine power. It was nice to see how the newbie became stronger with each battle, and Vulcan liked it. Among the demonic soldiers, a weak healer appeared who nullified any attempts to destroy them. But one had to be careful, because this healer possessed a weak but still divine power. Miho immediately ate all the killed orcs and was full this time, but the quest was not yet complete. 892 orcs out of the total number were caught and fed to Miho, and everything was supposed to end tomorrow. Next, I needed to meet this dragon slayer and see what he was like. Balkan said that he appeared in the same place as if he was expecting someone. It was necessary to finish this matter quickly and move on, but it was still necessary to wait for Haryu, so there was still time. Apparently, Hendrik, most likely like Uriel, was waiting for someone or wanted to tell something, having heard the voices of gods and demons. They came, and behind the alley there should be the one they were looking for. He was still standing in the middle of the street, waiting for something among the crowd of people. If Hendrik wasn't expecting Hyuk, then he would have to fight this representative of the dragon race. Vulcan didn't want to go with Cha-jin after his last encounter with that stranger. And Hendrik, like Uriel, was waiting for someone who would fulfill his wish. And the gods told him that he needed to look on the 10th floor. The trio approached the stranger and asked if he was the same Hendrik everyone was talking about. It was Hyuk that Hendrik was waiting for, informing him that he had been accepted. This stranger had no shortage of such impudence, but Hyuk thought it best to remain silent. There were too many people around, and Hyuk was asked to follow a stranger. They came to a dead-end alley and stopped. The trio did not understand what this meant. The dragon slayer opened a portal and nodded his head, indicating to follow him. There was nothing left to do but follow him, and they entered the portal after the stranger. They found themselves in a place called Subspace on the 10th floor. Hendrik asked Cha-jin if he was ready to go all the way with this stranger. Hyuk just laughed at Hendrik's idea, calling it a stupid idea. The dragon slayer became angry at this, and how dare this newbie say such a thing to him. Vulcan warned his master that a strong warrior stood before him, and that it would not be so easy to fight him. It was a monster in human form and in a dragon's shell. The walker had his own plan, and he told his master not to interfere since he was afraid. It didn't matter what kind of monster was in front of him as long as he knew its situation, which was similar to the one Hyuk himself found himself in. After all, the goal of conquering the tower and revenge was to destroy everyone who was involved in the death of Cha-jin, and not only the great powerful creatures. That's why Hendrik didn't reach the level to be on the same team with Cha-jin. Hendrik did not like this, and considered it foolish to go alone against all the great beings. Behind the deaths of Hendrik and Hyuk were not only the great beings, but also someone else. But it turned out to be true, which the stranger admitted, although he was even more angry about it. It turns out that Uriel told about the seer, who was Hyuk. This meant that she had already reached her own people, which made the walker happy, but Hendrik was thirsty for battle. He decided to test what the walker was capable of and prepared to attack. Hendrik only asked the name of the person he was going to teach a lesson. Hyuk introduced himself as Cha-jin Hyuk, or Cha-jin Hyuk, Death Star, but their squabble was interrupted by the voice of an old man, who was grumbling at the dragon warrior. Hendrik didn't expect to see anyone else here, and Hyuk asked who it was and what kind of old man was standing next to them. It was the blacksmith who first entered this place, and it was he who forged Hendrik's sword. Hyuk and Vulcan were shocked because this old man was a goblin from the Haryu race. The old man looked like an old goblin, seasoned in battle, but not yet too old for battle. The old man's gaze was now turned to the Trinity, and he was surprised to see other strangers here besides the dragon warrior. There is no way this old man survived the moment when Haryu village was burned down. The old man was amazed by the stranger's impudence, and that the old man was alive, not understanding what they wanted from him. Hyuk asked how he survived that disaster on the 100th floor. The old man mistook him for the one who set fire to the village and decided to attack the stranger. But his attack was thwarted by Hendrik. He stopped the attack because Huck also had a history like Hendrik. But then Vulcan intervened in the conversation and asked if the old man knew a goblin named Har-Yu. The old man was shocked that these strangers knew Har-Yu, and he asked if she was alive. And the old man told the story of that terrible day when the village was burned. The old man then fell ill and stayed in his blacksmith shop. After all, age was taking its toll. The old man talked for a long time and then asked if everything was okay with Har-Yu. Hendrik asked if she was as strong as they said. But Hyuk assured him that she was stronger than all of them in a single fight. She was Hyuk's ally and went with him until the end. Soon she will join them. The old man thanked Cha-Jin for saving Har-Yu. The old man introduced himself, and his name was Geno, the goblin blacksmith, and he promised to help Hyuk with his skills in any way he could. He also asked to help him and Har-Yu restore the goblin village, to which Hyuk gave his firm consent. But Geno was also grateful to Hyuk for Har-Yu, because only Vulcan understood that the mask was a gift from the girl to her future husband. As a token of gratitude, he also offered to take all the equipment he had, since these were goblin weapons much stronger and more powerful than those that the Lich had obtained. It was time for Hendrik and the trio to move on, and they said goodbye to the old man. But Geno didn't answer. For the first time in so long, he was able to sleep peacefully, having learned that besides him, there were other surviving goblins. As soon as they stepped outside the forge, Hendrik attacked Huck again. But Cha-Jin had the situation in hand and reacted to the attack in time without getting hurt. The reaction was not bad, and Hendrik was pleased with this from the walker. But you can't fool Hyuk, and he knew that he himself would check this simpleton. He also attacked Hendrik just to bait him into a fight. Now the demonic soldiers had also been summoned to fight, and the battle was gaining momentum. It wasn't so easy to attack the Dragon Slayer, and something had to be changed in the attacks. With his sword, he easily dealt with Cha-Jin's attacks. These attacks were too weak to hit Hendrik, and he was pleased with that. And even Hyuk's attacks themselves did not bring any results. It was strange that the killer deviated even from the sword technique using multiclass. Attack after attack, the battle continued, and nothing could be done about it. Hendrik still couldn't determine whether Hyuk's class was a mage or a necromancer. It didn't matter, because to get the full effect, the monster on the 10th floor had to be awakened. Chains of demonic power began to envelop Hendrik's body, preventing him from maneuvering. You should have fought the first spiritual master before drawing such conclusions. Hyuk decided to summon the monster Gungnir, which had fallen on this floor. This mighty orc was killed in less than a second in a fight with Hook. By ordering Hendrik to attack, Hook gave the orc strength to attack. Vulcan stood next to the killer and held him with the demon chain so that he could not dodge the attacks. Hendrik's sword was unusual and easily broke Vulcan's spell. The sword was a dragon destroyer, and it could hurt Hyoku very badly. The attack was aimed at Hyoku, and he was unable to block it. And Vulcan got it from this stranger. If this technique was the strongest, then nothing good was to come. There was nothing more to talk about, and he decided to finish with Cha-Jin. He launched his most powerful attack and was determined. But Hyuk had another trump card and decided to use it. The last word was his, and he was preparing to attack this stranger. The magical attack ability was pitiful compared to the sword technique. But it was in vain to think so, and Hendrik began to understand that he could not escape the attack. Hendrik's body was hit by multiple arrows from the 10 Fingers blasts. It was necessary to finish him off, but the chance was missed. Although the use of the mask caused a side effect, there was no other way out. The fire element, thanks to the absorbed crystal, gave strength for the attack. But the moment was lost, and Hendrik broke free and was able to dodge the attack. Hendrik, exhausted from blood, demanded that the battle continue, and he called upon the fire dragon to protect him. And now the initiative passed to the side of the killer. Huck did not expect this turn of events, and was surprised by Hendrik's abilities. He could still predict the attack, but his reaction speed was not enough to fight the dragon. There was nothing left to do but apply the fox mask. Perhaps the mask will help to attack and end this battle once and for all. The fox mask was on, and Hyuk prepared for his attack and decided to end the battle. Using the fox mask, Huck continued his attack on Hendrik. Hendrik found this funny, and also decided to go on the attack and continue the battle. Although the dragon warrior was strong, Cha-Jin did not lag behind him and tried to fight on equal terms. The exchange of attacks continued, and the battle continued with powerful and strong force on both sides. And although the mask gave the walker strength and speed, it was not so easy to resist the dragon from the 800th floor. Hyuk would occasionally catch the opportunity to attack the stranger, but he would always slip away from the attack. Hendrik also used magic against the walker, which Cha-Jin didn't like. He was already getting tired of it. He decided to use the enchantment to delay Hendrik's attacks for a while and land his blow. And he cast the fox mask spell before Hendrik could launch another attack. For a moment the spell worked, and the dragon warrior became petrified and could not move for a certain moment. Something incomprehensible was going on in his head, and this made him angry. He should have concentrated, and all the spells would have been useless to him. In any case, Hendrik's immobilized body served as a good springboard for Huck to strike. Cha-Jin decided to attack with a punch instead of a weapon. since at this distance it was not needed. He decided to use Kyung-hoon's technique and strike his opponent. Putting all his strength and abilities into the strike, Cha-jin struck Hendrik with all his might. With this attack, he decided to finish off his opponent once and for all. But his strength was at the limit of his capabilities. All the power was concentrated in the fist, and this blow was supposed to decide everything. The impact caused everything around to collapse, and no one could stand up to such an attack. Even Vulcan fell to the ground from such a powerful surge of mana and magic from the blow. And although Cha-jin stood firm after his blow, he couldn't move. His whole body was exhausted, and blood started flowing from his eyes. Vulcan was worried about the condition of his owner. He did not look in the best condition. All his strength was spent, and Hyuk stood only because his body froze, but did not obey him. Hoping that Hendrik was finished by this blow, Hoke thought it was all over. Hendrik, although he had been beaten, still had the strength to attack, but he lost the battle and accepted Hoke's test as a pass to the team. But Hyuk countered by saying that he hadn't passed the test and wasn't accepted into Cha-jin's team. Since Hendrik failed the test, he decided to continue the fight and finish the battle. It was now time for Hendrik to deal the final blow to Huck, and he was serious about being on the Walker's team for conquest and revenge. Hyuk could only say that he shouldn't attack since he was powerless to repel the attack. Having summoned the fire dragon, Hendrik prepared for another attack on Hyuk. This attack could have put an end to the conquest of the tower, and Hyuk could have died this time forever. The moment of truth has come. Just one more moment and that's it. He only said that Hendrik had been accepted and had lost consciousness. A couple of days later, Vulcan was already making fun of Huck because he was defeated in a fight with Hendrik. Hyuk was angry and shouted at Vulcan to shut up already. He wanted to use magic, but his whole body was giving off hellish pain, and he couldn't move for the foreseeable future. Hyuk was only able to survive an attack of such power thanks to the feather he absorbed from Uriel. There was a knock on the door, and Hendrik entered the room to visit Huck. Vulcan did not expect such a guest, and looked at him with disdain. Remembering his last encounter with this stranger, Vulcan asked Hendrik for forgiveness for his behavior. Hendrik didn't hold a grudge against him, and now they were sort of in the same boat. So why hold a grudge? Vulcan was relieved to hear this, and agreed that the feud could be forgotten. It was strange to hear this from this dragon, of course. But apparently he is a normal person in everyday life. Vulcan apologized for Hook's appearance. Apparently Hendrik overdid it with the fire dragon attack. Hearing such talk, Cha-jin became angry and asked to attack him to continue the battle. Maybe they would fight another time, but now there was no need for that. The conversation would be about something else. And it was about Hendrik's story about who killed him and who he was in his past life. And the saddest part of the story will be the last battle before his death. And he began to slowly tell that long ago his family and homeland were attacked by dragons and were exterminated by them. Without knowing why, he remained alive, while everything around him was burning and his family was dead. There were many dragons and cries for salvation were in vain, because apparently they exterminated all the inhabitants. His hatred from that moment on was towards everyone who had horns and scales. After all, his path was to conquer the tower, and he strove to conquer it just like Hyuk does now. With each floor, he became stronger. On the 600th floor, he killed a dragon for the first time, and from there were only more of them. But upon reaching the higher floors, the system issued punishments in the form of being demoted to floors and reducing the walker's abilities. So that's why Hyuk was able to survive the Lich's attack. And Cha-jin asked which floor he was able to reach despite the punishment. Hendrik replied that he was only able to reach the 900th floor of the tower. It was this floor that put an end to Hendrik's wanderings. The 900th floor was something insurmountable for Hyuk. The whole point was that when conquering floors after the 600th, many races began to hunt him in order to destroy him. And unfortunately, he couldn't cope with them all, as there were too many of them. And seeing no other outcome, he decided to accept death. But this was not easy either. So in this body, he will now take revenge. The story was finished, and Huck said that it was definitely about Hendrik. Hendrik asked when they would continue climbing up the tower, but Hyuk still had to wait for Har-Yu. Well, how could Hendrik leave such a weak Hyuk, who irritated Cha-jin with his ridicule? He was leading up to the fact that at the last and difficult moment, he would be left alone and without help. Trying to fight alone was too presumptuous for one of them. Hendrik was right, and it was necessary to attract the allies and all those who wanted to go with them to the end. And then Hyuk suggested Hendrik to create his own guild, where all these creatures would be accepted for the battle of their lives. Hyuk was a little shocked, because he hadn't even thought about it. Meanwhile, on the 600th floor of the Songguk Guild building, someone's footsteps were heard in the main hall. Carmen walked to her brother in the hall, where he was watching what was happening on the 10th floor. Kane looked over the report of what had happened to the city on the 10th floor. This was a report from the White Swallow's 10th floor guild. All the chaos was caused by one person, which alarmed Carmen and Kane, because they understood where this was leading. If you believe the information from Beck Hollio, it didn't look like an organization or a guild. But how is this possible? Because the punishment will be severe even on such a small floor, and even the Star 9 cannot handle it. They remembered themselves, because they were the same when they conquered the tower at the very beginning of their journey. Perhaps this was just an assumption, but the appearance of such a person could not be ruled out. Otherwise, the method of rooting out the roots, as it was 10 years ago, was always on everyone's lips, and was applicable to Hayuk. But it was necessary to act carefully, and it was worth hiring a killer for the job. And it wasn't hard to find such a person in the Assassin's Guild. And this was one of the female assassins who went over to the side of the mercenaries. Meanwhile, Hyuk's company was discussing forming a guild. But there was a catch. Hyuk was on Bale's quest. He needed to make his own name before he reached the 100th floor. And if Hendrik were to lead the guild, he would not want to bury his name under its leadership. Nothing could be simpler, because the head of the guild would be Huk, and Hendrik would listen to him. It was unexpected to hear this, and to become the commander of the dragon. After all, Hendrik was not confident in his own strength, and Huk was a good necromancer and could lead an army. But Hyuk was weaker than Hendrik at the moment, and would he be able to follow the orders of the weakest? Instead of answering, Hendrik knelt before Huk as a sign that he was ready to serve him. This answer was strange for Hayuk, but still acceptable. This behavior was due to the reproaches and insults that Hendrik had to endure in his past life. He was so angry that by the end of his journey, he was powerless to resist. And in such a state, no one helped him, so he was ready to serve Hyuk. Then everything was decided, and Chajin would lead the guild. Hendrik was pleased with Huk's decision, and thanked him for it. Now it would be worth coming up with a name for the guild to register it. Since Uriel's prediction was about a man who would cause chaos, the name of his guild could only be Opposition. It was possible to register a guild right away, but you had to talk to the puppeteer and do it for free. At the entrance to the company, Lich was greeted by Hyuka Halcyon. Hyuk had forgotten that the puppeteer had left and that Halcyon was now in charge of the branch. Everything would be fine, but what was Ken from the Tower of Magicians doing here? The tower was under repair, and Ken often hung out with the company now, as they had become friends with the manager. It didn't matter, and Hayuk said that he wanted to form a new guild as soon as possible. Halcyon could not resist, and flatteringly said that many would want to join the Ghost Mask Guild. But there was a condition. To create a guild, at least 2 were needed. And then Vulcan and Hendrik came up from behind. The issue was closed. The manager and Ken were amazed beyond measure, as it was the first time they had seen a dragon so close. The whole point was that Huk became a celebrity, but Hendrik didn't understand who it was. The guild members to whom invitations had been sent were also supposed to appear. Geno received the letter when he was busy forging another weapon. The puppeteer received a letter from a puppet during his next conquest of a floor. Haryu received the notification at the time of clearing the boss's room on the 10th floor. Lich was recalculating his expenses and income when he received a notice from Hayuk about the collection. It talked about creating a guild, and William was interested in how it would all turn out. While they were all about to arrive, Hayuk was fighting the orcs to complete the quest for Miho. Using magic and the 10-finger attack spell, he knocked down orcs left and right in droves. It was necessary to complete this quest as quickly as possible and not think about it. Hendrik asked why there was a mountain of monsters, and Hayuk replied that he had another quest from the Fox Gumiho. The quest was completed, and a bright beam of light pierced the clear day at the moment when Miho ate the 999th liver. And what happened next frightened not only Huk, but Hendrik also felt uneasy. The reward for the quest was to find the fox's true form. Vulcan called out to Chajin and pointed towards Miho at the strange figure in the air. It couldn't be, because a girl's figure appeared in front of him. Miho's real image, instead of a fox, was that of a little girl, because she was still a child. Miho fell from a height, and Hyoku had no choice but to catch her in his arms. The girl in Hayuk's arms began to call him Daddy, but no one expected this. And she called him Dad, because the reward for completing the second part of the quest was closeness with the fox, and now she was his pet. And he was her dad. At the moment when the 3 of them and Miho were perplexed, Haryu appeared. She asked where her brother got such a cute daughter. Hyuk asked where Haryu came from and how to understand all this. Miho became scared and asked who this girl was and why she was here. Hyuk demanded that Gumiho explain what all this meant. Gumiho only replied that Miho was now his pet, but for everyone she would be his daughter. Vulcan made fun of Huk, and Hendrik thought that people were already giving birth to foxes. Haryu thought that her handsome and strong brother had a daughter, and maybe he also had a girlfriend. This thought did not give her any peace. Her thoughts were interrupted by Hendrik, who introduced himself as an ally of Huk. He met her gaze, and then began to understand that this girl had something planned against him. She remembered that in that fire when her village burned down, she saw something similar. A man in the form of a dragon was at the scene at the time. This meant there was no doubt that in front of her was the one who destroyed her family. With screams and drawn sword, she rushed at the stranger for revenge. But Hendrik managed to repel the attack, not understanding why the girl decided to attack him. He turned to Hayuk to explain what all this meant and why the girl was acting like this. But Hayuk told him to deal with her himself and not interfere. But Haryu could get hurt, to which Chajin said that she could handle it herself. While the entrance exam to the guild, The dragon took this fight and attacked the girl, causing her to fly far away from where the others were standing. This made Haryu even more angry, and she rushed to attack no matter what. Attack after attack went on between these strong warriors, and although Haryu was strong, the attacks were still not reflected as strongly as desired. And with another attack, she again flew a good few dozen meters and fell to the ground. This time, the demoness whose sword Haryu had decided to lend her power to attack and fight this dragon. It was the famous Sword of Ego, the Dragon Slayer, and Haryu attacked the stranger with it. The vengeful girl only wanted the death of the dragon that destroyed her village. She attacked him, attack after attack. Regardless of the counterattacks, she wanted to finish him off as quickly as possible. But no matter how hard Haryu tried, Hendrik repelled all attacks with one hand and did not feel tired. It was a shock to her, but she continued the attack. But attacks were also flying in her direction, from which she received bruises and her body gradually began to be exhausted from the attacks. And the dragon's sword was more powerful and stronger than Ego's sword, so the attacks were more powerful. Haryu asked for the power of the Dragon Slayer's sword in order to take revenge. This is exactly what the demoness was waiting for, and decided to transfer her power for the battle. With the power of the demon now, a new influx of attack was expected on Hendrik. Now in front of him was a swordswoman, the owner of the Ego sword with the power of a demon. The attack power increased, and now Hendry was receiving the strongest attacks in his direction. Apparently the sword gave the girl strength, and her strength increased significantly. The owner of the sword was in danger, and something had to be done to free her from the sword. He grabbed the girl by the hand and demanded that she release the sword from her hands. After all, the power of the sword was beyond the girl's control and could only cause harm. But the girl, remembering the village, immediately became angry and squeezed her hand with the sword even tighter. She will only let go when she avenges her burned village. It became clear to Hendrik that the girl, like him, hated dragons. But it was necessary to put an end to this battle and not harm Haryu. It was necessary to prevent the girl from becoming part of the sword and not turning into a bowl of energy for demonic power. We'll have to use a spell, but despite the pain, the girl will remain alive. And the entire attack was directed at the girl, which she was unable to dodge. Haryu dropped her sword from the blow and lost consciousness. From the attack, she lost consciousness and was transported to her childhood memories, namely to the forest near the goblin village. The local boys were playing football and asked Haryu to take the ball. But the memories changed, and instead of asking the ball, the children asked why only she survived and the others did not. Children turned into ghosts and asked to be saved, and the corpses of the slain goblins poured into her memories and asked why they died and she did not. She herself began to ask herself this question: why her and not them? The spirit of the sword answered this question, that she was destined to survive and avenge all her brothers. The man in the person of Haryu was supposed to survive, and use the demon's sword to take revenge on the enemies of the village. The only one who can take revenge on them is Haryu. Now she must continue the attack and fight the one who destroyed her village. Hendrik was surprised how after such an attack she was able to get up and still have a lot of strength to attack. Haryu's sword and power caught up with him and almost struck, but her strength left her. Apparently, the forces were at their limit, and this was not enough for revenge yet. And they, together with Hendrik, collapsed to the ground, exhausted by the battle. Vulcan and Hayuk immediately rushed to them to find out if everything was okay with them. Hendrik was fine, because the sword had lost its power before the blow was struck. Due to exhaustion, the only convenient way to regain strength was to let Haryu sleep. The extreme use of the sword's power had greatly exhausted her body. She needed to rest properly. Miho was near the bed and was worried about Haryu. A little further away stood Hyuk and was talking about something with Hendrik. Hendrik was not allowed to see her yet, until she got used to the fact that he was her ally. Hayuk invited him to go with him to the second floor, and there he said that until Haryu accepted him as an ally, he should live on the second floor for now. Hendrik thanked him for his concern, but Hyuk was not concerned about him, but about the goblin girl. Haryu began to come to her senses, and the first thing she saw was Miho in front of her. The girl remembered that it was her brother's daughter from Gumiho after completing the quest. Hyuk came up and asked if she was awake and how she felt. Haryu said she was feeling better, and Miho greeted him as her dad. But having said these words, she switched off again. Apparently, she only had enough strength for that. Hyuk warned Miho not to call Haryu Uni's girlfriend or she might die. Haryu was resting and didn't hear Miho and Chajin's conversation. After some time, Haryu felt better and was collected before the road. All her belongings, such as a broken sword and the clothes on her, were collected. Miho also said that she was going, but she called Hyuk Appa instead of Dad. It's clear that Haryu taught her this. Who else would have come up with this idea? She explained everything to Miho kindly, that it was not Dad, but his older brother. Hayuk handed everyone strange scrolls and told them not to tear them apart until the right moment. These were teleportation scrolls, but Vulcan did not receive such a scroll and began to wonder why he did not have a scroll. Without answering, Hayuk packed Vulcan into the soul vessel and took him with him. Before being placed in the vessel, Vulcan was furious that he was being used as an item and put into inventory. In an instant, the entire group, using scrolls, moved to the hall that the Golden Lich had prepared. Everyone was shocked by what they saw, because the hall was rightfully luxuriously made, but all this was only thanks to magic and money. Haryu froze when she saw a goblin standing next to her, not pretending to notice her. It was Geno, Haryu's grandfather. Yuk and Vulcan were relieved that Haryu had finally met a member of her kind. Their joy was interrupted by the noise of the doors opening and the appearance of the Lich. Displeased with the other's lateness, he entered with the puppeteer and was angry that someone did not arrive on time or early, but the whole reason was to bring the goblins together. The puppeteer realized that before him was Chajin, the Death Star who had died 10 years ago. The whole group sat at the table and discussed the information that they had managed to collect during the battles. It turns out from the information that 4 creatures destroyed Huck and Hendrik, and also destroyed the village on the 100th floor. It all sounded strange. And now there were 3 witnesses to the crimes, and all of them were now in this room. This means that no one had any doubts about the guild's goal of revenge. It was time to turn this whole rotten world inside the tower upside down. Now it was decided to continue conquering the tower, but now as a guild. Everyone left the hall and Haryu called out to her grandfather, who had come out before everyone else and was about to leave. She hoped that Geno would go to conquer the tower with everyone else, but the answer was different. But the old man had no place next to the rest of the raid participants. The whole point was that the anger of both softened when they saw each other, and this could have become an obstacle to revenge. After all, it was impossible to allow the goblin's last blade to become dull because of an old man like him. And so that no one would look for him, he changed his name from Geno to Mu Young, that is, the one who has no name, and now he was an ordinary blacksmith. But Haryu wanted to remember his revenge and never forget it. Since Geno, that is Mu Young, was no longer a goblin, Hyuk had a task for him. He approached Lich and informed him that he would establish a guild base on the 100th floor, but Mu Young needed to survey the goblin village first. Lich was not against it, but he asked who would head its branch, and the answer was obvious: Geno. Indeed, this old man knew the surroundings of the village well and lived on the 100th floor for many years. The puppeteer was sent along with the old man to help him settle there. The puppeteer agreed, and they set off on their journey together with Mu Young. Once the goals of each guild member have been determined, it is time to move forward. Since they are called a confrontation, it is worth justifying this name. They moved to the safe zone of the 11th level and found themselves in a village. The last one to emerge from the portal was Hyuk, deep in thought. The tower on the 11th floor marked the beginning of their journey to conquer the tower. Now everyone who killed him in his past life will be avenged. No matter how strong they all become, he will destroy them all. But Hyuk didn't immediately notice the girl who came out of the portal behind him. This girl was a bounty hunter and decided to watch these people for now. This continued until the 50th floor, which the guild members reached without any problems. Rumors of reaching this floor spread faster than the heroes conquered the floors. On the 50th floor, guards prevented further conquest of the tower, but it was no longer important. Against the living guards, Hyuk summoned the guards of the dead, and they began to fight just as they once did when they were alive. They had only one order: to destroy everyone who stood in the way of the master. And all the guards rushed at Hyuk, but how naive they were to attack the Necromancer with his army. After all, in addition to the army, comrades also covered each other, so the guards had zero chance of defeating the guild members. A representative of the Royal Guild came out to the noise of the battle and could not believe his eyes. An army of the dead stood before him. It was strange to him that it was under his rule that these demons appeared and that he would have to fight them. And he went to attack Chajin's army, but it was too late. Although in his anger he was able to kill several dozen soldiers, the army did not become weaker from this. But on the contrary, having decided to summon the golems, this naive head of the Guild of the Sacred Kingdom intended to deal with the impudent ones. Ordering his golems to attack and tear the insolent ones apart, the leader froze in horror. Hendrik cut them down with one blow, and there was nothing left to defend the kingdom with. It was a shock for the leader to see a dragon alongside a bunch of simple newbies. Before he knew what had happened, Hyuk appeared behind him and lifted the man onto his back. He needed information about the guild that lived on the 50th floor. Its name was Shikari. Hyuk could not become the enemies of the Star Nine. They became them 10 years ago when they killed his body. All the guilds that met on the floors were destroyed, and the Confrontation Guild moved on. It was time to do as much damage as possible to the guilds under the patronage of the Pellans and deal them a crushing blow. With each victory, more and more people began to fear the ghostly mask, and more rumors were born from this. Baal's quest was in full swing because now Hyuk had seen everything and everyone up to the 100th floor. Vulcan and Hendrik were not pleased to hear that information was being thrown around so easily. "I'm just tired of looking for information about the Nine. Let her look for it herself now." Although the magical power was not very pumped up, but in combination with the other characteristics, it gave a chance to deal with everyone already at this level. But there was no normal weapon for attacks. Hendrik suggested that Hyuk still had a weapon from Mu Young, and it was much better than what Lich got. This reminder upset Haryu, and Miho scolded Hendrik for it. I'll have to go to where I could get some weapons and cheer up Haryu a little. There it meant the black market on the 51st floor, and there you could sometimes buy rare items. He promised to buy something if he liked it. Miho also wanted something from the auction, and for Appa to buy it for her. Their sweet conversation was interrupted by the noise of a falling thing that resembled a bomb. There was an explosion, and all participants were thrown to the sides by the shockwave. They aimed at Hyuk point blank and tried to finish him off, but he managed to dodge. It was a shot from a plasma pistol, but not from this world. The attacks continued, and the buildings were destroyed each time. The bounty hunter targeted the guild members with the intention of destroying them. Hendrik was the first to try to destroy this uninvited guest, and put an end to the attacks. Hendrik's blow was, to his surprise, deflected by some transparent thing, and the attack failed. He couldn't believe his eyes, and when the huntress put on her helmet, he mistook her for a machine. Having repelled another attack of the dragon, the girl continued to fight as if nothing had happened. Now Haryu and Miho joined the battle and attacked the girl in the suit. The simultaneous attack did not lead to anything good, and only made the air shake. The stranger's suit worked, and she floated in the air from the jet wings on her back. Numerous bombs rained down on the girls from above, and the explosions caused considerable injuries to them. Everyone was lying on the ground, and the huntress was hovering above them, preparing for new attacks. She expected more from this guild and was upset that she had weak opponents in front of her. But how wrong she was. Hook and Hendrik both charged at her, but she dodged. Both missed, but the attack continued with renewed vigor. The huntress pointed her weapon at Hendrik just as Hook swung his weapon, but both reacted in time and were safe. Before the attack continued, the huntress decided to tell the two something important. The girl's name was Shane, a bounty hunter, and she came here for trophies. Hook and Hendrik were shocked by the news that such a strange guest had come to visit them. This means that someone ordered them, and it was necessary to find out from her who it could be. She only added that they are her trophies. Hendrik just grinned and began to attack the girl. But she stopped him and said that she was not going to kill them now, but there was a condition. She suggested making a bet that would be beneficial to all of them. The conditions were that if they won the battle with her, she would tell who paid for their heads. Because of such impudence, Hendrik wanted to cut off the impudent girl's head, but Hook stopped him. If 9 or 4 creatures paid for their heads, then without information they would be in very bad shape. This meant that it was necessary to hear the terms of the bet and make it. She enjoyed fighting the strongest creatures, and the bet was about that. The bet was to fight her. The bet didn't sound strange, but the huntress had one condition. The main condition was to keep all 3 participants in the battle alive. Something else was strange. It was fighting at half strength. And also, there shouldn't be any call from Hyuk. Hendrik liked the fact that even with her limbs cut off, she would be able to tell them everything. The conditions were agreed upon, and the battle could begin. The helmet was on autopilot and began attacking Hyuk in order to defeat him. It was too easy for him, and he didn't pay any attention to it. Besides everything else, the huntress herself was attacking him, apparently deciding to deal with him first. But the dragon was already visible behind her and certainly did not intend to let her go so easily. Hyuk's spiritual shield was put up in time. It turned out to be a hologram of a girl's figure, and Hendrik struck Cha-Jin's shield. The blow hit the Necromancer's shield and was about to shatter. Both participants in the battle almost injured each other. The girl did not understand why they attacked at random or simply wanted to destroy her alone. Hook grabbed Hendrik by the clothes and demanded to know what this all meant. They argued with each other about what to do with this stranger. The girl got tired of this and called out to them. A strange thing was visible above the girl, and it seemed to be aiming at the 2 disputants below. That's right, it was a strange weapon, and Shane reported that it was a railgun. From all appearances, this thing did not bode well for the Necromancer and the dragon. A railgun blast scattered them apart. But Hyuk used teleportation, and they found themselves further away from the battle site. Hendrik was angry and asked why they ran away. But Hyuk covered his scream with his hand and pointed to the drone that was flying nearby. Shane's weapon was clearly out of this world, just like she was. It is quite possible that she came from a parallel dimension, since the tower was connected to many worlds. Since her weapon was much higher in level than the one here, in order to win, it was necessary to come up with something else. Meanwhile, Shane was looking for the fugitive to continue the attack. Hyuk appeared as suddenly as he disappeared, and hovered in the air in front of the girl. He decided to transfer some of his power to Hendrik, and see what would come of it. Hyuk cast spell after spell to make everything work, and didn't pay attention to the huntress. She thought that he was attacking her with something strong, but he simply decided to attack her with a spell. But she didn't think that for long. Hendrik felt a surge of new strength and went on the attack against Shane. She repelled the attack and thought she had nailed her opponent, but it was not so. But she couldn't believe it. In front of her stood either a demon or a dragon, and this was no longer an equal opponent for her. The blow and lightning attack caused a bruise to the girl, but not a fatal one. Hyuk transferred his power to Hendrik, and also endowed him with the skills and buffs of a huntress. Now it's time to show your true mastery of the multi-class spell. and now Hendrik's attacks were faster, stronger, and more powerful than before. Although the girl tried to repel the dragon's attacks, it was all in vain. Blow after blow, attack after attack, the battle went on, and the huntress began to understand that her strength was already running out. It was now time to use the Fire Dragon spell, and this attack was her last. The Thunder Dragon had colossal attack power, and for a living person, it was sheer death. Shane managed to fly up, and the sword hit the ground without causing any damage. But Hendrik had apparently stepped into one of the traps, and now something worse was in store for him. It was a nuclear mine that could destroy the dragon once and for all. Even Hayuk managed to react to avoid ending up at the epicenter of the explosion. The shot and the bullet got him, hitting him in the chest from behind. The dragon could no longer fight, and the girl decided to finish off the ghostly mask since he was wounded. She was wrong to think so, because the dragon was still alive and was eager to attack. Hendrik transformed into a red dragon and was full of fury and strength for battle. Now the girl began to understand that she had been deceived, and that not even a small part of the force had been used against her. Hendrik was full of anger, because this huntress forced him to become the dragon he hated. The attack from the dragon's mouth was an unexpected turn in the battle for her. She could not even imagine that dragons were such strong and powerful creatures as she thought, but she had not yet shown all her trump cards and was also preparing to respond to the dragon's attack. She multiplied the railgun and attacked the dragon at maximum power. The attack did not bring any success, and the dragon did not even feel the blow. Shane was at a loss to understand how this creature could resist her most powerful weapon. Hendrik took off to launch another attack from the air, but without killing his opponent. Turning around, he headed towards the girl and tried to make her beg for death. Another fire attack, and the girl should have done something to repel it. Once again, the drone helped the girl repel the attack. Although the barrier blocked the attack, everything around collapsed from the shockwave. Meanwhile, Hayuk stood nearby and tried to heal the wound from the bullets, although it was difficult. After Hendrik's transformation, all of his buffs and defensive techniques disappeared. Apparently all the mana is controlled by the dragon's essence. Shane admitted that the dragon was strong, but it would have to be shot. Having multiplied her copy, she now tried to shoot the dragon with all her blasters at once and finish him off. It was strange to think that these copies were the product of mana, since all mana was controlled by Hendrik. The answer was simple. It was science, not magic. All the holograms attacked the dragon at the same time, but it didn't matter to him. These bullets were useless against him, as they did not cause even minimal damage. But Shane decided to use her most powerful and deadly gun against the dragon. And this time it was much more powerful than blasters. It was her most powerful and terrible weapon, which could end any living creature. Then the dragon decided to attack the huntress with all his might. He prepared his most powerful spell, and Shane his deadly weapon. The shockwave from the spell and the shot scattered through the air and knocked down the dragon. The light from the explosion was brighter than the sun during the day and illuminated the area. At the site of the impact, there was a crater with a dragon in the middle. The antimatter bomb did its job. Due to the excessive power, the plane could no longer fly, and the huntress ordered it to rest. But the dragon began to rise, and Shane couldn't believe it. How could he still fight in such a state? But it was a deception. Hendrik fell unconscious to the ground and never rose again. Just as she thought this and was glad that she had dealt with the dragon, Hayuk called out to her. There were two of them against her alone, and Hayuk was still alive. And he intended to continue the battle with her. But his handsome face won't save him from death by her weapon. Her weapons were enough against him, and she would deal with him with ease. Having lifted the scales of the red dragon and partially absorbed it, he was not sure that the girl would win. It was a shock to her, and it was the first time she saw a person absorb an object and take over its power. Hugh repeated that they needed information from the girl, and nothing more. In any case, they will receive it voluntarily or by force from the girl. The girl couldn't believe that there was still a person in front of her. Hugh gained the power of a dragon from absorbing the scales, and could now decide the fate of this huntress in his favor. Now it is clear why dragons are considered the masters of mana, and that he now had an excess of it. It would have been easy for him now to attack and put an end to the battle. And now the spear of the god Odin, Kungnil had even greater power and strength than before. And although the girl was ready to repel the attack, she still did not understand that this was the end for her. Odin's spear and the power of 10 fingers now with the magic of the dragon attacked the girl with lightning speed, faster and faster. The girl didn't understand whether Hugh was from the dragon race, or whether his scales made him so omnipotent. Her reasoning was interrupted by Cha Jin, who attacked her while she was gathering her thoughts on what was going on. Reflecting the attack was useless, because a force many times more powerful than hers was falling upon her. And now the huntress's boasting came to naught. She got angry, and now she was going to finish off this newbie from the 50th floor since there was no other way. The Chimera railgun weapon should have destroyed this dragon as well as the previous one. But she miscalculated, and whoever is stronger will show the end of the battle. Hugh, like Hendrik, could use the power of breath, and flames fell towards the huntress. This attack destroyed the hunter's vaunted weapon, and the attack reached her herself. Now she lay unconscious on the ground, and the attack was fatal for her. But Chajin suddenly felt that the dragon's magic powers were slowly fading away. He spat out the dragon's scales, and it became clear that he was not yet able to absorb such energy from the dragon. Now it was necessary to examine the girl and what had happened to her, because the attack had been fatal for her. After a while, she woke up, but could not move because of the terrible pain throughout her body. Hendrik sat next to her as if nothing had happened, and Hook showed no signs of a recent battle. The dragon came to his senses earlier, and he and Chajin did not wake the girl until she woke up herself. There was some kind of invisible border around the trio, and the huntress asked what was going on. Hyuk replied that since everything around was destroyed, he set up a barrier and protected their peace for some time. She felt like she was being made fun of, but she was wrong. The girl admitted her defeat against these two powerful warriors. She underestimated Hendrik and Hook, and it was strange why she agreed to the bet at all. She thought it would be fun to fight the dragon himself, and didn't want to miss out on such a chance. The Tower Conquerors didn't like this. Fighting for fun didn't suit them. Both were Floor Zero dragons, and Shane decided to test which of them was stronger, but lost the battle. Hendrik was flattered and could not object. The conversation dragged on, and the huntress was asked to explain who had set the bounty on the guild's heads and why. She began to say that the reward for their heads was high and she was chosen to carry out the order. But the whole problem was that the bounty on their heads was not set by one person, but by several. The guild union has put a bounty on their heads. Hendrik could not understand what kind of union this was and what it represented. The girl said that because of the punishments, they could not be attacked by the higher floors. The whole point was that the higher floors could not attack the lower ones, but due to the guilds of these floors, the entire chain stretched from the bottom up. Hendrik realized that if he pulled the strings of the lower floors, it would not be difficult to determine who was behind all this. But there was no need to find out all this now, because Hyuk already understood who was behind all this. Of all the Tower Conquerors he knew, only one could do such a thing, and that was Kane. Kane owned the Songguk Guild Alliance. The girl didn't say anything, but after Chajin's reasoning, she said that he had guessed correctly, and that it was this alliance that was behind all of this. Meanwhile, the entire Star Nine, led by Kane and Carmen Pellin, gathered at the Songguk Guild Union. Donas Taylog, a swordsman, immediately noticed, and said why he had gathered them all together. One of the guilds was going through hard times and needed to intervene, but Carmen intervened in the discussion. She and her brother were arguing about where the Ghost Mask would attack next. Donasa asked Kane if he was sure that the next attack would not be on the Sana Guild. He considered the Ghost Mask as a single sprout that he was going to attack and destroy. It turns out that this ghostly mask is the reject of the sprouts, and they all had to be destroyed. Everyone was interested in who, and most importantly, how should have done it. And they decided to hire a person for this, and that person turned out to be Shane. And he decided that he would send her to carry out the task. They caught her on the 300th floor and offered her a deal in exchange for her life. Two of the Star Nine quickly dealt with her, and were ready to destroy her if she refused. And after the mission failed, they came back for her to kill her. Also, due to the leak of information, the traces of the Ghost Mask became weak and difficult to track. And the monster Camille in the form of a snake was given the order to destroy and eat the huntress. Meanwhile, Haryu was unconscious and heard a voice calling her for help. She woke up from a voice calling her. Miho and Hyuk stood next to her and asked if she was okay. The girl asked where the huntress girl and that strange dragon were. They were being followed and Hendrik knew it, because Shane had warned him about it. Well, since Haryu was okay, it was time to go where they had been planning to go for a long time. She forgot that they were going to the black market, and just smirked at it. Seeing the goodies, Miho asked Hyuk to buy them for her. Well, before the auction opens, we could go for a walk. In Haryu's head, all thoughts were about the dream where the voice asked to save him. Hyuk noticed her thoughtfulness and asked what was wrong with her and if she wanted something to eat. A minute later, Miho was already carrying a whole bunch of goodies with her and offering everyone a snack together. But Chajin was worried about the goblin's condition. It was somehow strange. But for the auction, it was necessary to disguise Chajin's companions a little, and the talk was primarily about Haryu. He turned her clothes into a beautiful outfit, and she was over the moon to see such clothes. Miho will remain in the form of a fox, and that will be enough. At the entrance to the auction, they were greeted by auction representatives asking them to proceed. The Lich's card meant that Hyuk and his companions had VIP seats. Only a nobleman with a powerful sponsor could receive such a black card. The representative's behavior caused dissatisfaction on the part of the trio, but everything was in order, and they were escorted to their place. The representative asked to follow him to their seats in the VIP box. Everyone at the auction immediately switched their conversations to him upon seeing the ghostly mask. They arrived on site, and now, when the auction began, all they had to do to raise the price was press a button in front. Hyuk asked the servant not to come in until he was called. It was time for the auction, and silence reigned in the hall as everyone waited for the bidding to begin. Miho was bought Noriga, which allowed her to summon animals. So far, there have only been some not very good items at the auction, but people haven't gone anywhere. Something was wrong here, on a small floor and so many people. But when the next lot was announced, Har-yu suddenly became not herself. She jumped off her balcony and rushed to the place that was covered with a blanket. She was in a hurry to save the one whose voice was bothering her, and was coming from under the blanket, trying to save the one who called her. Har-yu did not pay attention to anyone. The guards stood in her way, ready to repel the goblin's attack. She demanded that they not interfere with her, and was ready to attack anyone who got in her way. One of the auction participants prevented her from striking and blocked it. The second fat man stood nearby and was also against this girl touching his thing. Hyuk came down to help Har-yu, and now it was his battle too. The two stood to the side and did not understand what was happening. Hyuk hurried to Har-yu and asked what happened, but she only pointed to the lot and that she heard a voice from there. The auction continued, and the lot was represented by a goblin hairpin. It was this hairpin that the goblin remembered from her childhood, and it was from it that the voice came. Har-yu was furious that her race's belongings had been stolen and then put up for auction. Hyuk stopped her and told her to trust him. The bidding began with 100,000 gold coins for the hairpin. Prices were rising rapidly, and the last word had not yet been said. The fat man offered a sum of 1 million for the hairpin, which he wanted to add to his collection. But Hyuk and Har-yu had different opinions on this matter. Apparently he wanted to get a souvenir from the hairpin since he couldn't make a stuffed animal out of Har-yu. She wanted to attack, but Hyuk stopped her and announced the price for the lot at 3 million gold. No one could beat 3 million, and the lot was awarded to 3. Nobody expected this, because everyone thought that the ghost mask didn't have that kind of money. With such a price for the lot, they attracted too much attention and it was worth leaving this place as quickly as possible. He turned to the auctioneer and asked him to quickly pack the item and end the auction. On the street, Har-yu thanked Hyuk for the purchase, but she should have thanked Lich, because it was his money. The voice of the hairpin thanked the goblin for saving him. The soul of the hairpin was free, and Har-yu was calm about her actions. But from behind, a swordsman attacked Hyuk, but the attack failed. The attack was repelled and Chajin saw that it was the auction participant and the fat man who wanted the hairpin. Now it's clear, he saw them at the auction, this swordsman and that fat guy behind. The fat man did not like these words, and he prepared to attack the girl. Hyuk warned that the two would suffer if they did not leave immediately. The fat man needed the girl herself to make a stuffed animal out of her for his collection. But Har-yu had her own opinion and sword on this matter. Har-yu's attack failed because her opponent had a hammer, and it was more powerful than her sword. Hyuk wanted to say something to Har-yu, but the swordsman interrupted him with an attack. Har-yu decided to use combat foresight and finish off the fat man. And having dodged his attack, she herself went into battle with him. But a cloud of poison was released from the hammer, and the goblin was not allowed to inhale it. She tried to hold her breath, but it didn't help. He pinned the goblin to the ground, and now she was in his hands. Everyone who reached this floor had to have at least one ace up their sleeve. He had a poison that paralyzed the goblin, and now he could do whatever he wanted. Har-yu couldn't allow herself to die because of some poison. After all, she hadn't yet taken revenge. The fat man took out his knife and decided to finish off the goblin once and for all. Har-yu had no chance to dodge. In an instant, the fat man's hand with the knife flew off from Hyuk's attack, who arrived in time and saved the girl. The fat man didn't understand why the poison didn't work on the newbie, but Hyuk only replied that the poison didn't scare him. A stuffed animal of the fat man would have been nice, but for his crime he had to die. The fat man screamed in pain. But Hyuk thought that wasn't enough, and he intended to deal with this upstart. There was nothing left to do but cut off the other hand for symmetry. But his attack was thwarted by a swordsman who attacked from behind, but Hyuk reacted in time. In response, the Five Fingers attacked the swordsman, but he managed to react. The battle continued, and attacks came alternately from one side and then the other. The swordsman underestimated Har-yu and Hyuk, seeing their fighting style and technique. He couldn't believe that there was a newbie in front of him, most likely. There was a veteran of the upper floor standing in front of him rather than a newbie. The swordsman dodged the attacks, but his days were numbered. He ordered the fat man to disappear because they couldn't get out of this situation together. How could a fat man pass up the opportunity to make a stuffed animal out of a live goblin? But the terms of the agreement said that the fat man was not allowed to interfere. If that was the case, the fat man had to disappear. And the fat man decided to get away from the battlefield at full speed. But while running away, he hit Miho and took Har-yu's hairpin from her. Har-yu rushed after the fat man, but the swordsman tried to stop her. But Hyuk intercepted him, and it was not so easy to escape from him. The city streets were illuminated like daylight, but it was only for a moment. The city was collapsing under the attacks of the swordsman and the Necromancer. The attacks continued at full force, but Hyuk was already getting tired of it, and he decided to destroy this little rat, who was afraid to climb one floor, let alone 50. The swordsman's anger was at its limit, and Chajin took advantage of it. Although the attack was strong, it did not produce any results, and the swordsman repelled attack after attack now from the walker. For Hyuk, this was a weak opponent. In an instant, the sword cut the swordsman's body to pieces. Now it was a corpse. This swordsman reached the 431st floor, and there he saw true betrayal. But it was there that he lost his eyes. This anger gave the swordsman strength for the final attack, but it was all in vain. The attack did not bring any results, and anger only prevented me from attacking wisely. Hyuk was also betrayed, but then he died, unlike the swordsman. But despite this, the swordsman's psyche was weak, and now his end has come. His blow knocked the swordsman out, and he was no longer able to continue the battle. Having pinned the swordsman to the ground, Hyuk decided to end this performance. And now he decided not just to kill him, but to destroy him once and for all. The fat man, meanwhile, ran towards a busy street in the hope of hiding there. But he couldn't get there. He naively thought he would get lost in the crowd, but he was too late. A blow of the sword and the fat man was no longer in a hurry. Haryu's blow cut him in half, and now his collection will never be replenished with anyone else. But the girl noticed a strange object and decided to take it to Hyuk. The swordsman was luckier, and Chajin let him go to complete his revenge. But after that, he will definitely destroy him. They will both be waiting for this meeting. After the battle, Hyuk returned to the auction and spoke with Vulcan. Vulcan joked that he had become soft and let his enemy go instead of killing him. While they were arguing, Haryu ran into the room, all excited. Vulcan asked about the fat man who threatened her, to which he received the answer that no one would see him again. But she added that among the things there was this strange thing. The card was similar to Hyuk's card, but it was for something other than payment. That's right, this card was a pass to secret auctions. It allowed one to participate in high-ranking auctions and obtain items there that were more valuable and powerful than those currently on this floor. But his thoughts were interrupted by Haryu, who wanted to ask something. She apologized for her misbehavior, which almost caused everyone to suffer. He just said that everything was fine and he wasn't mad at her. After all, he understood and knew what this hairpin meant to her. They agreed to be cool-headed about revenge in the future and continued the auction. Having handed over the pass card, they went into the VIP seats of the new auction, which was still going on, but there were fewer people. The last lot for the day stood on the platform. This was a special lot as it foreshadowed a rare item or relic. Everyone perked up and waited impatiently for the announcement of what had actually happened there. There was a cage under the curtain, and a moment later it lifted, and everyone saw the lot. The cage meant either a creature or a relic. Hyuk was nervous because he didn't understand what was actually there. In the cage was a dark elf slave who had been captured in an ambush. It was a strange feeling, because Hyuk felt both the aura of a dark elf and a high-ranking elf. But he didn't understand why. The dark elves were subject to demonic powers. The pure mana of the elves was from the deity, but they never crossed paths. Vulcan suggested that perhaps someone had influenced them externally. It couldn't be that this girl was influenced by 4 beings. The bidding for the elf was at 1.5 million. The entire bidding was interrupted by the announcement of one of the participants about the price of 5 million. 5,500,000 gold coins was voiced by Hamiel, an elf of the Nita level. The dark elf was furious at this action by her once former sister. She promised to kill her first if she managed to escape from the cage. Hamiel reassured him that it would be better for her to buy a dark elf than for some stranger to do so. It would be better if she became a pet of her own race. The auctioneer decided to end the bidding, and since there were no objections, he proposed to end the auction. But the end of the auction was interrupted by Hyuk, who announced the price of 10 million for the lot. The elf looked at Hyuk and said how dare he beat her amount. In response, she only received the nickname of a stupid pigeon. The slave did not understand why this man was buying her. Hamiel was angry that some man had his eye on her thing. She won't be able to force him to refuse to buy the lot. She mocked him, believing that he didn't have even close to that amount. It was a confrontation between a demon and a deity, and she decided to offer 11 million. She didn't have more. But Chajin immediately named the sum of 20 million, and the elf gave in. If there were no objections, he sent her away and advised her not to interfere any further. She couldn't believe that some person could pay such a sum for an elf. The time will come when this stupid pigeon and her entire race will be destroyed. But for now, they alone cannot defeat them all. But so far, everything has been resolved with money. The elf wondered where he got so much money. The auction continued, and the hammer struck 3 times, thus ending the bidding for the lot. The bidding ended, and the auctioneer asked to wait until the slave was brought. After handing the key to Hyuk, he left. Haryu was worried about Hyuk. She was worried that now her brother would also have a slave. Hyuk looked at her in surprise and asked if he looked crazy enough to have slaves. But Vulcan objected that he was a slave. But Hyuk answered him in the same way, that he was a spirit and nothing more. Haryu apologized for mistaking her brother for the kind of person who owned slaves. Their argument was interrupted by Hamiel. She introduced herself to everyone in the room and said that she was an elf, and her name was Hamiel. If she came for the lot, she could go to the next world, as one such auction participant had already done. No, her intentions were only one of interest. She asked why and for what purpose he bought himself this elf. After all, she wanted to get to know Hyuk better and more, but she had already reported the company to those above her. He could have killed her and it wouldn't have been a problem, but he wouldn't have had the strength to fight the other creatures. Passing by Haryu, she angered the girl by reminding her about the hairpin. And she also said that it was she who burned it, and that it would never be seen again. This pigeon was not hunting for the lot. She was sent to annoy Haryu. But she remained cool and did not show her anger. Apparently, they will soon meet this impudent elf again. She only said that she would wait for them on the 100th floor. He wanted to ask what else she knew, but she had disappeared without a trace. Haryu and Hyuk went outside the city, but Vulcan was ordered to guard them. No one was supposed to hear the owner's conversation, and the demonic soldiers were supposed to protect the owner and Haryu from this. The elf in the cage asked what this man wanted from her. They reassured her that if they had wanted to kill her, they would not have brought Miho and Haryu here. But the elf didn't care, because everyone was on the same team except her. It was her right to believe them or not. Her name was Elione von Yggdrasil. Her surname signified her belonging to the royal line of the sacred tree of the elves, and this meant that in front of them was a representative of the royal family. Meanwhile, everyone who wanted to take revenge on the auction violator was approaching the forest. This elf was still young, and when she grew up, she could well become a powerful demon. This elf and that impudent pigeon had similar features, but this one was perfect for the role of a rebel. The shackles prevented her from releasing her power and attacking. She decided to wait for the right moment. But before he let her go, he asked her something. First, he opened the cage and asked her to get up and come out to them. She immediately tried to snatch the key from the man, but missed. He advised not to take unnecessary risks and stop this stupid idea with the key. She asked what he wanted to do with her, because they wouldn't even look for her in this place. Maybe he wanted to be alone with her like the other auction participants. But Haryu said that there was a child here, and her brother was not such a pervert. The demons and gods teased Hyuk, but he sent them away and asked them not to interfere. But their argument was interrupted by a bright light nearby. The whole point was that the number of enemies around was growing, and Balkan could barely cope with them. The demonic soldiers were barely able to cope with the attackers. Apparently all 50 floors rushed into this forest at the same time. Balkan reported that the number of enemies was growing, and that there would be even more of them on the campaign. Hyuk asked Miho and Haryu to help Balkan and not let anyone in until he finished the conversation. But Haryu was jealous of her brother towards this elf, because she was beautiful and looked great. Hyuk asked if Elione wanted to chat, and she asked for a drink so she could talk. Meanwhile, Balkan and the girls fought against a horde of enemies. Balkan's help came in time and he used mass arrests of enemies. The Soul Thorn helped to overcome this wave of enemies. But that was for now. Elione finally started talking to Hyuk after drinking some wine. If he was much stronger than his companions, then why did he let that winged one go if he could have killed her? But he replied that so far he could not achieve anything by force, but suppressed such desires for the sake of a higher goal. And the elf continued the conversation, telling a story about herself. Many years ago, she killed her father, not out of hatred, but to save the kingdom. The only way she could get the technique from her father was by killing him and cutting his heart in half. Inside the chest, instead of a heart, there was a fruit from the sacred tree Yggdrasil. But this was passed down from generation to generation. But she had to hurry and eat this fruit so that the future of the kingdom would not be gloomy. But on the heels of her father and Elion, her brother and sister followed to kill and seize the fetus. Her brother Elad sold out his own countrymen to the great beings, and became a traitor to his father and to her. The father was shocked that he and his daughter were found so quickly and asked only to eat the fruit as quickly as possible. She didn't have time to do this, and the fruit was split into pieces by a blow from Elad's sword, and Hemiel smashed the remains of the fruit into pieces. And she also betrayed everyone and everything, but that was nothing compared to the punishment she had prepared for Elion. She held a vessel with demonic power in her hands, and now she was going to turn the high elf Elione into a demon. Hamiel tried to put an end to her sister's noble lineage, and she intended to do it in such a way that Elione would slowly die in her new form. Hyuk understood from the girl's words that great creatures were also hunting the elves, but even they were not able to deal with the elves of the 300th floor alone. Apparently they used Elad and Hamiel as traitors to their own people. Elione finished her sad story about how she wanted to help others, but she herself was betrayed. No, this elf's story was just beginning, and she still had to finish off her offenders. And as long as one of them is alive, her story will not end. Hyuk offered to join them to take revenge on her enemies, and they would help her with this. Haryu was haunted by the thought of her brother and that beautiful elf. Will the two of them be enough? Or maybe there will be something between them. Or maybe she will become his chosen one, and then Haryu will stop being Hyuk's little sister. She decided to go back to them and talk, but there was a blow from behind and Chajin was rushing to her aid. He arrived just in time when the Red Orc was about to attack Haryu. The elf left, and Haryu had no more questions about her. The elf refused the offer until she sorted herself out. She could not yet take revenge on her own brothers and sisters. After all, she couldn't yet take revenge with even greater force. After all, Hyuk was also going to take revenge on everyone who betrayed him. He said that he decided to take revenge on both the Nine and the Great Beings, but he could not do it alone. To her it was just a grumble and nothing more. She was about to leave, and so far her answer was a refusal of the offer. She needed to gain strength comparable to Hyuk's, and then she would return to him. In the end, she only asked what his real name was, and he replied that his name was Cha-Jin Hyuk, Death Star. She remembered about spiritual master Cha-Jin, but the secret of his death circumstances was now clear to her. She only answered that, as a necromancer, he could take her body or soul for himself after death. The girl disappeared and Cha-Jin rushed to help his friends. If all the conversations are over, then it's time to hurry and get out of here before others arrive. It was time to reach the 60th floor. It was not safe for them to stay here. The Golden Lich will be there too, but he had already fought on his way to this floor. He was being attacked by more and more enemies, and apparently there would be even more. There was a whole army against him, and it was more difficult for him to fight alone. The puppeteer also held back attacks from the outside from the guards of the Sacred Kingdom. It was impossible to allow the Nine to learn about the connection between the confrontation and the company of the Golden Lich. The Lich was not allowed to show himself, and it was up to the puppeteer and his puppets to defend this place. And then the leader of the gang that attacked the Golden Lich's company appeared. I managed to dodge the attack of this brute, but my strength was at its limit. This big guy was the head of the giant hippopotamus guild, and his name was Jose Yan. So that's what these impudent people wanted. They needed to turn the city into ruins. Julio was talking to the fat man next to him about something about the puppeteer. Next to him stood Jose Yan, the leader of the giant behemoth guild, and both of them wanted to destroy the puppeteer, receiving a reward for him. One wanted to grab a piece of the pie, and the other wanted to take it all for himself. Jose Yan did not give up, and if it were not for the stolen information from Julio, he himself could have destroyed the loot and taken it for himself. While they were arguing, the puppeteer decided to take advantage of the moment and take charge of them. These two grumblers would be good puppets for him if he could subdue them, but a blow in the back quickly put an end to this idea. It was a blow from May, the head of the partisan guild. It was she who caught the puppeteer and had no intention of sharing her spoils with anyone. Before the trio appeared Asher Hum, the head of the Divine Lord Guild, and the messenger of Carmen herself. The Phantom Mask dealt them a blow, and now those responsible must be punished for it. Ben and Beck began to express their thoughts against Asher Hum, but he didn't care. May said that the loot was hers, and she had no intention of sharing it with anyone. It was impossible to allow this place to perish, and the puppeteer was ready to give his life for this. And he cast a subjugation spell on himself to counter his enemies. He threatened that now no one would leave him from here. By attacking his enemies with magical weapons, he intended to deal with them. Half the village was destroyed by his attack. Everything would have continued if not for. His next attack was blocked and he couldn't move. A huge white snake appeared in front of him. The attack failed and the puppeteer himself was wounded by a counterattack from the strangers. His attack was repelled by Toon, the Demon King, and Basil, the Death King. They were summoned by Cain himself to lead the operation to destroy the Ghost Mask and his comrades. Beck and Ben refused to obey these mercenaries and begin to contradict Asher Hum. The order came from Cain himself and he advised not to contradict him. No one dared to resist the order and punishment followed. The guild leaders said that in that case they would wash their hands of the matter and let the mercenaries sort it out themselves. But their refusal did not satisfy anyone, and Jose Yan was the first to pay for it, and a huge snake bit off his head. Next were May and Beck Julio. Asher Hum decided to deal with the traitors and those who went against the order. After their death, their souls were immediately called to service by Toon, and now there was simply no one to disobey the order. Now they had to serve until the end of the guild itself, or until Toon let them go. These three were now servants of the Demon King, and did not dare disobey the orders of their new master. And now Asher Kum could use those who had previously contradicted the orders of Lord Cain. Toon asked where the Ghost Mask had gone, to which he received the answer that he had not yet reached the 60th floor. Toon didn't really like this, because he didn't come for company, but for the ghostly mask itself. Asher Kum's servants suddenly put a knife to his neck and he demanded to explain this behavior. The answer was simple. He leaves since there is no Ghost Mask here. Asher thought that this Demon King was also going against the order, but he calmed him down and said that he had gone in search of the ghostly mask. He agreed only for the reason of killing the Ghost Mask. On the 51st floor, Hendrik was also not bored while Hayuk and Har Yu with Vulcan were at the auction. And then the guards of the Sacred Kingdom attacked the confrontation. Regarding what he managed to find out, Hyuk promised to tell everything later. An urgent message came from the Golden Lich asking for help. It was strange to receive a special purpose letter. Apparently things were bad on the 60th floor. The situation concerned emergency assistance for him and the puppeteer, so he asked to get to the 60th floor as quickly as possible. They attacked the base facility, the building of a trading company. The 60th floor trading guild was attacked, and it was time to hurry to help the Lich. In response, Hyuk asked to stall for time until they got to him. Vulcan and Har Yu did not understand how this could happen because no one knew about the 60th floor and the guild that helped them. The whole thing was that the Lich was running different trading guilds under different names. Otherwise, it would have been the end of him. The whole problem was also that the Lich could not use his power to keep his name out of the light. If everyone found out that he and the opposition were in cahoots, his entire company would be destroyed instantly. If the Sacred Guild found out about this, it would tear everything to pieces. The targets were set, and it was necessary to quickly reach the 60th floor and finish off these gangs of the Sacred Kingdom. Balkan warned everyone that they would now go to the next floor. But before he could say it, he was struck from behind, and two people with a huge snake appeared in front of the guild for a confrontation. These two warned that they would not rise higher and would die here. Everyone jumped to the side at the moment of the attack, and were going to deal with these impudent fellows. Since these two appeared at the moment when the Lich needed help, it became clear why they were there. Which means they were sent by that impudent hypocrite Cain. Hayuk's instinct told him to dodge, and it was correct as the undead monster struck at them. Now it was clear that in front of them was a snake charmer and a necromancer. Not the best of circumstances. Hendrik decided to deal with the spellcaster, and the necromancer went to Hook, and with his very first blow, he repelled the attack of Camille, the legendary serpent of the tower. Basil teased and tried to lure the dragon warrior to his side. Hendrik was surprised and did not like to become someone's pet, especially this hypocritical Basil. Basil was interested in how his scales sparkled, and he promised to take him to the highest position. Instead of words, Hendrik drew his sword and repelled another attack of the snake. As for the necromancer, Hayuk himself decided to deal with him at all costs. Apparently, the necromancer of the 300th floor stood before him, but he needed to find out what he was capable of. He ordered the girls to help Hendrik and go to the 60th floor, and he would finish this one off himself. They didn't object and rushed to help. As for Toon, he will deal with him himself. Toon was only glad about this turn of events, and the two armies clashed with each other, and the time came for the leaders to fight themselves. Toon thought that Hayuk would chicken out at the sight of his skeleton warriors, but he was very wrong. The Demon King said it was unacceptable that the newbie was a spirit masterclass, and he wanted to take away his power. To which he received a refusal and an affirmative answer that no one owes him anything. The girls rushed to help Hendrik, but they were not destined to make it in time. Giant teeth emerged from the ground and rose higher and higher in the middle of the street. In an instant, the huge mouth slammed shut, swallowing the girls inside itself. It was all Toon's doing, and the only salvation for the girls was to destroy him. Hayuk didn't like this, and demanded that the girls be released, otherwise he would be finished. Meanwhile, on the 60th floor, the Lich's warriors fought with the guards of the Sacred Kingdom. In the midst of the battle, Asher Kum arrived there to personally deal with the traitors. The guards couldn't get inside the company building, but Hum had his own plans for that. The Lich tried to stall for time by leading the army from behind and moving away from them. He attacked from a distance, otherwise he would have been quickly identified and then it would have been the end for him. Meanwhile, on the 51st floor, the battle continued and Hayuk wanted to destroy the undead in order to save the girls. He attacked this monster to prevent the girls from passing away so quickly. But Toon blocked his attack and he had to be dealt with. Toon wanted to become the successor to the Death Star and take the power from Cha-Jin. Inside the monster, the girls found themselves surrounded by skeleton warriors, and something had to be done. There were a lot of them, and it was simply not possible for the girls to cope with them. The monster descended underground, trying to swallow Miho and Haryu alive. Hendrik wanted to help them, but that snake Basil wouldn't let him pass. The snake turned out to be strong. Apparently it was a boss from the upper floors. In the mouth of this huge snake there was another snake, but it was the product of demonic power. She penetrated Hendrik's body, but from such impudence, she instantly flew away from him along with Camel. Having fought the snake off, Hendrik could not understand what had happened. It turns out that this snake, by increasing the enemy's fear, transmitted all the enemy's experiences to the owner. Basil couldn't understand why Hendrik hated dragons so much. After all, he himself was a dragon, but why there was such hostility towards them was incomprehensible to Basil. Hendrik hated them because they destroyed his homeland and took his parents to the next world. The anger was because he was unable to take revenge on those flying creatures back then. Basil found it funny that such a trifle could anger the dragon. After all, the price for destroying Hendrik's homeland was the ability to transform into a dragon, and Basil had to kill a large number of people in order to collect all his snakes and gain the beauty of his body. But this is nothing compared to the beauty of Hendrik. The stranger introduced himself as Basil, the King of Death, and the enchanter of all that has scales. Offering to go over to his side, he promised to make Hendrik love his essence. And Hendrik introduced himself to this impudent fellow as a dragon slayer and destroyer of everything that has scales. In that case, they both have to fight each other. Hendrik was just ready to attack and finish off this impudent guy. There was no end in sight for these crawling creatures, and Hendrik was already fed up with it. But these small snakes couldn't do anything to him because he was stronger. They were all just a distraction, and the largest of the snakes surrounded the dragon. The snake grabbed him, and Hendrik wanted to use the teleport, but he didn't have time. Basil closed his mouth. Basil caught Hendrik by surprise, and if he doesn't get out of the hold, he's finished. And now Hendrik could become the slave of this impudent man. The only way to free himself from the grip was to become a dragon, and Basil thought that would not happen. He hoped in vain that this would not happen. The problem was that Hendrik, even though he was a dragon himself, hated the race. If he doesn't transform, he will become a slave to this impudent fellow. The choice was his. Hook entered Hendrik's mind and told him why he had started his path of revenge, and now some snake could destroy it. And Hendrik was not a dragon slayer, but the one who, together with the opposition team, rose to the 50th floor to take revenge. This meant that the only way to defeat this impudent fellow was to unleash all of his strength. Since they are still weak, any means will be a good help for victory. Hendrik listened to the advice, and the snake crumbled from the transformation of the dragon, and now the forces were equal. Therefore, in any fight with the strongest opponent, try to give it your all. Basil was amazed by this transformation, and wanted to take possession of this creature at any cost. The battle continued between Toon and Hyuk. The army also did not retreat, and both sides fought on equal terms. The technique was copied exactly from Cha-Jin's past life, but it didn't matter since he had surpassed himself. It was time to finish off this necromancer and free my sisters. No, these thoughts only got in the way. It was worth dealing with this necromancer, and only then helping the others. It was funny to see Cha-Jin's previous fighting technique from this opponent, but it was not equal to the technique that the spiritual master had mastered and surpassed. And this rogue's chances of defeating the master were negligible. Toon was angry that his teacher was being insulted by this newbie. Hyuk landed on the ground and was immediately attacked by a pack of skeletons. Toon thought he had fallen into his trap and was glad that he could finish off the man. Hyuk released divine and demonic powers, and the skeletons scattered as if they had never existed. One person was able to combine two powers within himself, and Toon was amazed by such a skill from a newbie. Cha-Jin's name has forever been etched into the tower's history as a man capable of combining two powers. To defeat Toon, you need to trample him and his army to smithereens. In order to destroy the beast, it was necessary to kill its owner. Hyuk asked the Necromancer if he was the successor to the Death Star. In principle, the receiver was also a complete idiot, just like Cha-Jin 10 years ago, having done nothing against the deity. The Necromancer was angry and decided to use a spirit spell against the newcomer. He summoned the slain guild leaders and intended to defeat Hyuk that way, but it was his mistake. Hyuk destroyed every Necromancer he summoned and tried to cut through the main body, and the summoned guild leaders were no obstacle to him achieving his goal. But when the blow was dealt to Jose Yan, he remained unharmed and stood still. It turned out that Toon had endowed them with magic to protect them from divine power. The divine power and demon power were blocked, and the undead were also strong. Since simple blows could not do anything to them, it was necessary to resort to another method. The only solution was to use two forces simultaneously. But the system did not allow the merger to be done, and this infuriated Hyuk. He demanded that it be done. He then decided to arouse greed and absorb the divine power into the demonic. Even if the system continues to refuse to merge, this monster has a brutal appetite and will eat anything. Ultimately, these powers of Cha-Jin, no matter how much they do, will absorb each other. But with Cha-Jin's next attack, all the undead in the way were cut down without any problems. Since the protective magic no longer worked, the fusion took place and now these two forces were one. Cha-Jin was surprised that he was able to cut through the undead's defense. He received a new skill, the One Beginning, which was able to unite two forces that were opposite to each other. Now this skill was in Cha-Jin's favor, and the undead no longer bothered him. Jose Yanu and Beck Hallio were ordered to cover the Necromancer, but it was too late. Cha-Jin had already approached Toon and slammed him into the ground. The impact sent him flying several meters and falling to the ground. Oddly enough, he survived the attack and stood on his feet. Hyuk had already approached him and asked if he really considered himself the successor. Toon was also fixated on the Death Star because Cha-Jin was suitable for the tower's owner. But Hyuk betrayed humanity and died, for which he should be honored. Because, as Toon explained, he was betrayed by the Nine and lured into a trap, and that he knew the truth about his death 10 years ago. Hyuk had a spiritual master from the Nine in his hands, but he had no desire to hear about his death. Being the most powerful necromancer, he was betrayed and killed, although he was not guilty. Toon didn't understand why this newbie was making fun of him and his teacher. He acknowledged Cha-Jin's abilities, but not the Death Star's successor. He admired the Death Star and wanted to be like it, but to take over his name, you will have to defeat the ghostly mask. But Hyuk decided to see what the Necromancer was capable of, and then take him under his command. It seems like he is a necromancer, and at the same time almost became a spiritual master. It would be interesting to see what will come of it. Toon won't let some scoundrel get his benefactor's class. He summoned second-rate ghost warriors and was summoned by Balkan in response. Balkan immediately entered the battle using the soul laser. Oddly enough, the attack did not bring any benefit, since the ghosts were not exactly souls. Toon had no intention of stopping until he took revenge for the insult to Cha-Jin Hyuk's name. His skills had already started to irritate Cha-Jin, and he decided to act differently. Leaving the ghosts in the Balkans, he decided to act. Blow after blow brought Cha-Jin closer to his goal. Toon also fought back as best he could, but began to forcibly give up his positions in the battle. Hyuk's attacks reached Toon as well, and he began to receive injuries. Toon fought them off with his ghosts, but it didn't save him from Hyuk's next attack. Toon tried to resist, but the attacks became stronger and more frequent. Having summoned the spirits, he decided to attack the ghostly mask in response, but it was his mistake. Chajin's technique was used against him, and although Toon had strength, he was not able to absorb the master's soul. The attack ended as quickly as it appeared, and now the Necromancer had nothing to respond with. Toon was shocked that his teacher's technique was able to be blocked. His technique was unable to penetrate the newcomer's defense. As a reward before his death, Chajin decided to summon and show his technique of spirit arrival. The true coming of the spirits turned out to be much stronger than the power that was known to Toon. Only now did he realize that it was his teacher in front of him. Chajin simply replied that it was nice to meet you, and that they would see each other again soon. Tunu was killed, but not for long. He will soon rise again and serve Chajin. Toon's soul left his body and was now flying towards the heavens, but it could not fly far. The master ordered him to rise, and now they met together again. Now in front of Chajin stood not an enemy, but an ally. Kneeling before the master, he asked to forgive him for his rudeness to the teacher. He did not recognize his benefactor, and even betrayed his comrades. Their conversation was interrupted by a monster that swallowed Haryu and Miho. It was the summoning beast, Kuvo, and now without a master it has become uncontrollable. Toon wanted to deal with this monster, but Jin stopped him because there were girls inside. But there was no reason to worry, and a minute later Haryu and Miho jumped out safe and sound. What a relief it was to see them alive. Hyuk calmed down. They managed to charm the beast and then get out. Toon was puzzled as to how they managed to charm and destroy his undead. Meanwhile, Hendrik was not bored either, and his attack reached the group. The attack was so strong that it reached Chajin and Toon, who was standing nearby. A minute later, Basil's body flew in front of them. It was not easy to deal with this king of death, but he came to an end. Basil was left with only a small snake and had nothing else to fight back with. He talked to his snake and understood that the end had come for both of them. But was it really just the two of them? Turning his head towards the snake, he immediately ate it and thereby took over its power. Everyone was shocked by what they saw, but Hendrik decided to finish off this impudent fellow and end this battle. But the blow was repelled as Basil received the power of the snake and was now able to continue fighting. And now the confrontation has taken on a new round of attacks. Basil's attacks became stronger, but it didn't solve anything anymore. Basil's end was only slightly delayed by his consumption of the snake. Now, instead of snakes and Basil, there is only one shell left, and this shell will be destroyed by Hendrik. And he immediately began to attack this chatterbox and the slightly off-the-wall Basil. The girls rushed to his aid, but Hendrik did not need help. He replied that this snake was now his prey, and he would deal with it. Anger was on Hendrik's side and only gave him strength for new attacks. The snake no longer interfered with the dragon, and he attacked with great force in order to quickly finish off this Basil. The snake grabbed Hendrik's sword, blocking the attack. But it was in vain, and now the dragon decided how the battle would end. With one blow of the dragon's claws, he nailed Basil, and now the outcome of the battle was decided. Thanks to Basil, Hendrik realized his true purpose. Dragon Slayer, Hendrik won and Basil was no more. By dragging the body and throwing it in front of the group, Hendrik proved that Basil was dead. He also defeated the most powerful snake, Sheila, and the legendary snake, Camille. Toon was delighted with the star, or rather the comrades of the ghostly mask. It is thanks to them that Chajin will be able to climb to the top of the tower and take revenge. And of course Toon will go with them. Hendrik wanted to ask what happened between the Necromancer and the Ghost Mask. But there was little time. It was necessary to reach the 60th floor and help the Golden Lich. The battle had just begun, and it was time to hurry to help the whole team. But before going there, Toon advised to take the bodies of Basil and Toon. And also, the troops were led on that floor by Asher Hum, who was patronized by Carmen herself. They were as strong as Toon, but only they had the power from Carmen. But Basil and Toon fell, which means there were still chances. When Asura was saved by the Falons, he began to worship them, and they gave him their power in return. The Lich had dealt with the soldiers at the front line and could still buy time. The problem was that fallen soldiers were immediately resurrected by Asher. This was a problem for the Lich, and without help, he could not survive for long. Asher's strength was comparable to that of the heavenly race, and it was not easy for the team to defeat him. There was only one way out, and Hyuk had to absorb the bodies of Basil and Toon to fight Asher. Since the body can be considered as an object, then the absorption of the body will be like the absorption of the object. The absorption will give Hyuk the power of Basil and Toon to fight, and Hendrik supported this idea and advised Hyuk to do so. And no one was waiting for the bodies of these two except themselves. No one needed them after death. That's why Toon offered to absorb his body as a sign of respect for Chajin. He asked to take over his body to become stronger, and both bodies were absorbed by Chajin. Both bodies were absorbed by Hyuk, and their power was transferred to him, and now it belonged to him. The Lich continued to hold back the kingdom's troops, but the guards had already penetrated the building and their forces were running out. The Lich's army was melting away and the losses were irreparable, while the enemy was advancing ever more. They just needed to buy time and then the Ghost Mask Company would help them. He wanted to divide the troops, but he didn't have time, and a bright light burst out in the middle of the room where the Lich and the puppeteer were. It turned out that one of the enemies had punched a hole in the wall, and now the Lich had been discovered. It was Asher Kum, and he found the Lich. Apparently there was no point in hiding anymore. But this stranger didn't look like the Star 9, which meant that the Lich could deal with him. But Asher had only 2 orders from Cain. The first was to kill the traitors and opponents of the Order. The second was to destroy the Ghost Mask and everyone who helps him. This means removing both the Lich and the puppeteer. Asher was obsessed with the Fallon family and had no reason to discuss the orders of his idols. But Lich had his own plan for these orders, and he decided to teach this impudent fellow a lesson. For now, the Lich could only avoid direct combat. If Hum found out that it was the Golden Lich, the consequences would be irreversible. Asher decided to find out why this man did not attack and hid his identity. This meant that Lich would not last long. During Asher's attack, Hendrik suddenly appeared and repelled Hum's attack. Asher didn't expect to see a dragon here, but this only meant that the Ghost Mask had managed to reach the 60th floor in one night. Hyuk also came with a dragon, having previously destroyed both of the 9's messengers. Everyone turned to him and asked if he was that very Asher Kum, and Chajin asked where to go to cut the throat of that bastard Cain. Hendrik and the girls did not interfere with Hyuk fighting this impudent fellow, because now he did not need help. But Hendrik and the girls were attacked by the kingdom's pesky guards, and it was necessary to deal with these losers. It was necessary to deal with the army. But this Asher Hum constantly resurrected them, and this was a problem. This meant that there was only one way to combat these guards, after which they would no longer be alive. Hendrik decided to burn them to the ground, and then no one would resurrect the ashes. Asher was distracted by the fight with the ghostly mask, and the company calmly dealt with the rest of the guards. Hyuk decided not to delay and immediately destroy Asher, finishing him off as quickly as possible. He cut off Asher's arm, but the arm immediately regenerated, which puzzled Chajin. Apparently Carmen gave him this strength, and now it was not so easy to defeat him. It was necessary to attack with a powerful attack so that he could not recover. Asher was angry that his mistress was being insulted by some masked stranger. It was time to release Balkan and deal with this upstart under Carmen's protection. Asher was surprised that the undead repelled the attack of his divine power. It was all about the defensive power that Hyuk had inherited from Toon. Asher considered Tuna a traitor, although he did not even follow the 9 and was now in his place. For these words, Hyuk ordered Balkan and Toon to deal with this loser and bring him to him. Toon became stronger thanks to the power of the Ghost Mask, and Balkan also helped him with this. Hyuk also did not stand aside and used the Fox Mask to attack Asura. Multiple attacks from the 3 allies quickly tormented Asher's body, not allowing it to recover. Blow after blow, the attacks became more and more powerful, and Asher began to weaken little by little. The wounds did not have time to heal, and Asher was driven into a corner. But no matter how hard the Ghost Mask tried to kill Asher, it was useless as long as he received an influx of power. Toon grabbed him and restrained his movements. Basil came to his aid, and together they held back Asher's attempts to attack. But no one listened to him. They had orders to bring him to their master. Basil squeezed Asher's body tighter and tighter, while the others attacked him, causing him irreparable wounds. Asher could recover even if his head was cut off, and it was necessary to destroy him with one blow. After his strength weakened, Asher did not want to die. Everything came to a standstill. They couldn't kill him, and he couldn't die. He thought they wanted to defeat him with the Death King and the Demon King, but they miscalculated and have not yet succeeded in defeating Asher. But none of the 3 summoned entities intended to destroy him. The task was to catch him and bring him to his owner. The order was not to kill, but to bring his body to his master. Huck decided to put an end to this Asher with a single blow. Asher thought he was being attacked by a divine or demonic force, but it was neither. The blow was so strong that half the city instantly evaporated, and the enemy did not have the slightest chance of survival. In the center of the funnel lay Asher's body. Everything seemed to be over, if not for the light. Hyuk, Balkan, and Toon were wondering what to do with the body of this upstart. Toon was grateful to everyone who helped him achieve his first victory together. Hendrik called out to him from below, and everything was fine with them too. Apparently, the attack on the company was stopped. Previously, everyone believed that the first Ghost Mask attacked, but today's event now spoke of something else. Not everything could go according to the scenario of the 9. Even the heavens could be turned upside down, and naturally, Lich had to do this. Then there was no point in delaying, and the Lich and the puppeteer went off to do their business. They disappeared, and the company was left alone at the site of the battle. Everything would be fine, but the Lord of Evil sensed something and warned that it was not all over yet. The earth shook, and it became clear that something was approaching them. A strange light appeared in the sky, and it was only getting closer to the company. A strange stream of light struck the ground where Asher's body lay. It was not light, but someone from the higher floors penetrated to them. Hendrik decided to take off to be ready for the attack. Toon pointed to the place where Asher died. The body of Asher Hum rose upward in this light, and apparently this light appeared behind him. His body began to recover, but something strange was still happening to him. Now it was clear to Hyuk that Carmen was behind this. Asher Hum was reborn, and now had a different power to attack the ghost mask. On the upper floors of the Fallon family's castle hall, Carmen and Kane were drinking tea and discussing the news of the past few days. A strange object that Carmen always kept with her broke in her hands. Apparently, this object was associated with Asher Kum and was broken because he was defeated. Kane was indignant at the mere mention of the ghostly mask. There was no reason to worry, because Carmen had created not just a toy, but a kind of puppet of her own in the person of Asher. Now, after death, Asher has been reborn as a representative of Carmen herself, and in order to defeat the ghostly mask, he will have to fight her personally. Hyuk was angry that this Carmen was stopping him from moving forward again. Hyuk immediately recognized this divine power, and now all he had to do was fight this Asher again. And now she had to fight not only with him, but also with Carmen herself. Asher could not understand how this newcomer knew his mistress Carmen. He wanted to find out who this ghostly man was, but he was attacked by Balkan and Toon. Hyuk was also preparing to attack this strange man. Before Balkan and Toon could attack Asher, he grabbed them and held them in front of him. They couldn't die, which means they will suffer until they themselves want to die. The dragon pressed Asher's body into the ground, thus freeing his allies. But he couldn't do anything to Asher either, because he now had the power of 9. He lifted the dragon and threw it at the ghost mask's comrades standing nearby. The dragon's power was no longer scary to him and could not harm him, but his movements were constrained by steel and he could not move. It was all about Miho, and she enchanted his body with her power. Asher therefore decided to deal with her first, and then finish off the rest. Behind Asher, Hyuk's sword was visible with the intention of splitting the body into 2 parts. With this blow, he intended to get rid of the puppet Carmen. Against this attack, Asher had the ability to immediately recover, and the attack was useless. Now the attack was from Asher, and he was hostile towards all members of the company. Hyuk ordered everyone to run as the attack was stronger than before. In place of Cha Jin, a crater from Asher's strike now shone. Hyuk's body did not obey, and Asher had already approached Miho and was about to strangle her. Hendrik and Haryu were also wounded, and could not help Miho. And now nothing was stopping Asura from finishing off Miho and the rest of the team. And he decided to start with little Miho, holding her in front of him and squeezing her neck. Miho was gasping for breath and was about to suffocate, but at that moment, Miho changed, and now the 9-tailed fox Gumiho appeared in front of Asher. Miho shouldn't have been touched by such a worthless person as Asher. Now he held the Gumiho in his hand and he could no longer handle it. At that moment he let go of the fox and could not understand why this happened. Gumiho used force, and in place of the company only a bright spot of light appeared. Gumiho was only able to use teleportation, and the entire team was saved. The movement had taken them 10 floors up, and they were now in a dark forest on the 70th floor. In the middle of the forest, all members of the Confrontation Guild appeared. Gumiho saved them from death by moving. The 9-tailed fox was the first time everyone saw Gumiho. Hyuk didn't understand where they were, and asked her where they were and how they ended up there. You can move between floors without passing, but points are not awarded for levels. Hendrik asked if this was a dark forest, then someone lived here. But since the place was undiscovered and unexplored, there was no one to be afraid of. This meant that it was safe, and it was possible to get some treatment here. Unfortunately, Gumiho couldn't do anything else, and her strength was only enough to move, and the movement only gave them a respite. Soon the others would be here too. With their current strength, they couldn't cope with their enemies and needed to become stronger. If it was necessary to become stronger, then it means that Gumiho knew how. She no longer had the time or energy, so she advised him to ask everything. Gumiho said goodbye to Hyuk and promised to see him again. Gumiho disappeared, and in her place appeared Miho in the form of a fox. There was no trace of the 9-tailed fox. The little fox caught Haryu so that she wouldn't hit the ground. No one could understand who Gumiho was talking about. As soon as the fox disappeared, arrows started flying at the company from all sides. They were surrounded by dark elves, and were not happy with strangers in their dark forest. They did not like those who dared to invade their sacred place. But the elf decided to stop Hyuk with the help of Balkan and Toon. The fears were in vain for both sides, because Elioni was among the elves. They greeted each other, and Hyuk asked if she had managed to gather an army. It was difficult to call several dozen dark elves an army, but for now they could only guard the forest. But they too had hope for the revival of their race. Their hope lay in the divine tree, the dark Yggdrasil. Since the elves were of dark origin, their world tree was different from the elven Yggdrasil. All of the Ghost Mask's comrades were surprised by such a tree. And although this tree is still small and has a long way to go to become a real Yggdrasil, it already has power. And now the conversation touched on the ghostly mask itself, in terms of why he is here and why he reached such a state. It was all about the intervention of the Star Nine and the puppet Carmen. And with the help of the Gumiho, they moved here, and here they could find the answer to their question. Apparently the answer was hidden in the very power that the tree gave to the elves. Haryu asked Eliona for help in gaining this power. She also asked to join them and enter into confrontation. Meanwhile, outside, Hyuk stood on the balcony, struggling with the thoughts that were tangling in his head, hinting that his plan was doomed. But his thoughts were cut short when he felt a huge and stronger force than his own nearby. Hyuk was a little angry at how familiarly the tree greeted him for the first time. Or not the first. It was the dark Yggdrasil that was the answer to the question. He will give Hyuk his power, but there was a certain condition. Meanwhile, Elione gave an affirmative answer and consent to enter into confrontation with her elves in the guild. She was asked if it would be dangerous for them, to which she replied that she was indebted to Hyuk, and that she was only able to gather the dark elves thanks to him. Moreover, the object of their revenge was the same, and there was no point for her to stay on the sidelines. She was grateful to the ghostly mask for her release, and was ready to go with him to the end. But the whole question now concerned one thing. Where was Hyuk himself, and where had he gone? Hyuk came to the tree and couldn't afford to keep it waiting. It felt a little weird talking to a tree, but there was no choice. The tree had some interest in Chajin's essence, and decided to find out something. The evil pinnacle reassured Hyuk by telling him that the tree was on their side and wanted to help them. A tree branch appeared before him, and on it hung the fruit of the sacred tree of Yggdrasil. The fruit possessed colossal energy, and it was many times greater than the energy of even the entire Star 9. The fruit was intended for the elves, but Yggdrasil decided to give it to the ghost mask. The fruit of the world tree could only be obtained by an elf of the royal family or a high class, but not by him. The fruit was something like a demonic crystal and could generate demonic energy. And if Hyuk manages to absorb this fruit, he will be able to deal with Asher and the entire Star 9 once and for all. But why did the god of the elves give the fruit to a stranger instead of giving it to Elion? And the tree told him the story before the tower appeared. Yggdrasil was created by the god of the elves long before the tower appeared. The god of the elves and father of the world was created by an elven deity. The deity loved and cared for the elves, and they worshipped and loved him. The elves were beautiful and loved nature, and also had a long life. But they had a weak spot, and that was pride. They were beautiful and loved their beauty, which is why they lived away from everyone. And they didn't climb the tower like the others. And that is why for several millennia there was not a single elf who would conquer the tower. The gods needed creations that would climb the towers and become representatives of the gods. But what would be done with those who did not live up to expectations? That's right, I would have fired him and hired those who could cope. Yes, the creator of the Dark Yggdrasil had great hopes for the tree and Elion. But the elves are no longer a separate race, and now they interfere with the balance of the tower, which interferes with the deities. And in the center of this chaos stand Carmen and Cain Fallon, who are seeking revenge on Hyuk. But Elion was unable to become a strong elf and gain the power of the tree. The World Tree offered to make a deal. The fruit in exchange for the unification of the Dark Elves. Hyuk immediately agreed without hesitation. But there was a problem. The energy inside the fruit could destroy Hyuk himself. But there was no need to worry, since Yggdrasil would help him absorb this fruit. The power of the tree will help protect him from the energy of the fruit for some time when absorbed. Balkan and Toon were called to guard him until the absorption was complete. Or until he died. Nobody objected. Hyuk began to absorb the fruit, and a clot of energy formed around it. Meanwhile, Hyuk's friends were already looking for him, and they couldn't figure out where their leader had disappeared to. But Hendrik pointed to a strange glow between the trees. This energy was connected to Hyuk, and apparently he was trying to absorb it. The silence was broken by an explosion in the forest, and it was clear that their safe place had been found. Asher Hum advanced on the ghostly mask, destroying everything in his path. Elion was shocked at how quickly this upstart got here. The eyes of this 9 were everywhere, and it was decided to check those places where there were the fewest of them. Asher grabbed the elf and demanded that she call the ghost mask for help. Hendrik came to her aid and freed her from the hands of this impudent man. Asher did not understand at first what had happened, but then he saw that the dragon had interfered with him. He hoped for the appearance of a ghostly mask, or at least that divine being. Miho never came to her senses again and apparently won't recover anytime soon. Apparently, these were the consequences of the Gumiho's power. Hendrik was troubled by the demonic energy above, but he realized that it was the work of Chajin himself. And since Hyuk was busy, the dragon needed to stall for time until Hyuk returned. Haryu was ordered to take the elf and leave until he figured things out. After all, Haryu's forces will not be enough to attack. Since there was no ghost mask yet, Asher decided to deal with the rest for now. Hendrik repelled the attack and ordered Haryu to get away from here immediately. While Asher was distracted by Hendrik, Haryu took the wounded elf and ran away from the battle. He wanted to stop her, but the elves with their arrows of demonic power prevented him. Apparently, with his actions, he declared war on them, and now they have become his enemies. Asher could not recover quickly from such attacks, because he was endowed with divine power, and demonic power was the opposite of it. This meant that the elves had to be dealt with first, but Hendrik appeared in front of him and used dragon breath. He burned this Asher Cum to the ground, but the impudent fellow quickly recovered, and no one could stop him from dealing with the elves. He grabbed Elione and slammed her into the ground. Asher warned that he would destroy everyone in his path, and she is no exception. He was recovering, and decided to finish the attack as soon as his body was whole. From above, he noticed demonic energy and began to understand what kind of power it was. There was a ghost mask there, and now Asher Hum switched to it. Hendrik decided to prevent Huck from being attacked at all costs. No one dared to interfere with the head of the guild, and Asura was worth killing for this. But Asher didn't care. He only wanted one thing: to kill the ghost mask. Blow after blow was dealt to Asher, but they did not harm him. Asher underestimated the dragon, but it did not yet have enough strength to fight him. Hendrik had a huge hole in his chest from Asher's attack, but he was still able to attack further. It was funny to see Asher grin at the sight of the wounded Hendrik. The dragon's strength was wasted, and Asher prepared to defeat him. While Asher was chatting, Har-Yu appeared behind him and tried to destroy him with a blow from her demonic sword. The attack speed was higher than the recovery speed, and Asher could have problems. Apparently the goblin heritage gave this girl such strength, but it won't save her. She won't be able to defeat him, but she will be able to buy a little time. She can briefly surpass Asher in strength, but only for a short time. It was necessary to destroy not Asher's body, but the one who gave him this power. Then either run or attack while you still have the opportunity. She had been saved by her brother and his friends so many times that it was time for her to help them stall for a little time. She trusted her brother and tried to stall for a little time. Yes, Har-Yu attacked strongly and powerfully, but from the blood from her eyes it was clear that her strength was at its limit. Asher was able to reduce the speed of his attacks and caught the girl's next attack. In response, he struck her, and she flew far away from him and fell to the ground. Kane and Carmen were right, and that the ghost mask, as it gained strength, could hinder the Star Nine. He decided to finish off the ghost mask's comrades and himself. Neither Har-Yu nor Hendrik had the strength to escape the attack, and that was the end. But suddenly it became dark around and the divine light disappeared. Asher was perplexed by what had happened and where the light had gone. In an instant, a fist flew into his face and threw him far from the place of impact. Hyuk returned in time and repelled the attack on Har-Yu. When asked what happened, Hyuk replied that he had extinguished his light with his darkness. What happened is that now Asher has come to an end. Hyuk thanked Har-Yu and Hendrik for stalling for time and staying alive, but now he would finish the battle himself. Asher did not die from the attack, but that no longer mattered. After ordering everyone to get to a safe place, Hyuk decided to attack and finish off this insolent man. The monster greed appeared before Asher and was now ready to devour Asher forever. Now this greed will consume him until Carmen comes down to Hyuk personally. The monster was fast and attacked that Carmen puppet instantly. Time after time, biting off a piece of Asher, the monster inflicted irreparable wounds on him. Carmen felt her energy dwindling in Asura, and Hyuk's energy grew more and more with each absorption of Asura. And even if you tear it into small pieces, Carmen will still restore it. Carmen will supply him with divine power, and he will in turn supply this power to Chajin. Tom was a monster made of the soul and magic of the ghost mask, and had a brutal appetite, and he could absorb Asura forever, despite his divine power. Until then, he will continue to absorb until Carmen comes here and fights him personally. Hyuk wanted to personally destroy Carmen once and for all. Asher asked Carmen not to send him power, but it was too late. Tom completely absorbed Asher's body. Carmen felt that she could no longer send power to Asura, and apparently he was finished. The heavens burst open and divine light poured onto the dark forest land. Carmen arrived through 100 floors to the ghostly mask. But the problem was that she also received punishment for breaking the rules of the tower. Carmen stood in front of Hyuk and didn't understand how he knew her personally. It's time to get what Carmen deserves for what she did 10 years ago. 10 years ago, he fought the Star Nine. He had no intention of giving up when his strength was running out. He summoned a bone golem to protect himself, but it was too late. He was betrayed, and Carmen was at the head of the traitors. It was the end, and Chajin's strength was leaving him. She was the one who put an end to Hyuk's journey. Farewell and more Chajin. Hyuk couldn't stop the Star Nine who betrayed him. Carmen only now realized that she was in a dark forest on the 70th floor, and that she would be punished for breaking the rules of the tower. When he was absorbing the fruit, he couldn't even think of how to destroy this Carmen. But then he realized that she had to be brought here to the lower floors. And then there was an idea and a way to lure this higher being to them. Among the friends of the Ghost Mask, there were also such creatures, and with the help of Gumiho, they were able to move between floors. Hyuk used the coming and through Huma summoned Carmen here, and since she was a being inside the tower, her appearance here personally imposed punishments on her. The trick on Carmen's greed will now lead to her death. Carmen just laughed at what Hyuk just told her, and she decided to show him what the creature of the upper floors was like. Carmen wanted to attack the Ghost Mask, but she couldn't. Apparently, she completely stopped realizing that her arrival on this floor would entail the most severe punishment, and her punishment took away most of her strength. And trying to use his power here on the 70th floor would not have led to success. But Chajin's gaze seemed somehow familiar to Carmen, even though she was seeing the newcomer for the first time. She attacked him and wanted to destroy him like she once did the Death Star. But Hyuk had the monster Tom on his side, and the advantage in power was now on Chajin's side. Her attack was completely absorbed by the monster and did not cause any harm to the master. The attack continued and the forces were unequal. Calling for the right to destroy Cha-Jin decided not to stand on ceremony with Carmen. The destruction inside Carmen was caused by Hyuk, but she couldn't understand how it could happen. Demonic and divine power intersected in one person, and it was strange for her. More and more attacks crippled Carmen and disfigured her body. Her anger was beyond measure, and despite the punishment, she used her power contrary to the rules of the tower. Carmen's power was now in Hyuk's hands, and he was returning it back attack after attack. An attack of heavenly punishment flew towards Carmen. From the blow, she flew back many meters and was unable to reflect her own weapon. For 10 years, he waited for this moment to take revenge on his offenders. While Hyuk managed to finish off the enemy and distract the others, it was time for Hendrik and Haryu to take care of the rest of the wounded. With Carmen's strength weakening, there was now every chance of defeating her. Even despite the punishment, the power of the conqueror of the 600th floor was not so easy to cope with, and there was no way to damage her in order to destroy her. It would be a shame to just let her go. She didn't like the way Hyuk was looking down on her now. She was the strongest Star 9 and no one dared to contradict her. She decided to use her full power. In this way, she could destroy everything around her, and it was worth stopping her from doing so. The wave of fire reached the place where the elves and Hendrik with Haryu were. Everyone was ordered to climb the branches of the dark Yggdrasil. This attack did not last long as punishments rained down on Carmen constantly. She deliberately used force in defiance of punishment and will soon pay for it. Hyuk also did not give in to attacks, and time after time he repelled and attacked again. Demonic and divine power fought against each other. A cloud of energy appeared in the sky above the forest that could destroy everything. If he had only added strength, Hyuk would have been finished. Camille was called in to repel the strong attacks. Camille instantly pinned Carmen to the ground. After all, Hyuk also only needed to add strength and Carmen would be finished. And all because she no longer conquered floors and crawled at the feet of great beings. Carmen became even angrier, and the punishment became stronger and stronger for the use of force. Her power sent Hyuk flying backwards. Even with its power of restoration, no one can ignore the tower's punishment. The more force she uses, the more severe the punishment for it becomes. She wanted to destroy the ghost mask and then recover. She admitted that she acted against the rules, and they found a way to quickly become stronger. It was funny to reason like that if Hyuk had a power stronger than her. She threw Hyuk away with a blow, but did not inflict any wounds on him. Hyuk also took over the power of restoration. There was no point in rushing, and Carmen only made things worse for herself. It's strange, but Carmen waited for something and didn't attack. I wonder what she's planning to do this time. Her attack was unexpected and caught the ghost mask off guard. She decided to rip off the mask and see who was hiding behind it. She couldn't believe that the person standing in front of her was Cha-Jin Hyuk. In front of her stood the same Cha-Jin as 10 years ago. How could she recognize him if his appearance and voice were different? She simply recognized an old friend she once knew. Carmen's demand was to find out from the stranger who he was. Hyuk introduced himself and gave his name as Cha-Jin Hyuk, Death Star Cha-Jin Hyuk. He was reborn to take revenge on all members of the Star 9. Hyuk thought that Carmen would ask for forgiveness, but she thought differently, and the battle continued even more rapidly. This newcomer couldn't be the one Carmen killed 10 years ago. The battle had lasted for quite a long time, and it was time to end this fight. The monster of greed had appeared behind Carmen, and now it was her end. Tom bit off her hand along with her mask, and it made her even angrier. And again she tried to restore her hand, but the demonic force prevented everything. The mask in Cha-Jin's hand was in her hand a moment ago, and how did it end up in his hand so quickly? Thanks to this mask, he foresaw all of Carmen's attacks, and attacked her before she could react in time. Hyuk wanted to cut off her head and finish her off quickly. But surprisingly, the head was in place, and the sword was bitten through by the teeth of the maddened Carmen. But that didn't save her from the shockwave from Hyuk's sword. No one was going to give up their positions with powerful attacks. But only Hyuk understood that Carmen's strength was waning with each attack. He just wanted to deal with her, and everyone who stood behind her. Carmen had used up all her strength, and was making only one last attempt to attack. All she had to do was get into Hyuk and finish him off. Gathering all her strength, she prepared for her final attack. All she had to do was hit the ghostly mask, and all he had to do was beat it off, and victory would be his. But such divine power could destroy everything around, and not only the forest. Hyuk was still fighting with this. Carmen and Haryu believed in his victory. Hyuk also thought about it. He couldn't stop such a force, but there was a different way. This meant it was worth reflecting it with a more powerful weapon. And Hyuk had one in stock. Naive Carmen thought that Cha-Jin was finished by her attack, but Cha-Jin became stronger and his power grew. He ordered everyone to turn into demons, and his power was now stronger than Carmen's. The power of the One Principle was many times more powerful than the divine power, but the system issued a warning that excessive use would destroy the body. Now he had to turn the heavens upside down and show that not everyone in the tower could behave like Carmen. It was no longer Hyuk who stood before her, but a demon. He now swore to finish her off, and no one would stop him from doing so. Carmen's attack did nothing and didn't even cause damage to Cha-Jin. She couldn't cope with such energy and was doomed. She miscalculated and underestimated her strength. And now Chajin's attack had crippled her, and she couldn't restore her body. With particular anger, he inflicted wounds on her and took revenge on her with all his might. No one could handle such power. The attack came in waves, and Carmen saw her end very close. Hayuk attacked her harder and harder, giving her no chance to recover. Horror befell Carmen, and she could do nothing about it. The newbie made her feel fear and horror at her fate. Everything she said about Hyuk was no longer interesting to him. There was a demon in front of her, and no one and nothing could stop him. It was obvious that she was terrified, although she didn't pretend to be. In response to the ghostly mask's question, she only laughed. She tried to resist with all her might, but the punishments kept coming. Even if she dies, she will be reborn and kill him again with her own hands. It was foolish to resist Hayuk. Her fate was sealed. Since she decided to resist, there was no need for him to restrain his strength. Having attacked the ghostly mask with her divine power, she did not even think about what would happen. Her attack could do nothing to the demon. But the power of the ghostly mask could destroy everything around and turn the entire tower upside down. The single beginning did not mean anything good for Carmen. Everyone started shouting that this force would destroy them all, and its use would not bring anything good. Also, everyone began to worry about him. His body began to deteriorate due to the use of demonic power. The system issued a warning and recommended stopping demonization. But Hayuk had not yet taken revenge on Carmen, and it was too early to cancel the demonization. This was only the beginning of revenge, and it had to be completed. Carmen's end had come, and she had no more strength. Now the time has come to put an end to Carmen and the entire Star 9. She began to beg him to forgive her. She was wrong. She was ready to give everything, the kingdom and money, just so that he would pardon her. She begged Carmen to forgive her as a sign of long-standing memory of their friendship. She asked and begged everyone to forgive her and have mercy. A swing of the sword, and the answer was the chopping off of Carmen's hand. There was no talk of any mercy for her. For her misdeeds, she only needed to be destroyed and no mercy. The man who would have forgiven her died 10 years ago by her own hand. She tried to crawl away, but it was no use. Her minutes of life were over. Now, in addition to her arm, her legs were also cut off. Her leg and arm were severed from her, and now all that was left for her was death. Her glorious face was smashed into the ground with a kick. How long had Hayuk himself been waiting for this moment, and enjoying it as much as he could? She asked to leave her at least as a ghost, but it was in vain. Her body and spirit would be destroyed. When Hayuk was killed and he woke up in the hospital, he promised himself one thing. He promised himself that he would even crush the souls of his enemies into powder, and they would not be able to be reborn. And the same fate awaited Carmen's soul. She begged him not to kill her. She didn't want to die. She called for Cain, but it was too late. She had turned into a spirit. Carmen's spirit tried to fly away from Hook, but in vain. Her spirit had no chance to escape the ghostly mask. But absorbing it was not so easy, and Tom was the one to do it. Tom's summoning solved the problem with the spirit, and the monster began to overtake this evil spirit. Tom quickly regained his spirit and began to devour her. The soul was pulled into the monster's mouth, and the spirit was also practically finished. It seemed like it was over with Carmen, but there was no feeling of satisfaction. Tom absorbed Carmen's spirit, and now nothing remained to remind of her except the crater at the site of the battle. Tom returned to Chajin's body, and everything around became silent. Now it was possible to cancel the demonization and restore strength. The mask was removed, and the body gradually began to recover. He finally got his revenge on that impudent Carmen, and is now a little closer to his goal. But the consequences of demonization did not pass without a trace, and now he could not walk. He was picked up by Hendrik and Haryu to leave this place together. Balkan thought he couldn't handle Carmen, but he was wrong. Hendrik and Haryu only encouraged Hayuk that he still had a path of revenge ahead of him, but they would be with him until the end. He was grateful to them for their support. The victory was of course a good thing, but the entire forest is now destroyed. But there was nothing to worry about. Hyuk promised to restore everything because he had a deal with the World Tree, and no one had to worry about money either. After all, they had a reliable sponsor for such matters. The tree warned everyone that it was time to leave here. Cain would be arriving here soon, and they couldn't stay like this. It was decided to hide and gather strength. But before leaving, it was necessary to leave a message for this Cain. Cain soon arrived on the 70th floor and did not find Carmen there. She got here and disappeared, but there was a battle site and something else left. Cain came closer and froze in surprise. In front of him lay a message from the Death Star in the form of a star with a skull. This was Chajin Hyuk's message to Cain. Since Carmen sent Asura to the Ghost Mask, and this sign appeared after Carmen disappeared, then the Ghost Mask knew something. It was strange not to find Carmen here, and the symbol began to speak to him. The message was addressed to him from the ghostly mask. Carmen Fallon is no more, and it was the owner of the Ghost Mask who killed her. Cain couldn't believe that some newbie could kill his sister, and the scene of his sister's murder quickly flashed through his mind. So Chajin Hyuk was the Ghost Mask, and Cain swore revenge on him. It was strange to hear this from someone who had betrayed his comrades and was now screaming because of his sister. Next after his sister would be Cain, and the message was addressed to him. They will kill him slowly and piece by piece, starting with his legs. Out of anger, Cain smashed the symbol of the ghostly mask to pieces, but the symbol finally said that he should wait for him. News of Carmen's defeat and loss to the ghostly mask spread like wildfire within the tower. Everyone was talking about nothing else, and now the Star Nine didn't seem so strong. And now the sacred state is tottering between floors. No one listened to him anymore, and attacks on the kingdom's guards became frequent. The mention of the sacred kingdom no longer frightened anyone. Neither the guards nor the attackers were going to give up their positions, and the clashes only worsened the state's situation. None of the gangs listened to the royal guards anymore. Now there was a redistribution of power in the tower. No one wanted to give up the tasty morsels of the sacred kingdom, and everyone wanted to grab more. The arguments and battles continued every day, and the guards grew weaker with each attack. Now without a leader, the Nine began to lose their positions, and other guilds began to put pressure on them. The ghost mask also disappeared and no one knew where it was. Several months later, bounties were placed on the heads of the opposing guild. Everyone was wondering who would catch the ghost mask and his comrades. It was clear to everyone how to catch them, but no one could understand how to catch the ghost of Balkana. None of the tower's inhabitants knew where the ghostly mask and his comrades were now. But everyone was also afraid of the power of this mask, and therefore no one has yet been able to catch him. Meanwhile, rumors reached Cain. Rumors were that Chajin Hyuk, the Death Star, was now a ghost mask. Cain now had none of the elements of power. There was no one behind him, and all of those who remained only wanted the death of Cain himself. After his sister's death, he could no longer compare anything to them, and was below them in power. And since no one came here except Cain and the second member of the Nine, the words were only confirmed by the fact that there was no one behind Cain. And even a healer like Cain could no longer cope with each of the Nine. They were all much stronger than him, and trying to fight them would be the last thing Cain would do in his life. So Cain no longer had a place among the guild leaders, and his end would soon come. No one will cover for him or support him anymore. And everyone thought the same as one of the representatives of the Star Nine. Cain will soon be shown his place, and his song will be sung. His days of rule were drawing to an end, and there was no one to help him. The Nine will distribute his power and the power of his late Carmen among themselves. He promised to deal with the ghostly mask and prove his power to everyone. The letter from the Lich arrived on time and meant that Cain was beginning to stir. It was time for the confrontation to move to preemptive action. Unlike Carmen, Cain had a different character and prepared more thoroughly for battles. But in his position, it will not be so easy to move on to action now. Now no one will help him, and everyone will only yearn for his death. He will have to spend a lot of money to gather forces for an attack on the lower floors. And only then will the Lich strike back, and Cain's greed for money will only hinder him. And this was only the beginning of revenge. Soon the puppeteer will have a lot of work, as well as the elves for help from the Lich. Elian never thought she would owe Lich. Everything was ready for the plan. But was Hyuk ready? All that was left was to hope that he had become stronger and could now fight Cain. Miho was being followed and hunters followed to kill her. They decided to kill her and get the reward. The hunters reached the 500th floor, and this fox was an easy target for them. Naive fools thought they could take possession of her so easily, but they miscalculated. The shot did no harm to Miho, and the bullet was stopped by a stranger who arrived. The hunters could not understand how this was possible. A blow and one of the hunters no longer moved, but the hunter began to recognize the one who stood in front of him. The black kimono and jacket meant only one thing. It was Hyuk's old friend Choi Kyung-hoon. He quickly dealt with the hunters and thus saved Miho from death. There was only a crater left where the hunters had been, and they were dead. Miho was grateful to Choi and allowed her to pick her up. Meanwhile, Hyuk and Haryu were already on the 100th floor. Hiding their identity, it was not easy to climb the floors, but they still managed to do it. But for now, there was no one except them, and Hyuk, having read Haryu's thoughts, suggested that she go for a walk. She apologized for having such thoughts in her head. There was nothing terrible about this, and Hyuk sent Balkan and Toon to help her. All the while, the Ghost Mask managed to grow its powers with the team. But he couldn't defeat Cain with the summoning skill either, and something else had to be done. Carmen was only able to be destroyed because, despite the punishments, she attacked and lost her strength. This won't work with Cain. That's why he called Choi Kyung-hoon to take him to his mentor Tess. Tess's combat technique and necromancer skills will help defeat Cain, but his reasoning was interrupted by a sound from the direction where Haryu had gone. It was necessary to find out what was going on there. Haryu was attacked by the white elf Hamiel. After all, she promised to meet the girl on the 100th floor. How disgusting and annoying she was, Haryu. Hyuk wanted to come to help Haryu, but he couldn't. A stranger with a sword appeared behind him and attacked Cha-jin. It was one of the members of the Star Nine, swordsman Donis Taylor. But his attack was repelled, and he became convinced that it was indeed the Death Star in front of him. The blow was repelled, and the battle continued. Hyuk stood and simply parried the swordsman's blows without straining himself too much. Donis also decided to finish off Hyuk, and so came to him himself. Despite the punishment, he was determined to put an end to the ghostly mask. But the swordsman's attacks had no effect, because they did not contain magic like Carmen's. The attack shook the city and its inhabitants. Everyone was surprised at who dared to attack a large city on the 100th floor. 10 years ago, Hyuk laughed at the swordsman and his ways to kill Hyuk. And then the shameful Donis was unable to defeat Hyuk. But now that he is alive, he has the opportunity to take revenge. But this impudent fellow also began to receive punishment for violating the rules of the tower. He didn't care about the punishment as long as he got even with Chajin as soon as possible. En destroyed the city in his path and sought to attack the ghostly mask. He was ready to bear all the punishments just to destroy the mask. He couldn't win then and decided that he could now. What a naive, impudent fellow he was. The swordsman had no chance of winning here. Blow after blow was dealt to the swordsman and Hyuk immediately used demonization. He didn't drag it out like he did with Carmen, and decided to finish off the upstart as quickly as possible. The horror in Donis's eyes was brought about by the demon inside Hyuk. Donis received blows and could not block them. One of the attacks broke off part of the mask, behind which the swordsman's true face was hidden. The city was turned into ruins and the battle continued. The forces were unequal, and the swordsman began to realize this. With each meeting with Hyuk, he became stronger. Hyuk did not stand still and was preparing for his revenge, which meant that his strength was growing. Behind the swordsman's mask lurked the same terrible man as 10 years ago, and even plastic surgery won't help him hide his true face. Hyuk's face used to be beautiful too, but the swordsman's wasn't. That's why this loser adopted the appearance of the Death Star. And with each new operation, he only worsened his appearance. Because of his rotten nature, the swordsman could never become Chajin. The swordsman was angry, but he couldn't do anything about Hyoku, and his attacks were laughable compared to the master's attacks. Donis fought off the greedy monster's attack and thought he had cut off Chajin's arm. But it was his mistake, and his hand quickly recovered. He thought he could defeat the demon this way, but it was a deception. The swordsman had zero chance of defeating Hyuk, and Donis's next attempts to harm Chajin were unsuccessful.